hero, Sa Begang, stood atop a world he hated. Only mountains of corpses. All he had left behind for the last 120 years. But even beneath the skin of a merciless bastard, the heart of a man beat. The same one who remembered himself as worthless trash, devoid of inner energy. It all began 249 years ago, when the sky split and an interdimensional gate opened over the central plain. Monsters came to take everything, and the first wave of creatures rushed to slaughter people. The Orthodox Alliance challenged and was wiped out in 3 days. Then the two clans united. They slaughtered for half a month in the final battle, and the central plain fell, drenched in the blood of its defenders. The survivors were driven into the demon realm. Among them was our hero, useless even for slavery. But this empty vessel, this worthless piece of trash, turned out to be a rare breed. Years of brainwashing and experimentation, breaking him, turning him into a weapon for demons. That's when he broke. He simply switched to a cruel bastard mode. For 120 years, he lived among these creatures, but one day he remembered who he was and where he came from. That's when he decided to stage a rebellion. However, the hero failed, his army perished, and he himself was on his knees before the king, and the creature that had ruined his life looked down on him. He smiled, vowing to finish off this scum, then ripped out the heart with his bare hands, and at that very moment, the purple flame of the ancient god Nuzern exploded around him, tearing apart reality, and hurling him 259 years into the past. Purple lightning tore through the sky above the central plain and struck the roof of the building. When the smoke cleared, a gaping hole in the roof opened into darkness. Inside, a young man lies unconscious on the floor amid debris and purple smoke. A caption states that there are 10 years remaining until the demon invasion. The young man, Sa Begang now in his younger body, lies there with a faint smile. His eye opens glowing red, signaling that his future memories have returned. The narration clarifies that he has been sent back 10 years before the invasion. 10 years later, the Dragon Spring Academy of the Orthodox Alliance Martial Arts Academy is introduced. Workers hammer at roof repairs in the academy compound. They complain about the sudden lightning strike that damaged the training hall. One remarks that it is fortunate only a certain loser was injured. They gossip that the person struck was an orphan vice instructor who cannot use inner energy. Another worker says he heard the man was not badly hurt, and jokes it would be better if he had been. Meanwhile, crowds gather in the courtyard for what is described as the man's public execution. The elders announce the start of a duel for the spear assistant instructor position. The crowd cheers as the duel is declared officially begun. On one side stands the current assistant instructor, spear-wielding Sa Begang. His challenger is the brash invincible divine spear, Meng Sandiak. The referee explains that this match will verify Sa Begang's ability and decide who deserves the post. Both fighters are ordered to battle with their honor as martial artists on the line. Facing his opponent, Sa Begang calmly notes that Meng seems stronger than he expected. Meng laughs about Sa Begang being struck by lightning and having no excuse to avoid him. Introducing himself boastfully, Meng claims Sa Begang was just trying to dodge fighting him. He readies his spear and promises to end the fight quickly as a favor to Sa Begang's courage. He taunts that Sa Begang can still surrender before things start. Sa Begang stretches and begins telling a story about a martial instructor who could not use inner energy. The narration shows that this instructor, mocked as the academy's shame, was defeated by Meng in a duel. After that humiliation, the instructor lost his position and was reduced to menial chores. Those days were miserable and degrading for him. Meng, confused, demands to know what nonsense Sa Begang is talking about. Sa Begang says he is merely summarizing the situation. Grinning, he reveals he has waited a long time for this moment to take revenge on Meng. Enraged, Meng shouts at Sa Begang for acting so arrogantly. He stamps the ground, declaring he had intended to spare Sa Begang some pride. Meng unleashes his bull demon spear art, determined to punish Sa Begang's insolence. His eyes glow red as he powers up the technique. He charges with the art's first form, ferocious bull charge. Mid-attack, he suddenly senses that his spear has not hit anything. He realizes in shock that he cannot feel any impact at all. Sa Begang, now behind him, remarks that the move looked decent but missed. Meng furiously swings again, cursing Sa Begang. Sa Begang easily steps aside, leaving Meng bewildered. Meng internally panics, unable to grasp how Sa Begang dodged a technique he trained for decades. Observers think Sa Begang was supposed to be weak, yet his skill now contradicts all rumors. Meng convinces himself Sa Begang just got lucky and charges once more. He stamps harder, preparing for another powerful leap. He launches high into the air to strike down at Sa Begang. Screaming for Sa Begang's death, Meng uses the bull demon spear art's fourth form. He dives with the falling bull strike, a finishing aerial attack. Sa Begang narrows his eyes, readying his counter. He grips his spear and gathers energy. He spins the spear in a complex motion, displaying refined control. Then he shifts stance and calmly prepares a new technique. Meng laughs, convinced no inferior spear art can block his ultimate move. Sa Begang instead forms a blazing orb of energy in his hand and casts a fireball. Meng, midair, stares in confusion as he sees the unfamiliar flaming projectile. The fireball explodes, engulfing Meng in a massive blast and hurling him away. The academy elders are left stunned and sweating at this overwhelming display. The watching students gape in shock and disbelief at what they have just witnessed. Mang writhes on the ground, screaming as he burns and calls for help. The presiding elder hastily declares the duel finished. He announces Sa Begang as the victor while others rush to extinguish Meng's flames. Sa Begang's narration clarifies that he had once been captured alive by demons. A flashback shows his earlier self in chains and covered in wounds. He explains that he was dragged to the demon realm and survived there for centuries. Scenes of him fighting demons in that realm illustrate the brutal life he endured. Through that long struggle, he says he came to an important realization. Back in the arena, Sa Begang casually asks the charred Meng what he thinks of his Heat Yang arts. He internally identifies his technique as equivalent to high-level magic. Smiling, he introduces this supposed martial art to the crowd under the name Fireball. Meng lies scorched and defeated on the ground, smoke still rising from him. As Meng is carried away on a stretcher, Sa Begang cheerfully calls it a good fight. Spectators excitedly discuss what they saw, wondering if that incredible Heat Yang finger art was truly martial arts. The elders stare in shock, angrily demanding an explanation for what just happened. The young fighter is congratulated as Instructor Sa Begang after his victory. An elder acknowledges Sa Begang's win but questions how he used internal energy despite being thought unable to. Sa Begang smiles and casually claims his ability was just luck. The elder repeats the word luck in disbelief. Sa Begang narrates that a few days earlier he randomly ate an unknown herb while walking. He continues that after eating it he suddenly became able to use internal energy. Sa Begang starts to say he now has plenty of internal energy, prompting an elder to explode, accusing him of joking. An enraged instructor shouts that Sa Begang is disrespecting and insulting his elders with such nonsense. Sa Begang coolly says they may believe or not but asks what difference it makes. He argues that the duel had no rule limiting them to spears, so he did not cheat while competing for the spear instructor post. He thinks it unfair that he is being interrogated despite winning honestly. One elder moves to confront him, but another restrains him and tells him to calm down. The calmer elder admits Sa Begang is right and reiterates that he clearly won. As the elder begins to discuss the consequences of that win, Sa Begang raises his hand to interrupt. Sa Begang explains that since everyone is gathered he wants to make a request. He plants his spear in the ground and formally asks for a test. He specifies that the test should be for promotion to the position of official instructor. Later, Sa Begang walks through the academy grounds, his footsteps drawing attention. Other assistants watch him pass with awe and surprise. They whisper among themselves, recognizing him as the victor from the duel. Sa Begang glances back, fully aware of their murmurs. The narration introduces the Dragon Spring Academy as one of many orthodox martial halls created to protect Jianghu Murim. Its mission is to train future pillars of the Orthodox Alliance by accepting youths from sizable sects and clans. The Academy's instructors are elite martial masters dispatched from the Orthodox Alliance. These instructors are divided into assistant instructors and senior instructors. Narration explains that assistants mostly serve rather than truly teach, and Sa Begang approaches a door asking what has happened. He slides the door open to enter. Inside he faces an older man while another approaches from behind. The elder demands to know how Sa Begang suddenly became able to use internal energy. Identified as Jean Beck, master of the Recovering Body Pavilion, he furiously asks what Sa Begang has done. Narration clarifies that Jean Beck is a physician at the academy, not a combat instructor. Sa Begang repeats that his recovery of internal energy was merely lucky. Jean Beck calls that impossible, insisting he has treated Sa Begang for a long time. He recalls trying every method to cure Sa Begang's inability to use internal energy. Sa Begang thinks to himself there is more to say. Jean Beck despairs that if the condition was so easily fixed, it would mean he is a useless physician. Crying, Jean Beck says he knows how much Sa Begang suffered from others' hatred and feels too ashamed to face him. Sa Begang silently listens as the physician repeatedly apologizes. Sa Begang reflects that Jean Beck has not changed at all. He admits Jean Beck is like a parent to him. A flashback shows 15 years earlier when Jean Beck risked his life in a burning village to carry out a dying child during a bandit raid. Another flashback shows him later dying while trying to rescue others as well. Returning to the present, Sa Begang addresses the distraught pavilion master. He holds Jean Beck's hand and assures him that the person in danger will not die, and that Jean Beck should not blame himself or worry about him. Jean Beck looks up at Sa Begang in stunned silence. Sa Begang tells him to trust him and promises to handle all problems from now on. Night falls over the Dragon Spring Academy. In his room, Sa Begang stands half-dressed at the window, looking out at the moon. He raises a hand that suddenly crackles with blue magical energy. A glowing magic circle materializes above his palm as he examines it. He explains that after regressing he lost over 90% of his mana and now can only wield power around the 4th circle. He thinks that while this is disappointing after reaching the 8th circle over centuries, he should be grateful to still have mana at all. He steels his resolve. Images of his former tortured, chained body accompany his vow that he has returned. Scenes depict the futuristic hellish place where he was once restrained and experimented on. Another image shows him as a terrifying armored figure leading legions in a ruined world. A colossal eye in the sky looms over that devastated landscape. He states that he has come back from that hell. He narrates that history in Jianghu Murim has been rewound. The demonic invasion has not yet begun. However, He emphasizes that yet is the crucial word. He knows that in exactly 10 years the demons will invade again and Jianghu Murim will fall. This time, he plans for a different outcome because he retains 3 centuries of memories. He remembers detailed information about the demon army's magic, artifacts, and invasion weapons. He hints that there is something even more important. A fiery image of the Demon King appears. Sa Begang focuses on figuring out how to defeat that Demon King. The foe is named Demon King Tarant. Back in the quiet night, the lantern in his room flickers. Jean Beck calls through the door, and Sa Begang answers, asking what he needs. Jean Beck informs him that Vice Academy Master Cheon Semyung is summoning him immediately. Sa Begang confirms that Cheon sent Jean Beck with a message and says he is more worried about Jean Beck than the summons. Jean Beck guesses the summons concerns Sa Begang's promotion request and warns him to be cautious. He predicts the test will be difficult and notes that Cheon will hold a grudge because his recommended candidate Mang Sandiak lost. As Sa Begang dresses, Jean Beck asks why he suddenly decided to aim for official instructor status. Sa Begang grins and says becoming an instructor is the first step toward fixing the academy. The moon shines over the academy buildings. Sa Begang walks alone through the lantern-lit corridors. Narration recalls that Dragon Spring Academy was once considered the strongest of the top 3 orthodox academies. It notes that 2 years ago something changed. The academy master, one of the top 10 martial masters, mysteriously disappeared. Despite years of searching, he was not found, and replacing someone of his caliber proved impossible. As a result, the academy's reputation declined. Narration adds there were other contributing factors. Sa Begang enters a meeting room where senior staff sit around a long table and asks to confirm his request. Vice Academy Master Cheon Semyung pointedly asks if he is truly serious about wanting promotion. Sa Begang politely affirms this, while inwardly insulting Cheon. Narration states that Cheon Semyung accelerated the fall of the Dragon Spring Academy. Sa Begang again opens the doors to the council chamber. The elders repeat their intent to confirm his request, addressing him as Assistant Instructor Sa Begang. Cheon again questions whether he is serious about a promotion, identified as a Blade Technique Senior Instructor and Vice Academy Master. Sa Begang narrows his eyes in grim remembrance. A title card names the day the demons invaded. Flames engulf the academy buildings during that invasion. A bloodied Sa Begang staggers through the inferno, barely standing with his spear. Narration explains that massive ruptures opened across the land. Horrific monsters poured out of those rifts and slaughtered people indiscriminately. The scene shows the start of the invasion of these otherworldly beings later known as demons. Young disciples of Dragon Spring Academy attempt to defend themselves in terror. They are mercilessly devoured and crushed by gigantic beasts. Amid the chaos, Sa Begang is urged by another instructor to hurry. He turns and sees his fellow instructors fleeing with valuables instead of helping. The narration says that Vice Master Cheon Semyung ran away first, taking treasure. It adds that if Cheon had simply reported the situation or activated the academy's defenses, many deaths could have been avoided. Sa Begang remembers the screams of the disciples who died that day. He notes that, although those events have not yet occurred because he is now in the past, he will never forget Cheon's hypocritical face. He vows never to forget that disgusting hypocrisy. Back in the meeting, Sa Begang cheerfully asks Cheon what he wanted from him. Cheon announces he will now explain the test Sa Begang must pass to become a senior instructor. The test is revealed to be raiding the demonic knight stronghold, which Sa Begang repeats in surprise. Cheon confirms it is the bandit group in the nearby mountain and orders him to kill them as his test. Narration introduces the demonic knight stronghold as bandits in a sacred mountain near the academy whose attacks on civilians prompted the raid order. Sa Begang reads the formal mission document, signed by Cheon, and accepts it. He asks what this task has to do with being an instructor, and Cheon replies that it represents the basic requirements of one. Another senior instructor, Dung Buyung, declares that senior instructors are the academy's main fighting force. Narration says all senior instructors are recognized as martial masters, highlighting Cheon and Dung's formidable blade techniques. Another senior, an archery master named Un Bayuk, is shown also recognized by the Orthodox Alliance. A sword technique senior, Sang Pilji, is likewise introduced. Cheon boasts that all of them have achieved great feats like eliminating evil sect leaders and bandit chiefs, while Sa Begang impatiently asks how much time he is given. Dung explodes at Sa Begang's casual tone, but Cheon stops him. Cheon sets a strict deadline of exactly 2 weeks. He warns that being even 1 day late will cost Sa Begang any future chance at promotion. Sa Begang smirks and repeats 2 weeks as if it is generous. He boldly says he will return in only 3 days. After he leaves, one instructor furiously calls him insolent, while Cheon remains silent. Dung demands to know if Cheon truly intends to promote such an arrogant youth. Cheon replies there is no need to worry, hinting that even if Sa Begang somehow succeeds things will go his way. He secretly predicts that Assistant Instructor Sa Begang will never return from this mission. Another elder, confused, asks what he means. Meanwhile, Sa Begang races through the night using a movement spell labeled Haste. While running, he calls Cheon a fake and thinks he understands the man's scheme. A caption marks his destination as the demonic knight stronghold. Narration explains that during this period the Green Forest Alliance was just beginning to rise in fame, and remained largely mysterious and small. It adds that there is a more serious problem connected to this mission. Back in the council room, an elder reacts with shock, asking if the information is really true. He is told that the Green Forest Alliance's leader is actually a peak realm martial master. Chion reveals with a grin that the demonic knight stronghold's leader is A.K. Gujium. Narration elaborates that A.K. Gujium is not a mere bandit but the former leader of the dreaded heaven-destroying sect, believed dead by most. It continues that he survived, massacred the traitors who betrayed him, earned a bounty even from unorthodox factions, and has since been hiding in this area. One elder nervously asks how Chion knows all this, and Chion laughs it off as unimportant. Chion admits Sa Began looked impressive in the duel only because he had been concealing his real skills. He then says this test is a real life-and-death battle, not a regulated duel, and assumes Sa Began will die. Out in the mountains, Sa Began speeds toward a towering rocky peak. He uses a levitation spell, stepping onto glowing circles of magic under his feet. While floating up through the clouds, he reflects that fourth circle magic alone might not be enough to defeat A.K. Gujium. He immediately concludes that the solution to this limitation is straightforward. Sa Began arrives at the cliffside of the demonic knight stronghold, announcing his presence. He lands lightly on the ground at the base of the mountain path. Looking up at the towering rock, he resolves to increase his mana and raise his magic circle level. Confident in his 8th circle magical expertise, the protagonist activates a search spell. His search magic scans the surroundings and locates a mana anomaly. He arrives at what appears to be an ordinary cliff face. Suspecting a secret, he infuses his finger with mana and reaches toward the cliff. His mana-coated finger presses into an invisible, rippling spot in the rock. He confirms that the cliff is actually protected by a mana barrier. Realizing this, he concludes he has found the correct location. He steps into the swirling portal revealed by the barrier. As he passes through, he notes that several such hidden portals exist across the central plains. Emerging inside a cavern, he sees a floating, crackling mana crystal. Recognizing it, he mentally confirms his deduction. He identifies the object as a special-grade mana stone. Narration explains that intelligent beings from another world use such power to invade and conquer dimensions. Their repeated invasions are enabled by advanced dimensional travel technology. However, this technology has one critical weakness. When passing through portals, living beings and inanimate objects travel at vastly different speeds, a problem even demons could not solve. Their workaround was to plant equipment in worlds ahead of time. Thus, in target worlds they secretly bury tools they would later need for invasion. The mana stone before him serves as the invaders' power source, restoring their mana but useless to natives without mana. He reaches out and begins channeling power into the stone. Declaring that this limitation no longer applies, he draws immense energy through his hand. Outside, the sun shines over rocky spires, oblivious to the coming disturbance. That tranquility is shattered as a gigantic burst of purple energy erupts from the mountain. Elsewhere, a group of rough men strides through the night. The bandit troop is led by a fearsome, red-eyed warrior wrapped in bandages. One bald subordinate nervously reports to the stronghold master that nothing seems wrong. Offended, the leader demands if the man is accusing him of a mistake, causing the underling to panic. The leader, A.K. Gujium, orders everyone to shut up and search because he clearly sensed an energy explosion, and he is introduced as the demonic knight stronghold master. He mocks his men as losers who cannot sense what he can. From atop a cliff, the protagonist claps and exclaims that A.K. really is a peak realm martial master, saying he trusted in him. A.K., startled, demands to know who this stranger is. The protagonist casually answers the question. He introduces himself as an instructor of the Dragon's Spring Academy while forming a glowing magic circle. The bandits recognize the academy's name and wonder why an instructor from such a place is here. A.K. curtly silences their chatter. He says that if the protagonist is telling the truth, he must be the source of the earlier energy blast. The protagonist smugly asks what if he indeed caused that explosion. Another man nearby reacts in confusion as a red light appears. A violent explosion tears the ground apart in front of A.K. A.K. declares that if that is the case, he came here specifically to kill the protagonist. He confirms this with a menacing glare. Before A.K. can act, a sudden purple blast forces him to defend himself. The protagonist swings a mana-coated hand, channeling power. He unleashes a spell named Mana Blade, slicing through A.K.'s subordinates. A.K. stares in shock at the unexpected carnage. The protagonist remarks at the coincidence as he telekinetically draws a sword to his hand. He invokes another spell, Trice, firmly gripping the glowing blade. He states that he has also come here to kill A.K. A.K. charges with his own red-tinged weapon as their blades clash. While locking swords, the protagonist taunts A.K. to avenge his dead followers. Enraged and confused, A.K. again demands to know who he is. Their weapons collide in another explosive exchange, hurling both back. They continue trading rapid, violent blows, red and purple energies crossing. The duel intensifies as their strikes fill the area with shockwaves and impacts. They clash in midair, powerful arcs of sword chi exploding around them. The protagonist reiterates that he already introduced himself as a Dragon's Spring Academy instructor. A.K. cannot believe that someone like that is overwhelming him. While fighting, A.K. realizes the opponent is not even exerting himself. Frustrated, A.K. grits his teeth. He explodes with rage, releasing a massive red aura in an attempt to overpower the protagonist. The protagonist counters by slashing a devastating purple arc across the ground. AK activates his secret martial art, heaven-destroying Hegemon Divine Arts, core release. He roars that the protagonist forced him to use this forbidden power. AK boasts of the nature of his unleashed power, asking if they understand what it is. He explains he survived being thrown off a cliff by traitors and spent years gathering core energy to take revenge. The protagonist rudely interrupts, asking who requested this backstory. Stunned, AK reacts in disbelief. The protagonist freezes the ground with a spell called Freezing Wave, trapping AK's lower body in ice. He then begins casting a new magic, Astral Chain, while AK panics. The conjured astral chains shoot out from portals. The glowing chains wrap tightly around AK's wrists. They bind him more firmly, immobilizing his arms and weapons. Suspended and frozen from the waist down, AK screams as the protagonist holds his magic circle ready. AK howls in desperation. The protagonist calmly tells him that resisting is meaningless. He explains that Astral Chain drains a target's internal energy on contact, a spell tailored to incapacitate martial artists. AK, weakened, asks where the protagonist learned such sorcery, and if he belongs to the demonic cult. The protagonist corrects him that it is magic, not sorcery, and insults him as a foolish bandit. AK tries to cuss him out but can barely speak. Dangling helplessly, AK laments dying here, prompting the protagonist to ask if he has regrets. AK shouts that he still has not taken revenge on the traitors who manipulated his subordinates in the heaven-destroying sect. He recalls that his collaboration with the Orthodox Alliance and his seclusion on the mountain were all means to regain power for vengeance. The flashback emphasizes that every effort he made was solely for revenge. He begins to say all of that effort was for nothing. The protagonist mockingly praises his determination. He says revenge should be pursued just like that, slowly and persistently without surrender. AK accuses him of mocking someone who has suffered, claiming the protagonist grew up pampered. The protagonist darkens, asking if he truly seems sheltered. AK, unnerved by his expression, thinks the man is beyond ordinary madness. AK then realizes something is fundamentally off about the protagonist as he raises a glowing hand. The protagonist decides to share his own experience with AK. He states he will let AK taste the 200 years of hell he endured. AK's eyes widen as the spell takes hold. AK suddenly finds himself transported to a desolate rocky realm. Bewildered, he wonders what this ominous place is. He asks what the crazy man has done to him. Before him looms an enormous, otherworldly demonic fortress beast emerging from a portal. AK turns toward the terrifying entity in horror. His expression contorts with terror at the vision. He witnesses a catastrophic explosion devastating a landscape. He sees seas of flames consuming countless beings. Memories of brutal battles between invaders and defenders flash before him. He relives scenes of slaughtered comrades piled around him. He recalls experiments where humans float in green tanks like livestock. He experiences bodies burning alive in agonizing transformation. A monstrous eye watches everything like a cold god. He faces mountains of skulls representing innumerable dead. Finally, he confronts a towering demon wreathed in fire, symbolizing ultimate despair. Overwhelmed, AK screams in primal fear. His mind snaps as he continues to shriek, clutching his face. Back in reality, AK writhes at the protagonist's feet, shrieking incoherently. The protagonist, slightly winded, asks how that experience felt. He informs AK that what he just saw is the future he will personally live through in 10 years. AK's trembling hand clutches the protagonist's leg in terror. Collapsing, AK begs at his feet, asking to be killed. The protagonist looks down at him in surprise. AK sobs uncontrollably, repeatedly pleading for death. He says he cannot endure that torment and begs again to be killed. The protagonist acknowledges his plea and prepares his blade. He decides that although it is unpleasant, someone has to carry out the execution. Scene shifts to Dragon Spring Academy at night, its buildings lit. Inside, Vice Academy Master Cheon Semyeon reacts angrily to news of recent events. A massive sword and a blood-stained sack, clearly carrying a head, rest in his office. The protagonist reports that he brought both the sword and AK's head as proof of his victory. Smiling, he suggests they now discuss his responsibilities as a newly promoted senior instructor. The next day, the academy is shown under a peaceful blue sky. In the faculty room, an instructor slams the table, shouting that this promotion is absurd. Senior instructor Yeo Wonjin complains that the man who was once the academy's disgrace is suddenly a senior instructor and demands explanations. Eun Byuk asks Dung if the protagonist truly raided the demonic knight stronghold alone. Dung Buyung admits he personally checked Old Sacred Mountain that morning. He confirms he found the bandits' corpses, including AK Gujium's, exactly where the protagonist claimed. He still cannot understand how it was accomplished. He notes that all of the other bandits were killed by a single clean throat slice. Yeo rants that it is impossible the disgraced instructor had been hiding such sword skills, while Dung insists the evidence is clear. The vice master interrupts, asking why everyone is arguing. Intimidated, the instructors apologize as Vice Academy Master Cheon Semyeon listens in silence. Cheon privately admits that the situation makes no sense. He recalls that AK Gujium was a peak realm master he had met himself, For the protagonist to kill him and his entire band in one night seems impossible. Cheon thinks that not even he, also a peak realm master, could do such a thing and wonders if another expert secretly helped. Deciding the mystery requires further investigation, he calls out to Dung. He asks Dung if he can still contact the Ghost Shadow Manor. Narration introduces the Ghost Shadow Manor as a top-tier assassin organization willing to do anything for enough money. Cheon orders a request be sent for the assassins to investigate every detail of the protagonist's life, even his daily routine. He reassures the worried instructors, claiming he already has a plan. He hands Yeo scrolls containing the list of disciples the protagonist will oversee once promoted. Yeo realizes something and reacts with startled understanding. He then laughs and praises Cheon's cleverness and brilliant idea. Cheon smugly says he is simply using his authority well. Another instructor jokes that the protagonist might resign before the assassins even gather information, given his lack of experience. Outside, we see the protagonist walking with scrolls in hand as Dung confirms he already passed the same disciple lists to Instructor Sa before this meeting. The man with his hands behind his back asks what the elder said. He recalls that the elder only smiled, claimed to understand, and inwardly belittles him. Walking away, he thinks the old elders are fools acting exactly as he predicted. He reflects that he regressed to this specific time and place with a purpose. After learning of Nuzarin's time regression power, he began planning. He repeatedly asked himself how to best prepare for the coming crisis. His core question was how he should prepare for the demon's invasion. Knowing the enemy is a dimension-conquering army, he admits one person alone has limits. He concludes that among many options, the most effective is to build an army. This time he intends to raise not weaklings but a force versed in diverse magic and martial arts. He now stands before a group of new first-year disciples. He notes these cadets are labeled troublemakers among the first years. Though all are talented, their flawed personalities have hindered their growth, or they lack talent, or they have been overlooked for lacking noble backgrounds. He assumes the elders dumped them on him, thinking he could not handle them, unaware of their future. He knows 2 of these cadets will become the greatest heroes during the demon invasion. One is destined to be the Heavenly Sword Alliance leader, a prodigy who led Murim's last stand. The other is fated to become the demon-slaying divine archer, top demon assassin. Smiling, he greets the group. He announces himself as their new instructor and recognizes both future heroes among them. Time shifts to Dragon Spring Academy grounds. Elsewhere, a muscular cadet brutally beats a weaker boy in training. The victim screams in pain. Collapsed on the floor, he coughs and writhes while his assailant looms. Gok Burke orders the downed cadet to get up and continue external arts training. Tan Lijiang, the battered cadet, begs Burke to stop. Burke mocks him, pretending concern that it might look like bullying. He sneers that Tan should be grateful he is demonstrating Dragon Tiger Mountain splitting fist arts, while Tan weakly mentions his own clan's swordsmanship. Burke ridicules the one-star sword clan style. He taunts Tan for clinging to weak martial arts that failed even against him. Tan starts to clench his fist in anger. Burke threatens him for daring to clench his fists. Burke ominously continues his threat. He drags Tan outside and proposes another duel. Tan's hand trembles as he despairs at the idea. Yun Wukyung intervenes, telling Burke to stop. Introducing Yun Wukyung, the narrative notes he warns Burke not to cause trouble before exams. Burke grudgingly relents and tells Tan to consider himself lucky. Tan nervously thanks Yun for stopping the beating. Yun silently observes Tan. He turns away without further comment. Tan sits there, dejected and confused. Soon after, an instructor calls for Yun, Gok Burke, and Tan Lijiang. A staff member relays that the Vice Academy Master ordered their immediate transfer. They are informed they will leave Camellia class for a newly created class, shocking them. They gather before the new instructor Sa Begang. Sa Begang, smiling, welcomes them and says he is their instructor from now on. The cadets whisper in confusion, and Yun scoffs at the situation. Burke explodes in anger, cursing about being shuffled and stuck with this instructor. He rants that suddenly changing classes and getting a seemingly incompetent instructor is unacceptable. Tan, emboldened by Burke, also yells that he will not obey such an order. Sa Begang calmly tells Burke his language toward the head instructor is insolent. Burke swears at him and says he refuses to learn from someone who only just gained internal arts. He declares he has no intention of being taught by such a man. Sa Begang only smiles faintly. He secretly prepares purple magic in his hand. He invokes Academy Rules, Article 3, Clause 5. Using Blink, he teleports directly in front of the stunned Burke. Burke, suddenly face to face with him, is shocked. Sa Begang stomps the ground so hard the stone shatters. He unleashes a powerful blow toward Burke. As Burke howls, Sa Begang recalls the rule allowing corrective punishment for misbehaving cadets. Burke grits his teeth, enraged. He channels fiery internal energy into his fist. Roaring, he charges with his Dragon Tiger Mountain splitting fists technique. Sa Begang critiques his swearing and violence toward a superior while coolly intercepting the attacks. He also faults Burke for using internal arts during class without permission, flitting around him with Blink. He says the worst offense is yet to come as he lines up a counter. Sa Begang's punch slams into Burke's chest, overwhelming his technique. Burke screams as the energy blast sends him flying. Sa Begang calls Burke's martial arts pathetic as he follows up. He pummels Burke with a flurry of precise strikes. Burke is launched away and crashes hard onto the ground. He lies battered and groaning from the beating. Begang addresses him again. He orders Burke to get up because his lesson is not finished. The watching Tan cannot believe the Academy's top external arts student is being toyed with like a child. Another cadet also marvels that the highly ranked Burke is being dominated so easily. Burke shakily stands, cursing Begang. Begang hits him again, further humiliating him. The other cadets react in shock and disbelief. Begang walks toward the coughing Burke, chiding him for being in such bad shape on the very first day. He says it is unfortunate for Burke but clenches his fist, ready to continue. He states that an instructor's job is to endure tears and thoroughly educate disobedient cadets as he grabs Burke. Burke panics and tries to shield himself. Someone suddenly catches Begang's wrist mid-swing. Yun Wukyung has stepped in to stop him. Yun criticizes him for excessive force against the cadet and addresses him by name. Begang inwardly notes this is the moment Yun finally chooses to act. Flashback reveals Yun Wukyung is destined to become the Heavenly Sword Alliance leader in the previous timeline. The narration introduces Yun's prestigious origin as the second son of the destructive Sword Yun clan. From childhood he was hailed as a martial genius, vastly outperforming his peers at the Academy. His talent exceeded what the Academy could hold, becoming a Supreme Peak Master at 20 and a top 10 Orthodox Martial Master. He should have lived a glorious life, revered as an absolute master of the Central Plains. But circumstances changed his fate. The demons appeared, shattering that destined brilliance. From the invasion's outset, Yun fought more battles than almost anyone. Demons eventually targeted and annihilated his clan, leaving him the sole survivor. Despite immense grief, he did not sink into despair. Instead, he saved survivors on the battlefield. He roamed the Central Plains, battling demons and uniting survivors from Orthodox and unorthodox sects into an alliance. Even when all hope seemed lost, he led the remaining martial artists in a desperate final stand. Begang, in the present, recalls watching Yun on that battlefield. He remembers Yun always charging the front and mowing down colossal demonic beasts with brilliant sword energy. Yun's fierce profile in battle is etched in his memory. The narration confirms Yun was undeniably the final hope of the Central Plains. Returning to the present grip on his wrist, Begang reflects on Yun's former status. Yet now he views Yun merely as another arrogant noble brat. Begang mocks Yun for finally bothering to move. Yun brushes off Begang's hand. Begang says it is amusing that the assistant instructor who once lacked internal energy now seems so strong. Yun admits this change is unexpected. Begang then belittles Yun for using his new strength, only to show off in front of cadets. Yun pointedly asks if this sudden power came from some so-called fated encounter. Begang thinks Yun is sharp and teasingly asks if he is curious. He offers to explain if Yun obediently follows his training, but Yun declines. Yun says he will instead file a formal complaint about whoever orchestrated this class transfer. He adds that he refuses to learn from someone inflated by temporary good fortune. The cadets begin walking away from Begang. Begang watches them leave. Most students depart, leaving only a few, including Tan, nearby. Burke looks back, torn and frustrated. Another cadet glances back as well, considering what happened. Tan stares at Begang in awe and confusion. Begang suppresses a laugh. He mocks Yun for talking big and asks if he really believes there is nothing to learn from him. He places a hand on Tan Lijiang's shoulder, startling the boy. He hints that 10 days of his training could change everything. He boldly claims he can make Tan strong enough to defeat Yun. Tan sweats nervously at being put forward like this. Yun stops walking, reacting to the provocation. From behind, he coldly asks Begang to repeat what he just said. Begang grins and agrees to repeat it as often as Yun wants. He reiterates that this so-called weakling Tan will be able to utterly overpower Yun after a week of his training. Tan protests in panic, demanding to know what the instructor is doing. Begang silences Tan by covering his mouth as the boy calls him insane. Yun's eyes darken with lethal intent. He asks if Begang is truly prepared to take responsibility for such words. Begang replies cheerfully that he is. He proposes a bet. In 10 days Yun must face Tan in an official spar. He adds that if Tan wins, Yun must follow his training without complaint. Begang further promises that if Yun wins, he may demand anything, even Begang's expulsion or humiliation. Yun scoffs at the idea that there is anything he wants from Begang. He says he needs nothing from him but listens on. He accepts the challenge, warning Begang to be ready for the match a week from now. After Yun leaves, Begang and Tan stand together, processing what just happened. Tan suddenly screams in panic, startling Begang. Begang, hands up defensively, looks at the frantic Tan as the scene ends. The instructor calmly tells the panicking cadet that he is being too loud. The frantic cadet grabs his instructor, demanding to know what he just did, while the instructor notes how energetic he is. The instructor tells the cadet to calm down so he can explain, as the cadet freaks out about being made to fight Yun Wukyung. Annoyed, the instructor throws the clinging cadet off, calling him a brat as the cadet yells in pain. Standing over the fallen cadet, the instructor cancels class and dismisses all the other cadets. As the others leave in confusion, the instructor says the next schedule will be sent tomorrow, while a cadet wonders what is happening. Watching the sobbing cadet on the ground, the instructor reacts to the announcement of a public spar and clicks his tongue. A fellow cadet tells the despairing boy he just needs to win and wonders why he assumes he will lose. The cadet explains that in his first public spar after enrolling he lost to Gokberk. He recalls that he was beaten badly, and has been bullied by Gokberk every day since. He adds that even the powerful bully Gokberk. He remembers Gokberk being easily defeated by Yun Wukyung. The narration says Gokberk could not even touch Yun Wukyung and was completely crushed. The instructor muses that Yun Wukyung is indeed exceptional. The cadet stresses that even without his clan's backing, Yun Wukyung's martial talent is unique and asks why he must fight him. Smiling sharply, the instructor tells him not to worry. The instructor points directly at the cadet. He asserts that the cadet is actually stronger than Yun Wukyung. A caption identifies the cadet as first year Camellia class, 1-star sword clan member Dan Lijiang. Dan is stunned and imagines his terrifying former self as the demon-slaying divine archer. A caption clarifies that before regression he was the demon-slaying divine archer. Dan screams in protest at this situation. He reluctantly accepts that they cannot change the new class or instructor but still questions the forced duel. He grabs the instructor and demands to know why he must publicly duel Yun Wukyung, while the instructor says he still does not grasp the situation. The instructor cheerfully explains that Dan must win the duel so the instructor can prove his own abilities. Dan protests that this benefits only the instructor and asks what he gains from being dragged into it. The instructor gives one word as Dan's reward, written like a revelation: revenge. Dan is shocked and asks what he means. The instructor reveals he knows Dan used to be beaten up by that big bully and Dan wonders how he knew. The instructor asks how Dan felt when he recently beat that bully up. He presses Dan, asking if seeing the bully smash thrilled and refreshed him. He continues ominously, starting another probing question. He suggests Dan is angry because he could not take revenge with his own hands. The instructor reminds Dan that he himself said even Gokberk cannot touch Yun Wukyung, then proposes that if Dan gets strong enough to beat Yun Wukyung. He paints the picture of a bloodied Gokberk cowering as Dan exacts personal revenge. Looming over Dan, the instructor asks if such revenge would not be a fitting gift for his current self. Dan hesitates, beginning to say if. Deciding, Dan says that if he can truly become that strong he will do it, and the instructor confidently agrees. Standing up, Dan clarifies that beyond Gokberk he mainly wants to become stronger than he is now. The instructor, half-shadowed and grinning, says they will see. A training dummy stands ready in the yard. From a rooftop, the instructor watches Dan take position before the dummy with a practice sword. The instructor announces they will first check Dan's current skill. He orders Dan to imagine fighting Yun Wukyung and use his martial arts at full power against the dummy. Dan exhales to focus. He dashes forward with great speed. The dummy shakes violently as his strike lands. Dan unleashes a powerful slashing blow that sends a shockwave through the dummy. He follows up with another fierce overhead swing. He continues attacking in a rapid combo that blasts the dummy repeatedly. Dan's eyes are wild with exertion and strain. The instructor shouts at him to keep going and not stop, putting in full force. Dan roars as he keeps swinging with everything he has. A brief distorted vision flashes, signaling his overexerted state. Dan finally collapses face first onto the ground, groaning. Gasping and coughing, he lies beside the battered dummy, utterly spent. The instructor watches him coolly from above. He calls Dan's current state pathetic, shocking the exhausted cadet. The instructor asks if Dan knows what his current problem is. Dan, panting, thinks that whenever he practices basic moves his internal energy keeps scattering. He recalls first suspecting he had learned his clan's martial arts incorrectly but confirming his basic forms were fine. He then had a physician repeatedly examine his dantian and meridians, yet no physical problem was found. Dan wonders if he just lacks talent or has a strange illness, but the instructor says that is not the case. From the roof the instructor explains that Dan's meridian points are simply spread farther apart than other people's. Dan is confused and asks for clarification. The instructor repeats that his meridians are unusually spread out in the mind meridian. He adds that this rare constitution is generally advantageous, but because Dan is young and low on internal energy it now causes problems. A diagram shows that martial artists normally send energy from the dantian through meridians to attack. A second diagram shows that Dan's wide meridians and limited energy cause the power to leak instead of concentrating. The instructor concludes that this is why Dan's energy continually disperses. Dan admits this is the first time he has heard such an explanation about himself. The instructor pauses, then says this actually makes sense. He remembers in a past battlefield how corpses of comrades and monsters lay around him. He recalls himself then, bloodied with glowing eyes, surviving amid the carnage. He remembers learning about this rare constitution from a hooded expert in the wilderness. That mentor had casually mentioned the information to him by chance. Returning to the present, Dan kneels before the instructor, listening intently. Feeling a heavy atmosphere, Dan suspects his instructor has a painful backstory. The instructor ends the detailed explanation at this point. He cheerfully says that now they know the problem, they must fix it, astonishing Dan, who asks if there is a remedy. The instructor assures him that the solution is actually simple. He explains that since Dan lacks power due to wide meridians, the fix is to greatly increase his amount of internal energy. However, because they cannot raise his energy reserves much in a short time, the instructor says there is only one method he can teach Dan for now. He tells Dan to keep gathering internal energy right up until he begins his basic moves. He says that once Dan accumulates enough of it, Dan is shown charging a technique by leaping toward a dummy with swirling energy. He concentrates intensely as he swings during this charged state. The charged attack launches the dummy into the air, showing he can now unleash his true power. Ecstatic, Dan grins, feeling the effectiveness of this new method. The instructor watches with satisfied pride. Dan excitedly yells to his instructor that his energy did not disperse, and the instructor casually confirms he saw it before telling him to rest before collapsing. Dan laughs that he feels more energized than ever. Mid-sentence, he suddenly faints backward. His vision fades to the sky above. Still looking at the sky, he hears his own ragged breathing. He coughs and gasps as he regains consciousness. Lying on the ground, he wonders why he suddenly collapsed. Dan groans to the instructor that he has no strength left, and the instructor says it is just a side effect of channeling full power for the first time. The instructor explains that because Dan never truly used his mind meridians before, his unadapted body went into shock. He reassures Dan that the side effects will fade in a few months, which makes Dan uneasy. Dan suddenly realizes with alarm that the duel is only a week away, not months. A caption emphasizes his thought that the duel is in 1 week. The scene shifts to the training hall as the sun sets. A practice stick whips through the air with force. The instructor tells Dan he currently has 2 major problems. He explains that when Dan unleashes a stored energy technique, all gathered energy is spent in one strike, causing him to collapse. He adds that Dan's energy core is too small to safely pre-store energy for long, or he might suffer dangerous energy deviation. He confirms that up to this point the explanation should be clear, and Dan says he understands. The instructor spins a heavy practice stick, telling Dan not to worry about it, and instead focus on the implications. He points out that considering these limitations, Dan can only start charging after the duel begins and asks how long it took him to gather enough energy earlier. After Dan answers about 7 minutes, the instructor bluntly asks how he expects to survive that long against Yun Wukyoung. Dan anxiously asks what he should do. Gripping the stick, the instructor says there is only one answer. He declares that Dan must dodge like crazy until he finishes gathering energy. Dan manages to shove aside one sudden attack from the instructor, who is already striking him. Startled, Dan yells at the instructor, asking what he is doing. The instructor shouts for him to focus, watch the weapon, and start gathering energy. He activates an illusion technique, his hand glowing with mystical patterns. The illusion lets him manipulate the stick as he continues pressing Dan, who is bewildered. Dan takes a brutal hit to the head from the stick. The impact echoes across the courtyard as the sun sets. Holding his throbbing head, Dan complains in pain while the instructor points out he did not even use inner energy. The instructor orders Dan to get up because training will continue, shocking Dan that this beating counts as training. He insists this really is dodge training, while Dan protests how twisted it seems. A caption repeats Dan's incredulous thought about messed up training. Standing with the stick over his shoulder, the instructor asks Dan if he thinks this is just bullying. He reminds Dan that he has already explained the cause of his weakness and the method to overcome it, even demonstrating it clearly. He promises that for now this harsh regimen is the only way Dan will be able to even scratch Yun Wukyoung in a week. He acknowledges the training is painful but asks if it is worse than the humiliation Dan suffered from Gokburk and Yun Wukyoung. He presses further, asking if Dan will throw away this perfect chance to prove himself to everyone who treated him like trash. Dan remembers Yun Wukyoung's back as his former unbeatable opponent. Gripping his sword tightly, Dan apologizes to the instructor. With renewed determination, Dan shouts that the dodge training must continue and that he can endure a whole day of it. The instructor scoffs at the idea of just one day, confusing Dan. Laughing, the instructor announces that Dan will be doing this non-stop for the entire remaining week, leaving Dan horrified. The instructor then charges at him again with glowing eyes, declaring he is coming. Dan, eyes streaming, begs him to wait as another strike descends. Dan's screams echo over the academy as the brutal week of training begins. A caption states that 1 week passes. The scene shifts to the grand main arena of the academy. A large crowd gathers around the stage where Dan and Yun Wukyoung now face each other for the duel. Other cadets watch from the stands as the arena buzzes. Yun Wukyoung stands confidently with his practiced sword, the center of attention. Dan, bandaged and calm, steps onto the platform, showing the toll of the week's training. Some cadets speculate that Dan will be defeated instantly and collapse. Others remark that though they saw him training, it only looked like he spent the whole week being beaten with a stick. They recall the sight of him getting smacked around non-stop during that training. Dan steels himself, eyes fierce and resolved. Watching from the crowd, Gokburk mocks Dan as an idiot and says trash like him should stay hidden. From a balcony, an older man scoffs at the idea that the timid Dan Liejung could possibly defeat the prodigy Yun Wukyoung. He thinks Dan has been duped by a fraud and has doomed himself by accepting this duel. Dan calls out to Instructor Sa Began, seeking his attention. Sa Began, glowing with energy, says he now wants to add a personal condition to the duel, which Yun agrees to hear. Sa Began demands that if he wins, Yun must voluntarily withdraw from the academy. He adds that he never wants to waste his time like this again. Dan agrees to the condition and swears on his own name. Sa Began reminds Dan that if Dan loses, He must faithfully attend all of Sa Beigong's classes and training sessions, which Dan acknowledges. Sa Beigong, grinning, says that Dan is overlooking something. He explains that Dan's real opponent for now is Yun Wukyung, already waiting with a wooden sword in the duel arena. Dan, sweating and bandaged, stands ready with his own wooden sword. Yun silently faces him, expression unreadable. Sa Beigong claps his hands and announces the start of the match. He states the duel rules. Victory comes when one side forfeits, faints, or drops their weapon. He further bans lethal strikes and says he will personally judge any such cases. Dan and Yun stare each other down as Sa Beigong prepares to begin. Sa Beigong excitedly declares the duel has begun. Dan steels himself as the opening call echoes. At the shouted command to start, Yun launches into motion. Dan grips his sword and charges, nerves visible. As Dan attacks, his vision seems to show his own arm being severed in a bloody instant. Horrified, he reacts to the illusion, wondering what just happened. He sees blood and fragments flying through the air, as if his arm was truly cut. A chilling voice tells him to surrender, making him freeze in fear. Looking down, Dan realizes his arms are intact, and he is still gripping his sword. Yun calls him a fool for being so shaken by mere killing intent. Yun berates Dan for daring to fight when he collapses from just a taste of murderous aura. Dan recognizes that terrifying sensation as murderous intent and trembles. He realizes that if Yun truly wanted to, he could have killed him with that earlier illusionary strike. Overwhelmed, Dan thinks he cannot possibly win against someone regarded as the Academy's very best. He concludes there is no way someone as weak as him could defeat Yun with only a week of training. On the platform, Dan visibly cowers while Yun stands composed, watched by Sa Beigong. Sa Beigong smiles subtly, confident in his plan. Purple energy flares around Sa Beigong as he recalls the brutal week of training he put Dan through. Dan gives a shaky laugh, realizing this is exactly what Sa Beigong prepared him for. He calms his breathing and tells himself to remember his reason for fighting. He recalls declaring that his wish is to become stronger than he currently is. The memory jumps back to a week prior, when he first resolved to grow stronger and began Sa Beigong's harsh training. In the present, Yun mutters that Dan is an idiot for refusing the chance to avoid injury. Yun bends as if to strike seriously at Dan. A blast erupts on the arena floor, signaling Yun's powerful movement. Leaping through the air, Yun tells Dan that whatever happens next is his own fault. Their wooden swords clash violently. The two exchange blows midair, Dan barely keeping up. Yun is surprised that Dan managed to react in time to his attack. Their weapons continue to collide in fast succession. Dan thinks that last clash almost ruined him and that the chi he was gathering nearly scattered. As he charges again, Yun suddenly slips past Dan's guard and moves to counter. Dan recalls the name of Sa Beigong's sword style, the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword, and its first technique. Yun unleashes that style's move, Berserk Dragon's Rage Torrent, sending waves of sword chi swirling toward Dan. Dan panics at the overwhelming power of the sword chi surrounding him. Yet he senses something odd and questions whether the attack is really as inescapable as it looks. Testing it, he finds that dodging the sweeping waves is easier than expected. Spectators gape in disbelief at Dan's evasions. Another onlooker grits his teeth, stunned by what he is witnessing. Yun grudgingly admits Dan has learned something from his recent training. Dan then channels the same sword style's third technique, charging his wooden sword with crackling energy. He launches Twin Dragon Fang Severance straight at Yun. As he swings, Dan recognizes something familiar in the movement. He realizes that this technique mirrors the way Sa Beigong had been striking him during training. Their blades collide with explosive force. Dan is hurled up and around as Yun's counterattack sends him flying. Yun looks sharply at Dan, surprised by his resilience. Dan lands and staggers, exhausted but still standing. Catching his breath, Dan watches Yun carefully. Yun, eyes glowing with anger, rushes in again with another powerful downward strike. Blue sword chi slashes around as Yun presses his assault. Dan acknowledges Yun's strength, speed, and precision, thinking it is fitting for the clan famed as the Central Plains' top swordsman. However, he tells himself that great skill does not make the attacks unavoidable. Yun thinks to himself that he does not understand how, but Dan is somehow using the same sword technique. Dan's memory flashes back to Sa Beigong repeatedly battering him with that technique in training. He recalls Beigong rushing beside him, showing how to move inside that raging chi. The images blur of Beigong attacking with purple energy, drilling the pattern into Dan. In the present, Yun's strike overlaps in Dan's mind with Sa Beigong's past blows, letting him read the trajectory. Dan concludes that Yun is indeed using the exact technique Sa Beigong had hammered into him all week. Dan now meets Yun's strike head-on, sword glowing green as he counters. Sa Beigong's earlier promise that Yun would underestimate Dan comes to Dan's mind. Yun's footwork betrays his shock as Dan unexpectedly closes the distance. The two reset slightly apart, Yun now more cautious. Watching from above, disciples whisper that Yun actually retreated from Dan, hardly believing it. The murmurs continue, some suspecting the two might even be putting on an act. Another voice dismisses that idea, insisting Yun would never fake weakness. Sa Beigong watches in silence, analyzing the flow of the duel. Yun tightens his grip on his weapon, making a decision. He clenches the sword fully, preparing to fight seriously. Yun calls out and apologizes for having called Dan an idiot. He admits that Dan has grown amazingly in just 1 week of training. Yun then powers up the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword again, puzzled how Dan even knows this family technique. Dan recognizes the stance Yun is taking and feels a jolt of dread. Yun summons a towering vortex of blue sword chi that spirals into the sky. He reveals that this is the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword's ultimate move, Fierce Dragon Annihilation. Yun vows that if Dan somehow dodges even this attack, he will concede defeat. The watching students cry out in awe and terror at the monstrous sword technique. Even the older observer who mocked Dan earlier is stunned, demanding to know what kind of sword art this is. That same man then realizes something about Dan's response and calls Yun crazy. Dan, now wielding his sword infused with green chi, steps toward the raging vortex instead of away from it. Spectators wonder in shock where Dan is going as he advances on the storm. The narrative cuts back to the night before the duel. The academy stands quietly under clear skies as events rewind. In the training yard that night, Dan staggers, drenched in sweat from relentless practice. Sa Begang, wooden club in hand, tells him his dodging has improved and the plan might now be feasible. Dan asks if this training will really let him evade all of Yun's attacks. Sa Begang bluntly answers no, stunning him. Sa Begang clarifies that Yun is not stupid and will adapt once Dan repeatedly dodges his strikes. He explains that if Dan survives long enough, Yun will eventually unleash his strongest technique. Sa Begang says that in such a drawn-out fight, Yun will almost certainly resort to that ultimate move. He identifies it as the largest-scale sword art Yun can currently use. The scene shows the swirling storm of sword chi that technique produces. Sa Begang describes Fierce Dragon Annihilation as a move that manifests a dragon-like storm, generating overwhelming sword chi. He warns Dan that dodging this final technique is impossible by normal means. Sa Begang states that leaping back or trying to escape is futile, since the attack instantly engulfs the whole arena. Instead, he tells Dan that nothing is truly unbeatable and every technique has a weakness. He explains that the swirling storm only looks perfect, but in reality it is a formation meant to obliterate enemies who panic and try to flee. Dan begins to grasp that the key is not to run from the storm. Sa Begang's knowing smile hints that he has a single solution in mind. He says there is only one way out of that technique. The solution he taught is to step forward rather than retreat. His instruction echoes in Dan's head during the duel. Keep moving straight toward Yun through the storm. Dan, eyes resolute, follows that advice and advances through the sword chi. Yun is shocked to see Dan pushing in instead of being blown away. Sa Begang had predicted Yun would react instantly once he realized his ultimate move had been read. He anticipated that Yun would try to follow up immediately after Fierce Dragon Annihilation was neutralized. In that brief, surprise response, Sa Begang said Dan would have a tiny opening to exploit. That opening, he told Dan, would be the decisive moment to strike. Dan now channels all his pent-up resentment and frustration into one focused counterattack. The plan's final step is summarized. Use that rage to land a single, decisive blow. Dan roars and swings his energized sword down with everything he has. His inner voice curses Yun and vows to drive that blow into the arrogant prodigy. Yun, realizing the danger, braces himself and swings with full power. Their empowered swords meet in a blinding flash. Dan's attack shatters Yun's guard and smashes into him, ending the duel's climax. Afterward, Sa Begang casually slings an arm around Dan's shoulders and asks how it feels. Together they look out over the cheering academy as students celebrate Dan's performance. Other classmates excitedly shout praise for Dan's incredible showing. More students chatter in amazement, thrilled by the upset victory. The previously mocking onlooker now scowls in disbelief at the outcome. Sa Begang tells Dan that the feeling of turning the tables like this is exhilarating. Dan, still processing, is momentarily speechless. Then he smiles broadly and agrees that it feels amazing. The scene shifts back to the peaceful academy buildings under the sun. Sa Begang strolls the corridors with practice swords on his back, ready for his new role. A classroom door opens as he enters. Inside, students, including Dan and his friends, sit at desks, waiting for instruction. The class looks toward the front with anticipation as the new instructor arrives. Dan sits among them, smiling with newfound confidence. An observant eye watches from the side, interested in what comes next. Yun, now seated as a student, rests his chin on his hand, having accepted his loss and place in the class. Sa Begang smiles and says it is time to get started. He officially announces that their first class is about to begin. The chapter closes on a bright view of the academy roofs under the sun, signaling a new beginning for everyone. An enraged man slams his fist on the table and curses. He shouts that the elders have suddenly turned against their earlier agreement. Furious and confused, he blames Vice Academy Master Chion for the situation. Another instructor yells that their scheme was supposed to make Sa Begang leave on his own. They marveled at the cadets, especially Dan Lijiang and Yun Wukyung, now eagerly insist on training under Sa Begang. Staff explain that when pressured to switch classes again, those cadets even threaten to withdraw and report them to the Yun clan. Instructors regret entrusting a genius like Yun Wukyung to a rookie and worry about the academy's reputation. The vice master rages that others are trying to pin this failure on him and calls them Yun clan bootlicking parasites. He demands confirmation that Yun Wukyung actually lost to a low-rank 1-star sword clan cadet. Hearing that witnesses saw it as a loss, he is shocked that such a famed prodigy could be beaten. Thinking of Sa Begang, He decides this mysterious man is too incomprehensible and must be dealt with. He suddenly remembers something important. He asks if they still have no reply from the assassin group Ghost Shadow Manor, and is told they have not. Annoyed, he complains that a mere mercenary group is acting arrogant by making them wait. A masked leader of Ghost Shadow Manor appears, eyes glowing. His ominous voice warns the Vice Master to be cautious with his words and actions. Terrified, the Vice Master and his aide demand to know who has intruded. The assassin calls their question foolish as he looms behind the Vice Master. The Vice Master panics inside, realizing this man entered undetected despite his own peak realm strength. The assassin reminds them they themselves summoned him, and the Vice Master reacts in dread. The Ghost Shadow operatives state they have arrived to carry out the requested job. Their leader orders details on Sa Begang, and they are introduced as the top mercenary group Ghost Shadow Manor. The assassins examine a portrait identifying Sa Begang as their target. Ghost Shadow No. 1 notes they were paid a large sum just to investigate a rookie instructor. The group mocks the academy for being corrupt yet rich while remarking it is none of their business. Ghost Shadow No. 7 laughs at the hypocrisy of orthodox sects secretly investigating their own subordinate. Ghost Shadow No. 5 dryly admits they are not much better, living off such petty commissions. Their captain calls No. 5 to attention. The captain reminds them of their deeper mission and vows they will endure any dirty work until they find the master they seek. No. 5 hurriedly apologizes for his attitude, and the captain tells him to just focus on the mission. They decide for now to simply find and keep Sa Begang under surveillance, postponing any probe into his guardian Jean Beck. One asks if rumors of Sa Begang having a miraculous encounter are true, and the captain dismisses such talk. They recall accounts that Sa Begang once could not use inner energy at all, yet overnight he suddenly became a martial master after a violent incident, so they wonder if fate granted him that change. One assassin speculates Sa Begang might have powerful hidden backers. The captain instead suggests he could be a plant from a hostile faction, making him more dangerous and justifying their hiring. He orders extreme caution so the target never notices their presence. Confident, the subordinates insist no one can detect Ghost Shadow Manor's stealth skills. The captain nods silently, ready to move. He signals that their operation is now beginning. Elsewhere, Sa Begang strolls with Jean Beck on a peaceful bridge over a lotus pond. Jean Beck mentions Sa Begang has become a frequent topic of conversation at the academy. He admits the stories he heard about Sa Begang have all been surprising. Worried that many are starting to move against him, Jean Beck asks if Sa Begang will be alright, but Sa Begang calmly says jealousy always follows heroes. Jean Beck remarks that Sa Begang's supposed fated encounter must have been remarkable to change him so drastically. Sa Begang reflects that everything probably began with his duel, which had been excessive even in his own eyes. Jean Beck notes that if Sa Begang had lost that duel, Vice Master Chion's attempt to drive him out would have succeeded. Sa Begang thinks to himself that, truthfully, things were very different before he regressed. He narrates that before his return in time, in the previous timeline, when he lacked any power, he was humiliatingly defeated in a duel by Meng Sandyak. As a result, he lost his assistant instructor position and was reduced to menial labor, mocked by others. Unable to bear the shame, he eventually fled the academy. He wandered aimlessly, penniless and exhausted. To survive, he became an escort warrior in an escort agency. Though still unable to use inner energy, he trained his body and spear obsessively, surviving many dangerous missions until he rose to first-rank escort warrior. Over more than a decade of escort work across the Central Plains, he built a vast web of contacts and information. Years later, he revisited Dragon Spring Academy for nostalgia's sake. That very night, catastrophe struck. A colossal demonic creature and flames devastated the academy before his eyes. Back in the present, Sa Begang clicks his tongue and throws a stone with practiced irritation. The stone lands in the lotus pond shrubbery. When Jean Beck asks why he tossed it, Sa Begang casually says he saw an ugly frog. Jean Beck chides him for wanting to hurt a harmless frog, recalling how he once fed Sa Begang frogs as medicine. The two continue chatting while walking past the pond. Hidden nearby, Ghost Shadow operatives watch them from the bushes. Startled by something hitting him earlier, No. 7 trembles while No. 5 looks on. No. 5 asks if No. 7 is okay, and the bruised man grumbles that Sa Begang suddenly hurled a rock at him. No. 7 nervously suggests they may have already been discovered, but No. 5 insists Sa Begang would not have just walked away if he had. Their captain scolds No. 7 for doubting Ghost Shadow Manor's stealth techniques over such a trivial incident. No. 7 frantically denies doubting them, and the captain tells him to be more confident. The captain orders them to keep tailing Sa Begang as he heads back to his quarters. Inside, Sa Begang relaxes, pleased that he has secured Instructor Sung Dan and the genius cadets Dan Lijiang and Yun Wukyung. He considers his first goal after regression complete, and wonders if it is time to recruit a certain woman. He recalls that, according to his memories, she should currently be in a specific place. Yun Wukyung, troubled, approaches Sa Begang's room. Hearing him outside, Sa Begang invites him in. Yun Wukyung remarks that Sa Begang seems to have been expecting him, and Sa Begang replies that he figured Yun would be restless by now. Sa Begang bluntly asks what Yun Wukyung wants and mocks the uneasy look on his face. Yun starts to speak. Sa Bigang jokingly asks why the young master of the prestigious destructive sword Yun clan has come to this humble room. Yun Wukyung stands silently, struggling with his thoughts. Sa Bigang lounges on the bed and waits, prompting Yun to continue. Yun finally brings up their earlier duel. He recalls how Dan Lijiang moved during that duel. Yun remembers the trainees awkwardly yet accurately responding to his advanced sword moves. He initially attributed it to 1 week of training but now realizes those movements revealed deeper understanding. To him it seemed as if Sa Bigang already knew every trajectory and pathway of his clan's sword art. He accuses Sa Bigang of being the one who taught Dan Lijiang the destructive sword Yun clan's signature technique, the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword, and demands to know how an outsider could know it so well. Sa Bigang only smiles and evasively says who can really know. He claims the Yun clan's martial art is widely known among warriors, though Yun angrily says Sa Bigang's knowledge went far beyond rumor. Sa Bigang tells him of course he expected Yun to notice that, otherwise he would have been disappointed. He stops Yun from changing the subject. Sa Bigang tells him to be honest if he wants to be his disciple and says Yun's real concern lies elsewhere. He points out that Yun actually came to confirm whether Sa Bigang also understands the flaws in the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword that Yun himself has sensed. Yun's eyes widen, realizing Sa Bigang has seen through him. Sa Bigang explains that the fabled sword art was perfected long ago and passed down as the clan's supreme technique, reputed to have overwhelming, flawless power. But as Yun grew up training it, his keen mind realized something was wrong. He understood that the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword is not truly an invincible martial art. Sa Bigang notes that as heir of the illustrious Yun clan, Yun could not openly admit this doubt, and now wonders if Sa Bigang is belittling his clan's art. Sa Bigang tells him he may think what he likes but insists on making one point. Sa Bigang states that in the near future, he warns that a time will come when the martial ideals Yun reveres, like tradition, honor, nobility and reputation, will all become meaningless. Sa Bigang tells Yun to focus on one thing only, becoming stronger than he is now. He urges Yun to ruthlessly cast aside anything that hinders that goal. Sa Bigang ends the talk, saying they will discuss details later. Yun agrees to continue the discussion and is told to follow his instincts for now. Feeling awkward, Yun tries to conclude the conversation. Sa Bigang cheerfully grabs a wooden pillow, pretending it is nothing important when Yun questions him. He privately remarks that an irritating frog happens to be outside. That night, Ghost Shadow operatives watch the academy complex from a rooftop. Their captain surveys the area thoughtfully while the others await orders. They identify Jean Beck, the recovering body pavilion master, in his room. The assassin's report describes Jean Beck's background as an ordinary medic who joined the academy 5 years ago. They conclude Jean Beck is skilled but not a real martial artist, seemingly a normal doctor despite his closeness to Sa Bigang. The captain notes that Jean Beck's spotless history feels suspiciously manufactured. He then notices Number 7's battered face and demands an explanation. Number 7 starts to stammer out what happened. His memory shows Sa Bigang dropping the heavy wooden pillow right onto him. He also recalls being smashed in the face by a flying kettle. Then he remembers Sa Bigang repeatedly pummeling him while Number 5 watched in horror. Back on the roof, the captain skeptically asks if they truly were not discovered. Number 7 admits he is sure they were discovered after all. The captain stubbornly insists their mental concealment technique could not have been seen through, and claims Sa Bigang just likes throwing things. Tearful but obedient, Number 7 is told he has endured worse and should put up with it a bit longer. The next morning, someone begins speaking, warning a senior in advance. The bruised Number 7 mutters that if anything else flies at them he will personally behead Sa Bigang. Their captain tries to calm him, saying they have shifted farther from Sa Bigang's quarters so such accidents should stop. Number 7, still anxious, imagines Sa Bigang suddenly deciding to practice archery and hitting them again, causing Number 5 to hush him. They panic and hide as they see Sa Bigang approaching the courtyard. Sa Bigang walks casually along the path beside the bushes where the assassins crouch. Grumbling about needing to relieve himself, he strolls closer to their hiding spot. Reaching into his robe, he remarks that he must have drunk too much tea. Number 7, hidden in the foliage, realizes in terror what Sa Bigang is about to do. Warm liquid suddenly pours onto his head from above. The stream continues, splashing over him, while Number 5 watches in horrified silence. Soaked and furious, Number 7 erupts from the bushes screaming at the unseen offender. He pauses stunned, as he fully registers what just happened. Sa Bigang stands nearby with a teapot, looking innocently at the drenched assassin. Smirking, Sa Bigang greets him and mockingly offers him a drink. Number 7 can only gape in disbelief. Realizing Sa Bigang knew of them all along and humiliated him on purpose, Number 7 shakes with rage and curses him. He grabs his dagger in fury. Enraged beyond control, he leaps at Sa Bigang, shouting that he will kill him. He charges in with eyes glowing and weapon thrust forward. His attack slams into a glowing hexagonal barrier that instantly manifests around Sa Bigang. The barrier easily blocks the blow as Sa Bigang looks calm behind the translucent shield. Sa Bigang retaliates by smashing Number 7's face with his hand. He then drives the assassin into the ground with overwhelming force. Grinning bloodstained, Sa Bigang greets the surviving Ghost Shadow assassins and calls them by name. Number 7 lies broken and unconscious on the shattered pavement. Sa Begang mocks a defeated assassin, warning that prying into others' affairs leads to this fate, while another assassin cries out to his fallen comrade. Smiling, Sa Begang greets the Ghost Shadow Manor assassins as if they are old friends. An enraged assassin lunges from the bushes, cursing Sa Begang and drawing his sword. A commanding voice orders assassin number 5 to stand down. Hearing the order, the attacking assassin freezes in shock. The leader of the assassins appears behind Sa Begang as the halted attacker hesitates. The masked leader politely greets Instructor Sa Begang, surprised that their presence was already discovered. Sa Begang confirms his identity as the man they were tailing and assumes the one speaking is their leader. Sa Begang taunts the leader, asking if revealing himself to his surveillance target is really wise. The assassin leader dismisses the concern, saying that killing Sa Begang here would prevent any problems. Sa Begang laughs and asks if the leader is truly fine with that, wondering if he is not curious how Sa knows about them. The leader replies that they will find out soon enough, implying he intends to force the answer. He threatens to methodically cut off Sa Begang's limbs, launching a deadly sword strike. Pink sword beams converge on Sa Begang, who stands relaxed as his jug of liquor falls. Sa Begang casually raises a glowing blue hand to intercept the attacks. The technique he uses is named Mana Blade. Sa Begang whirls and slashes with arcs of blue mana, colliding with the assassin's red sword energy. Shards of shattered energy blades scatter through the air from their clash. With both combatants' eyes glowing, they exchange high-speed blows, Sa Begang dodging tightly. Sa Begang blocks a powerful overhead cut with his mana-covered palm, sparks and energy bursting out. While holding back the sword, Sa Begang tells the assassin he will not let him act freely. The assassin reacts with shocked silence, realizing his attack was stopped. Their red and blue energy waves continue to collide as Sa Begang counters with mana blade strikes. Sa Begang analyzes that though the enemy lacks the raw destructive power of AK Gujium, he is still formidable. He judges the assassin's style as fast, precise, and lethally accurate, each technique aiming at vital points. Sa Begang notes that the energy condensed in the assassin's sword is overwhelming and that barriers or constant parries with mana blade will not hold for long. Instead of being intimidated, Sa Begang becomes excited, feeling that this kind of fight suits him. The assassin suddenly disengages and retreats toward his men, sword still glowing. Facing Sa Begang again, he finds the situation strange and begins reassessing his opponent. The assassin says Sa Begang's power and style feel fundamentally different from orthodox martial arts. He concludes that such power could not be accidental, and wonders aloud if it is demonic arts. Sa Begang scoffs, saying demonic arts have not been seen since the demonic cult fell and accusing the assassin of spouting nonsense. He clarifies that his power is unrelated to demonic arts, though he admits it is not typical martial arts either. Realizing Sa Begang cannot be subdued easily, the leader decides to go all out despite having no personal grudge. He declares his intent to kill Sa Begang and activates Ghost Shadow Manor's full power at 100%, his body engulfed in green energy. Eyes blazing, he vows to dedicate everything to the Ghost Shadow Manor mission. He channels that mission-driven resolve into a green energy strike that slams into the ground before Sa Begang. Sa Begang widens his eyes, sensing the danger of the technique. Red energy gashes carve through nearby trees, showing the attack's cutting range. More slashes continue ripping into the tree, emphasizing its relentless nature. The technique is revealed as Soul-Destroying Stride, a movement art that fills the battlefield with lethal lines of energy. Text explains that Soul-Destroying Stride is an exclusive high-level movement technique. The assassin vanishes into blurring speed, his presence seemingly erased. The description adds that this art hides all presence and confuses the opponent through high-speed movement. Sa Begang braces with his mana blade, tense as the technique aims to exploit a moment of confusion. The assassin unleashes Ghost Soul Flash, a decisive surprise strike that cuts through where Sa Begang seemed to be. For an instant it appears Sa Begang's arm and shoulder are gruesomely slashed. Narrative clarifies that Ghost Soul Flash produces a strike too fast to even perceive. Blood spattered, the assassin looks grimly determined after landing what he believes is a fatal blow. Instead, the image of Sa being cut apart disperses in purple energy, revealing it was only an illusion. Sa Begang emerges amid the same purple aura, revealing his illusion technique that fooled the assassin. The assassin panics, realizing something is wrong just as Sa appears before him. Sa Begang smashes him into the ground with a powerful blue mana palm strike. The blow sends the leader flying and gouges a crater in the courtyard. A subordinate cries out in horror, calling for his injured superior. Coughing blood, the defeated leader gasps in disbelief, while Sa Begang remarks on their famed stealth skills. Activating his search ability, Sa Begang says he can see them as clearly as they despite their stealth. From Sa's perspective, the remaining men glow like heat signatures, exposing their positions. Looming over the wounded leader, Sa Begang proposes they now have a deeper conversation. The leader identifies Ghost Shadow Manor's lord as the same as the fallen Origin Sect's leader. Text introduces the Origin Sect as a mysterious group whose nature and goals are completely unknown. It explains that the Origin Sect never appeared at official events, leaving their alignment and aims shrouded in secrecy. The narration notes that their secrecy was such that when bloody tragedy struck them, almost no one in the martial world noticed. Decades ago, a massacre annihilated the sect's direct bloodline, including its leader, yet the wider Jianghu remained ignorant. Only those born and raised within the origin sect, utterly loyal, knew the true events. Those survivors re-emerged as Ghost Shadow Manor, dedicating themselves to gathering information across the Jianghu. Ghost Shadow Manor evolved into a top-tier mercenary organization taking on all manner of dangerous, dirty missions. Sa Begang states that all those missions ultimately serve one purpose: to restore the destroyed origin sect. The leader is stunned that Sa Begang knows their deepest, supposedly impossible to leak secret. Sa Begang says the sect's true history has never been revealed for decades, then bluntly offers them a deal of 2 missions. He promises that if Ghost Shadow Manor completes 2 tasks he assigns, he will give them information about the object they have pursued all this time. Enraged, the leader clenches his fist and accuses Sa Begang of daring to spout such nonsense. He shouts that they have spent 20 years scouring the Central Plains, clinging to a faint hope for their mission. In frustration, he demands if Sa Begang even understands what they have been searching for. He reveals their goal is to find the surviving blood of the origin sect. Sa Begang clarifies further that they seek a unique bloodline capable of fully inheriting the origin sect's martial arts, marked by a birthmark on the left wrist. The leader agrees, calling that bloodline the core of their sect's restoration and the reason for their long wandering. He is shaken that even within Ghost Shadow Manor only a select few know the secret, yet Sa Begang does, and Sa presses him to choose. Sa Begang lays out his ultimatum: accept the request and gain this precious information, or keep living as mere tailors or resume fighting. After a silent pause, the leader hangs his head, struggling with the decision. He then kneels and reaches for his sword, signaling submission before Sa Begang. Sa Begang looks on intently, reading the man's resolve. The leader firmly grips his sword hilt as a sign of his renewed determination. He finally states that he will accept the mission. However, he warns that if Sa Begang is deceiving them, he will retaliate with everything he has. Sa Begang smiles ominously at the threat, clearly confident in his position. He responds that it is good and proceeds to announce the first mission. Time passes to a moonlit night over the compound, transitioning to the mission setting. Inside an inn or hideout, members of the Black Scorpion gang lie massacred, moaning in their final moments. Amid the corpses, a woman pins down another gang member who begs her to stop. She suffocates him with a glowing purple hand over his face as he gasps and chokes. The woman, using sinister energy, continues crushing his head while he screams. She pauses and gazes down unemotionally at her victim. Narration identifies the man as MANHWA, destructive fist-fighting demon and vice leader of the Black Scorpion gang. The flashback reveals that a month earlier he had led his men here, murdering all the men and raping all the women. The assassin explains that surviving women hired her specifically to kill him in revenge. MANHWA realizes in panic that he suddenly cannot gather his internal energy. He wonders in terror why his internal energy is fading away as the woman drains him, finding it incomprehensible. He curses her and asks if she is not afraid of future consequences as the life drains from him. She mocks his attempt to introduce himself, saying she already identified him before, while he desperately begs her to wait. She finishes him with a final purple jab to the head. Looking down coldly, she reacts to his last dying groan. Standing over his bloody corpse, she sheathes her sword, her work complete. She exhales softly, the job clearly having demanded effort but now done. A carrier pigeon flutters by her window, catching her attention. She raises an arm and lets the pigeon land, recognizing it as a message bearer. Seeing the attached scroll, she realizes it carries her next commission. She opens and reads the new request with growing interest. The commission names Sa Begang, an instructor at Dragon Spring Academy, as the next target, or client. The scene shifts back to Dragon Spring Academy's buildings in daylight. A cadet practices sword swings with a wooden weapon, shouting as he does so. Sa Begang corrects the student's stance, telling him to relax, adjust his legs, and change his wrist angle. He then orders the exhausted cadet to repeat the movement 200 more times. When the cadet complains, Sa Begang chases him with his own wooden sword, scolding him for disrespect and backtalk. The cadet protests, pointing at another student, and asking why that boy is not being pushed as hard. That other student, Yun Wookyung, calmly practices alone on a platform with a wooden sword. Yun Wookyung quietly focuses and breathes, seemingly meditating with the weapon. Sa Begang claims Yun is doing fine on his own, while the complaining cadet argues he is just standing there doing nothing. Sa Begang tells the cadet Yun is on a different level and orders him to train harder instead of comparing himself. Sa Begang then grows thoughtful, watching Yun with a silent, appraising gaze. In his mind he encourages Yun Wookyung to ignore the original forms and pursue the swordsmanship that his own senses guide him to, trusting his genius talent. Another cadet hesitantly calls out to Sa Begang. Sa Begang asks if Dan Lijiang has completed his chi circulation, and the boy nervously admits he has not. Worried, Dan Lijiang asks if simply circulating chi as instructed will really fix his problem, and Sa Begang says only sufficient internal energy can do that. Sa Begang jokes that unless Dan has rare elixirs hidden away, there is no shortcut beyond training. He then tells Dan to keep circulating his chi whenever he is not eating or sleeping, and the boy reluctantly agrees. Sa Begang reflects that Dan is anxious because he knows he only beat Yun Wukyung previously through tricks. Accepting that Dan's issue cannot be solved quickly, Sa Begang turns his attention to more pressing concerns. He starts mentally reviewing his larger plans, wondering what has happened since his deal with Ghost Shadow Manor. 10 days later he recalls that discussion with the assassin leader and realizes no contact has yet arrived. He worries that lack of contact might hinder his plans, but is interrupted when someone calls his name. Sa Begang turns with irritation as someone addresses him again. Instructor Dung Byung appears, greeting Sa Begang and remarking that Sa does not seem happy to see him. Dung complains that Sa is not really busy with class and orders him to the main hall. Grumbling internally about what he saw previously, Dung nonetheless insists Sa go to the main hall immediately. Dung informs Sa Begang that Vice Academy Master Cheon Semyeon wants to see him. Cheon Semyeon welcomes Sa Begang and asks how things have been going. Sa Begang enthusiastically claims everything is going great, and that teaching such talented cadets makes him feel the value of being a senior instructor. He flatters Cheon, saying the excellent class is thanks to the vice master who assembled them, which clearly pleases Cheon. Cheon replies that he knows Sa is doing well but reminds him the academy belongs to the Orthodox Alliance. He says the alliance is concerned that someone so inexperienced has already become a senior instructor, implying scrutiny. A woman off-screen tells Sa Begang to be respectful as she enters the room. Cheon explains that the Orthodox Alliance has sent an inspector to support and monitor Sa Begang. The approaching inspector is shown from below, wearing a pink dress and heels as she walks in. Her figure is revealed as she strides confidently into the hall. The woman greets Sa Begang courteously. She introduces herself as Mei Xiaolin, an inspector dispatched by the Orthodox Alliance's inspection department. Sa Begang is momentarily stunned speechless by her appearance. Recovering, he apologizes for staring and says he was overwhelmed by her beauty, which she shyly accepts as a compliment. Afterward, Cheon Semyeon explains to Sa Begang that Inspector Mei Xiaolin is a prodigious female master of the Orthodox Alliance who reached the peak realm at an unusually young age. Mei Xiaolin cautions him to act prudently as a senior instructor and to stay respectful toward Inspector Mei. He laughs confidently and agrees enthusiastically. He narrows his eyes, growing serious. A cloaked man tells him he will now receive his first commission. The man asks if he knows the assassin called the soul-taking Celestial Maiden, startling him. He repeats the infamous assassin's title in his thoughts. He admits he knows of her but is unsure why she is being brought up. Narration explains the soul-taking Celestial Maiden is a lone contract killer with no ties, renowned for never failing a job. It is said her victims are found with their life force completely drained. Rumors also claim this assassin is an unparalleled beauty. He eagerly asks if his mission is to kill the soul-taking Celestial Maiden, but is told it is not. Instead, he is ordered to summon the soul-taking Celestial Maiden to Dragon's Spring Academy. He is confused as the instructor tells him to cancel the previous commission due to new circumstances. Narration states that from this follows an obvious consequence. His client slams the table, furious at the idea of canceling the job. The client rages about his irresponsibility, while the man apologizes and claims urgent business has arisen. He offers to introduce a more suitable person for the job and even pay the commission fee himself. He notes he has contacted the assassin several times before and agrees he can reach her. He questions why the instructor would provoke such a ruthless assassin who always finds a way to kill her target. The instructor jokingly asks if he is worried about him, saying he needs the promised information and cannot have him die early. The instructor admits she is indeed extremely dangerous. He thinks this very danger is precisely why he needs her. A close-up shows Mei Xiaolin's serene face, recalling her earlier warning. He smiles to himself, deciding he needs her help even more. The scene shifts to a dark, ominous fortress under swirling clouds. Chaos erupts around the fortress as demonic forces clash, and the sky burns. A massive blast strikes the fortress walls. A terrifying white-haired mage unleashes multicolored magical explosions in battle. The mage activates double casting, channeling lightning magic in both hands. He simultaneously fires Judgment Thunder and Void Cannon, devastating the battlefield. The mage hovers while magical circles surround him and explosions rock the fortress. He floats menacingly amid powerful magic circles, prepared for further attacks. A close-up shows his masked, toothy grin as his aura intensifies. A disembodied voice taunts him that he cannot be out of tricks yet. A gigantic fiery demon begins to rise. The demon fully manifests, its body composed of raging flames and armor. The mage is shocked that his consecutive 8th class spells have left the demon unharmed. The fiery demon commands him to struggle more or be executed at once. Enraged, the mage curses and prepares another overwhelming spell. Narration announces the spell Atomic Burst. He unleashes Atomic Burst in a massive beam toward the blazing demon. The demon gathers energy to counter the incoming blast. The clash of energies creates enormous expanding rings of fire. The mage stares wide-eyed at the overwhelming power below. He recognizes the chant as a 9th circle extreme destruction spell being neutralized. He realizes the attack is not vanishing but being absorbed by the demon. The demon compresses the absorbed energy in its flaming hand. A hexagonal barrier traps the mage as he cries out in pain. The barrier shatters as a beam pierces the mage's chest. His horrified face fills the frame as he is struck. The instructor jolts awake from this memory, gritting his teeth. He wakes up in bed, drenched in sweat and breathing heavily. He forces a strained smile through the lingering pain of the nightmare. He thinks to himself that no matter how many times he relives it, that memory remains terrible. The scene cuts to the peaceful Dragon Spring Academy buildings. Walking through the academy, he reflects that for now he has overcome his biggest obstacle. Narration explains that after returning, finding and securing Mei Xiaolan was a top priority in his overall plan. The problem was that he did not know her precise location during this period, but Cheon Semyung and Ghost Shadow Manor conveniently acted as he had expected. He recalls that even elite future powers like Dan Lijiang and Yun Wukyung are considered, in this era, among the strongest. Yet he believes even they cannot compare to Mei Xiaolan's abilities. He turns his thoughts to the next task just as he notices commotion among the trainees. The boys whisper in awe about a stunningly beautiful woman, comparing her to a fairy. Swords flash as a demonstration begins. Mei Xiaolan performs graceful sword forms in the courtyard, mesmerizing onlookers. Her light footwork propels her elegantly across the ground. She bends back in a flowing motion, trailing a pink arc of sword energy. She continues the sequence, spinning through the air with remarkable balance and control. She finishes a poised stance, framed by falling petals and her drawn sword. Multiple images show her seamless, dance-like swordplay from different angles. Her final landing is soft and precise. She sheathes her sword calmly as petals drift around her. She senses something and lowers her gaze thoughtfully. Her eyes widen slightly as she realizes she is being watched. She turns toward the columns where the instructor and trainees are peeking. The instructor, caught spying with the boys, looks confused and guilty. She greets him warmly, calling him Instructor Sabegang. She apologizes if her morning practice disturbed anyone, and he assures her it was excellent swordsmanship. He says it is convenient because he had hoped for a proper conversation with her, prompting him to ask if she meant him. She confirms and invites him to take a walk with her if he is willing. He silently considers the request. He agrees readily, addressing her as Inspector. Their feet step in unison as they begin walking together. He compliments her remarkable sword skills befitting a member of the Orthodox Alliance, but she modestly notes there are many stronger masters. He thinks to himself that she is shameless, since her inspector identity within the Alliance is actually a fabrication. She counters that he is the impressive one, surprising him. She mentions hearing he won a public duel with a single strike. She adds that he single-handedly defeated the feared Green Forest Alliance. She smiles, saying he sounds far more like a legendary master than she does. He internally notes she has already researched his background, but outwardly downplays it as mere luck from a recent fateful encounter. She disagrees, implying she does not believe it was just luck. She says the trainees praise him highly. She recounts that, though his training can be harsh, he earnestly helps students with their worries. A trainee testifies that he never discriminates by background and is a truly admirable instructor. He is touched that they think so and calls them good kids while Mei Xiaolan says there is more. She brings up his hands, asking about them. She explains that the calluses and muscles show years of non-stop weapon training. Narration describes over a decade of relentless practice without rest. It notes his hands have been torn and healed countless times to become what they are now. Mei Xiaolan tells him he should be proud not because of some lucky encounter but because he is a genuine martial artist. He silently stares at his scarred hand. She watches him, seeing the impact of her words. She studies him quietly, thinking. She starts to say that if she remembers correctly. She points out he has never properly explained that supposed miraculous encounter. She gently asks if he would tell her more about it. He agrees, saying he will be honest with her. He reveals that his power did not come from a miracle and that he only called it a fateful encounter because he had no better explanation. Hearing the name demonic spirit cult, Mei Xiaolan is shocked. He asks if she has ever heard of the demonic spirit cult. He begins confessing that something involving them happened to him recently. Mei Xiaolan grabs him and demands to know what he is and how he knows that name. She repeats the question more intensely, insisting to know why he recognizes the demonic spirit cult. He internally rejoices that she has taken the bait. Narration transitions to a history lesson set decades before the demon invasion. It explains that the powerful heavenly demon divine cult, known as the demonic cult, once existed. The cult worshipped the heavenly demon, valued strength above all, and rapidly expanded its power. The Orthodox Alliance saw them as a grave threat and declared them public enemy of the martial world. The resulting Orthodox demonic war became the largest conflict in Murim history. Many martial masters died, but eventually the Orthodox Alliance destroyed the demonic cult. Since then people believe the wicked cult was wiped out and peace established. However, narration clarifies that this belief is false. Survivors of the demonic cult secretly reorganized as the demonic spirit cult, unknown even to the Orthodox Alliance. Only those who have directly encountered the demonic spirit cult, like Mei Xiaolan, know of them, and she presses him on his connection. Startled by her aggression, he asks why she is reacting so strongly. He pleads for her to release him so he can explain everything. Realizing she overreacted, she apologizes for losing her composure. He says he is fine and shifts focus back to her suspiciously strong reaction. He points out that her response proves she already knew about the demonic spirit cult. She hesitates, addressing him by name. She admits the demonic spirit cult is extremely important to her. She demands a full, honest explanation of how he knows about them. He agrees and says he will tell her everything. He begins his story, saying it started right after he was appointed assistant instructor. He recalls wandering outside the academy late at night, frustrated that he still could not use inner energy. He then tells her he was suddenly kidnapped. He explains that he could not resist at the time and only remembers awakening before his captor. His captor, an eerie man, declared he would use him for a glorious revival instead of letting him die uselessly. Mei Xiaolin hears that this man called himself the demonic scholar. Her fist clenches in anger at that name. He describes being subjected to grotesque experiments. The demonic scholar forced him to ingest poisons and repeatedly operate on his internal organs. He demonstrates by conjuring a ball of fire as he continues. He says that one day he awoke abandoned in their hideout, and discovered he now possessed innate core energy instead of inner energy. He clarifies that innate core energy is no blessing. He explains that using it consumes his own life force. He admits the story is hard to believe but offers his lifeless meridians as proof if she checks his pulse. He reasons that, despite sounding absurd, she has no choice but to accept it. Even if the energy explanation seems dubious, his knowledge of the demonic spirit cult aligns with her own experience. He decides this is the perfect moment to push his point further. Smiling, he suggests that if she still doubts him, she can verify the truth with her own eyes. Mei Xiaolin bitterly recalls the place where she was tortured, experimented on, and then discarded. Sa Bigang notes that when he woke there everyone was gone but thinks the place may still hold clues. He adds that the location is too far to visit tonight. He proposes that if she agrees they should meet outside the academy tomorrow night. Sa Bigang internally decides he will personally guide her to that place. The narration reveals that everything he just told her is a complete fabrication. He admits he never met the demonic spirit cult in his past life and that his power is unrelated to innate core energy, being magic instead. He acknowledges that all of it was lies he devised to exploit her. He further reflects that he could craft those lies only because she had once confided her story to him. A flashback shows him screaming in agony while restrained in a grotesque experimental device. The memory expands to him being tortured by monstrous appendages in a lab, continuing to shriek. Alien researchers discuss his condition, noting that he initially rejected mana severely. They are surprised his tolerance keeps rising and remark that despite being weak in his home dimension his stats now rival other dimensional humans. One orders the magic output increased to just below lethal levels and the experiment resumes, eliciting more screams. Eventually his body is dumped outside and he crashes to the ground. Other captives rush over, cursing the monsters and fearing for his life. They lift his limp body and yell for him to wake up. He coughs up blood violently but manages to breathe. A fellow prisoner dryly notes, he survived despite expectations he would die that day. Sa Bigang grins and retorts that he thought the other man would be next to die. A woman prisoner identifies herself as Mei Xiaolin and comments that he still has some life left in him. Back in the present, Sa Bigang muses in the woods. He stands alone on a forest path, seemingly waiting. Hearing something, he turns his head sharply. He calls for whoever is hiding in the nearby bushes to come out. When nothing happens, he picks up a rock with clear intent to throw it. A panicked man bursts from hiding, shouting for him to wait. The man protests angrily as Sa Bigang drops the rock and chides him for not revealing himself sooner. Sa Bigang points out that the others left this subordinate behind to watch him, while the man grumbles about being stuck with the job, identified as Ghost Shadow Manor's host Shadow number 7. The subordinate hands Sa Bigang a green scroll, telling him to take it. Sa Bigang explains that inside is a map to a specific location and detailed instructions on what to do there. The scroll's second page is shown covered in strange characters he will need to copy. Sa Bigang describes the target as a cave disguised from the outside as an ordinary rock wall. He instructs that once inside, the subordinate must draw the strange characters over all the cave walls. Sa Bigang says the man will not understand the writing but must copy as many symbols as possible by dawn. The subordinate anxiously confirms that Sa Bigang really expects him to do this task. Sa Bigang casually answers in the affirmative. The subordinate loudly questions why he has to do such a bizarre chore. Sa Bigang gives him an ominous smile, wordlessly pressuring him. Cursing, the subordinate sprints off with the scroll while Sa Bigang cheerfully reminds him to finish by tomorrow morning. Sa Bigang reflects that although this decoy setup is hastily made, it only needs to look suspicious enough to deceive his targets. He concludes that once that is done, he can manipulate everything else to his advantage. Over a night view of the academy, he vows to steer events exactly as he wants. Vice Academy Master Cheon Semyong asks a hooded Mei Xiaolin how the investigation is going. She, referred to by her fearsome title, stands before him in her inspector role. Mei insists he call her simply Mei Xiaolin, saying her grand title annoys her, and he apologetically agrees. She then asks how the mission is progressing and whether they have learned anything about Sa Bigong's claimed fateful encounter. The memory shifts to Sa Bigong's earlier confession that his power did not come from a miracle, and was never something he wanted. Mei Xiaolin silently focuses, clearly recalling his words. She reports that she has no solid findings yet and needs more time to win his trust and gather genuine intelligence, while Cheon Semyong urges her to be thorough. Cheon Semyung states that Sa Begang is definitely hiding something and that all his recent actions look suspicious. He worries that if Sa Begang is a spy from some dark organization, he could endanger the Orthodox Alliance, while Mei Xiaolin says she does not care which sect he belongs to. She approaches his desk, starting to clarify her own stance, prompting him to ask what she means. Mei Xiaolin slams her sword into the desk in front of him, startling him. Leaning over the sword, she asks if she has authority to kill Sa Begang on the spot should he prove to have a dangerous agenda or backing. Inwardly, she resolves that she does not care if his story is a lie or a trap. She swears that if she discovers he has tried to trick her, she will torture every last piece of information from him and bleed him dry. The scene returns to the academy at dawn the next morning. Sa Begang is meditating shirtless, surrounded by a purplish aura. He concentrates on his middle energy core where his mana resides. He notes that this core improved slightly after absorbing a top-grade mana stone, but that he is still only around the level of a 6th circle mage. He calculates that at this strength he can probably face 1 or 2 peak-level martial masters and that, aside from one person, no one in the academy poses a true threat. He then turns his attention to his problematic lower energy core. Examining it, he feels inner energy present and sees no physical issues with vessels or meridians, yet no cultivation method can affect that core. He calls this the cursed constitution he was born with, something even Master Jean Beck said was unheard of. Ironically, he realizes this same constitution is what has kept him alive through everything. In flashback he recalls that with only basic martial skills he was captured instead of killed and used as an experiment because of this rare body. The memory shifts to Mei Xiaolin appearing as a fellow maimed captive in the lab. Back in the present, a voice interrupts his meditation, asking if he is cultivating energy. Host Shadow number 7 arrives, reporting he completed all the strange preparations overnight as ordered and complaining about the weirdness of the job. Sa Begang silently looks back at him. He then innocently asks what, exactly, he supposedly made the subordinate do. The subordinate is stunned speechless by this feigned ignorance. Later, as Sa Begang dresses, the man explodes in outrage over being tricked, while Sa Begang laughs it off as a joke and dismisses him with thanks. Sa Begang thinks to himself that now only one final step remains in his plan. A training hall is shown as activity begins under the morning sun. Students practice martial arts, shouting and exchanging blows. Sa Begang watches as 2 trainees spar intensely in front of him. He muses that his only task now is to show Mei Xiaolin the fake cult hideout cave and provide her with convincing false intelligence. He leads Mei Xiaolin to the rock wall concealing the cave, explaining that demons hid the entrance with a barrier that resembles demonic sorcery to martial artists. He reminds himself that the most important bait is information on the demonic spirit cult, which she has long sought without success, so she will have to pursue it even if suspicious. He turns away from her in the courtyard, ready to continue the ruse. Greeting her politely, he wishes the inspector good morning. Mei Xiaolin tersely declares that she will go. She clarifies that she means going to the place he described as being tied to the demonic spirit cult. Sa Begang resolves to feed her selective false intel from now on, fanning her desire for revenge, and agrees aloud to guide her there. He recalls setting the rendezvous for that night, and thinks of Mei Xiaolin as someone he can manipulate at will. The story cuts back to the alien world, showing the ominous fortress where the experiments took place. A different prisoner convulses and coughs blood, clearly in critical condition. Mei Xiaolin supports the man as a glowing purple core in his chest throbs and he gasps raggedly. Sa Begang desperately pounds on the door, shouting for help and calling it an emergency. He screams at the monsters that the man will die if they keep torturing him like this. A weary voice orders Sa Begang to stop. Mei Xiaolin sadly tells him it is already too late to save the dying prisoner. She gently covers the man's eyes as the energy core dims and he passes away. Sa Begang stands stunned, watching his comrade die. His expression twists with grief as he processes the loss. Guards then drag the corpse away by the legs, purple core still visible as blood trails behind. Sa Begang and Mei Xiaolin sit silently on the steps, staring at the bodies smear across the floor. Mei Xiaolin remarks that in the end they are the only 2 test subjects left alive. Sa Begang wonders aloud if they are the last martial artists anywhere or if other camps like this might exist with more survivors. A flash of hope imagines survivors fighting elsewhere in the desolate world. Mei Xiaolin bitterly says their life is miserable and that dying on the battlefield would have been better. She adds that this is not even the first time such tragedy has happened to her, referencing past hardships in Jianghu. Sa Begang asks in surprise if she has suffered like this before. She confirms it was the demonic spirit cult back then too, though she doubts he can truly grasp what that means. Time passes in silence in the wet purple-lit cell. Sa Begang asks about her mysterious ability to absorb energy, and whether it was a byproduct of the experiments, and she admits it is and that she has never told anyone else. He is amazed it also affects the monsters and that it originated from such grim circumstances. Sa Begang then asks if she ultimately failed to get her revenge, and she answers that, more precisely, she eventually gave up. She explains that for 10 years she could not find a single trace of the demonic spirit cult and realized they were an immense organization far beyond her reach. She asks Sa Begang if he knows why she volunteered to join the war. The look on her face precedes a deeper confession. Sa Begang listens intently, Taken aback by where the conversation is going, she reveals that while others fought to protect Jianghu from alien monsters, she had a different motivation. She confesses she is someone exhausted by life and too cowardly to kill herself, so she joined the war mainly to find a place to die. Continuing, she says she never expected to be slowly dying in a lab like this instead. Begang tells her not to give up. He urges her not to act as though everything is over yet because they are still alive. He vows that he refuses to die miserably here after all the years of struggling as a supposed cripple who could not use inner energy. He tells her that since they have come this far she should grit her teeth and endure, if they survive and escape the monsters. He promises that afterward they will hunt down the demonic spirit cult together and take revenge, offering his help. He asks if his words give her even a bit of hope. She smirks and teases that he is just a cripple incapable of using inner energy, questioning what he could really do. The narrative jumps back to present as rapid footsteps race along a dirt path. Begang flies through the air using magic, rushing toward the rendezvous. He complains that centuries-old memories keep resurfacing and attributes it to seeing Mei Xiaolin again after regression. He realizes that meeting her anew after turning back time is what stirred all these buried emotions. He forces himself to dismiss such feelings, insisting there is no room for pointless sentimentality. He reaffirms that his top priority is to secure Mei Xiaolin as a reliable piece in his strategic game. He notes that even she does not fully grasp her own power yet, but that her ability is crucial for breaking into the place called Tarant. Begang states he will not apologize or ask her to understand, accepting the ruthlessness of his choices. He races along the glowing magic circle in the forest, saying he has come too far to indulge in sentiment. Mei Xiaolin waits alone in the forest clearing at their meeting spot. She stands with arms crossed, alert and wary. She thinks to herself that she arrived well before the appointed time and has been scouting the area. She has searched thoroughly for traps or suspicious signs but found nothing unusual. She wonders if Begang set something up only at the cave location and, if not, what else might be going on. Her thoughts jump back to her own capture, and she speculates that Begang might also have been taken by the demonic spirit cult. Footsteps approach as Begang arrives behind her. She comments that he is also early, though she herself showed up ahead of schedule. Suddenly a burly, menacing man appears near her, suggesting danger. Mei Xiaolin's eyes narrow sharply as she reacts. A large hand lunges forward, signaling an imminent attack. The scene cuts to a peaceful snowy memory of parents watching a child play. The child laughs joyfully in the falling snow. She runs around excitedly, exclaiming about how cold and wonderful the snowfall is. Her parents watch with amusement and mild concern, warning her to be careful as she dashes about. The girl's foot catches on something hidden in the snow. She tumbles hard onto the ground, crying out in pain. As she sits up bruised and complaining that it hurts, a concerned adult approaches, saying this was exactly what they warned her about. A woman recalls someone gently urging her to get up before a harsh voice demands she wake up. Her eyes snap open in shock. She wakes tied up in a hall, facing a large, fur-clad bandit. The bald bandit leader looms over her menacingly. She remembers killing a man with her glowing, soul-draining hand as someone asks who she is. The bandit leader, Wai Sankak of the Black Death Sect, vows to avenge his brother she killed. Narration explains the Black Death Sect is infamous for brutal crimes like murder, abduction, and trafficking. It is revealed that the Black Death Sect's leader and vice leader were unexpectedly brothers. She berates herself for being careless enough to be caught when she would normally detect a pursuit. She wonders if the clue about the demonic spirit cult made her let her guard down, while Wai assumes she seduced his brother. Wai admits her martial arts exceeded expectations and that his men bled heavily because of her. Annoyed by his own long monologue, Wai calls it pointless babbling. She taunts him, asking if he wants to enjoy her like his dead brother did. She accuses him of having intended to capture and violate her from the start. Wai grins that she is right, saying he could have killed her already if he wanted. He says if the rumors about her were false he would have beheaded her immediately, yanking her hair. Delighted by her famed beauty, he declares he will enjoy heavenly pleasures with the soul-taking celestial maiden. As he speaks, he draws his ornate sword. Wai threatens to start his revenge by severing the hands that supposedly absorb inner energy. He describes a plan to let all his men violate her, then flay her piece by piece before killing her. He claims only such torture will let his brother rest in peace, while she calls his idea of revenge filthy. She curses that she thought these bandits would lead her to the demonic spirit cult but will instead die to beasts. Resigned, she thinks a bitter, well, to herself. She concludes this humiliating capture is a fitting end for an assassin blinded by revenge as Wai raises his weapon. The bandits cheer Wai on, shouting for him to cut her so they can join in the abuse. Before he can strike, a purple explosion tears through the men behind her. Both she and Wai turn wide-eyed toward the sudden disturbance. A bloodied young man wreathed in purple energy staggers forward, facing the surrounding thugs. Recognizing him as her instructor Begang, she stares in disbelief. Her eyes widen further as she senses his terrifying aura. Begang, drenched in blood and rage, unleashes overwhelming power. A bandit screams in confusion, demanding to know who this newcomer is as he swings at Begang. Begang activates a speed skill called Haste and blurs past his attacker. He seizes a man by the throat with a glowing purple hand. The man convulses in agony as Sa Begang's power courses through him. Sa Begang darkly remarks that the bandits almost erased his hundreds of years of experience. Crackling with blue lightning, he prepares a devastating counterattack. He uses lightning shock, electrocuting an enemy until his skeleton shows through. The remaining bandits stare in horror at their comrade's gruesome death. Hearing the screams, the captive woman looks around, stunned by the chaos. A charred, smoking corpse twitches on the floor, barely alive. Panicked bandits yell about a lightning bolt while Y furiously orders them to act. Y screams for everyone to kill Sa Begang at once. Sa Begang stands beside the ruined corpse, magic circle glowing ominously behind him. Using blink, he teleports with the corpse in tow, confusing his enemies. One bandit gasps in shock, sword in hand. Sa Begang suddenly appears behind that bandit, magic gathering at his fingers. He unleashes air bursts, firing a purple shockwave straight through the man. Weapons fly from bloody hands as bodies are blown away. Sa Begang skewers another thug with his glowing sword. He cuts down foes in a swift, violent arc, blood spraying. Breathing hard, he faces the remaining group as they close in. Surrounded by corpses, Sa Begang fully manifests his purple mana blade. The surviving bandits tremble and can barely speak. Overcome with fear, they scream and attempt to flee. Sa Begang flashes through them, slashing with glowing trails that rip men apart. Several bandits are sliced midair by his passing strike. More are dismembered and hurled away by the sweeping purple blade. A wide shot shows the slaughter as all remaining foes are cut down. Around the still-bound woman, dismembered bandits beg for mercy and die. She stares at Sa Begang, thinking wordlessly about him. She realizes that the terrifying mage who just destroyed the sect is the man she has been secretly observing for days. Her eye twitches in shock at this revelation. Back in the present, a surviving bandit warns his leader to watch out. Y charges Sa Begang, roaring that he will kill him. Y's eyes bulge in disbelief when his attack has no effect. He sees Sa Begang unharmed where he should have been cut down. Narration reveals Sa Begang used a defensive ability called Stone Skin to harden his body. Y stammers in panic, recognizing this as incredibly strong defensive energy. Sa Begang answers by smashing Y in the face with his golden guard. Y is sent flying in a bloody arc from Sa Begang's counterattack. Y crashes down, screaming in agony. Racked with purple light, he can barely breathe or speak. Sa Begang casts Graviton Press, summoning a weighty magic circle above Y. Consumed by fury, Sa Begang commands this pest to die. Ignoring Y's desperate plea to wait, he slams the crushing spell down. The shockwave from his attack blasts up through the roof and into the night sky. The rooftop collapses inward from the impact. In the courtyard crater, Sa Begang stands alone, surrounded by mangled corpses. He exhales, exhausted, purple energy slowly fading. Turning, he calls out to Sa Begang's former target, Inspector May. May, now free and armed with a dagger, readies herself as he faces her. She demands to know who he really is. He hesitates, face shadowed and expression unreadable. Then he suddenly brightens, cheerfully greeting her as Inspector May and saying he is glad she is safe. He babbles that he searched for her when she missed their rendezvous and boasts about his tracking skills. May silently raises her sword again, still suspicious. Sa Begang thinks grimly that the situation is bad. He realizes his attempt to control events using knowledge from before his regression has failed. He did not expect anyone to target Mei Xiaolin at this point in the timeline. He asks himself what to do next, insisting that abandoning Mei Xiaolin has never been an option. He explains that Mei Xiaolin is crucial and irreplaceable in the coming war against the Demon King. The Demon King Tarrant is introduced by name. Sa Begang recalls that Tarrant's most terrifying ability was a nullification barrier that made all attacks useless unless removed first. He knows Mei Xiaolin is the only one capable of removing that barrier. He outlines her power to absorb the inner energy of anyone she touches, noting she likely believes that is her limit. In truth, he says, her ability can absorb and erase any kind of conceptual power. To destroy Tarrant's barrier in time, she must drastically increase her strength. Accepting that his plans have gone off course, he tightens his grip on his sword. He decides he must subdue Mei by force for now. Mei shouts for him to stop. Sa Begang warns her not to move, threatening to kill her with a single twitch if she resists. Voices echo his name urgently in his memory. Mei, in the past, shakes a writhing Sa Begang, begging him to answer her. She watches in horror as his body convulses and cracks with fiery lines from overload. He screams as the alien energies inside him rip him apart. Observing through a screen, monster scientists comment on his incredible endurance. They agree he will eventually die because no human can withstand such mana. One monster says he does not care if Sa Begang dies since they have gathered enough experimental data. The other notes that allowing him to live could create a future threat, so killing him here is safer. Mei realizes the foreign powers injected into Sa Begang are violently rejecting each other, wondering if the monsters truly mean to kill him. As he gasps her name, she leans over him, confirming she is there. Barely conscious, he begs her to kill him. Mei is shaken by his request. He says he cannot bear the pain any longer. Mei angrily forbids that talk, reminding him of his earlier promise. She recalls that he once swore they would survive together and get revenge. She feels his consciousness slipping away and panics. She notes his body is deteriorating faster and faster. Cradling him, she pants in fear as his arm continues to crumble. A memory shows the two of them lying side by side after earlier torment. Another flashback shows him watching when she first noticed her strange power in her hand. She remembers him grinning and encouraging her, forming their bond. Back in the present, she lowers her gaze, weighed by that memory. She apologizes softly to Sa Begang. His eyes snap open in shock. Suddenly he awakens, surprised to find himself alive. Feeling inside, he realizes the clashing energies within him have completely vanished, and is baffled. Mei confirms it worked and expresses relief. While he asks what she did, he stares at her intently, realizing the cost. She begins to explain honestly. Mei reveals she was never sure the desperate gamble to save him would succeed. Sa Begang, trembling, yells at her. She collapses from weakness and tells him not to move since he was dying moments ago. She explains that after learning her power affected the monsters, she discovered she could absorb far more than she thought. She says she managed to absorb the alien energy but could not erase it because it was too strange. Joking bitterly, she wonders if things might have gone better had she realized sooner, while he calls her crazy for risking herself. She serenely accepts that she is about to die and asks why he is so upset. He slams the floor, demanding to know why she would sacrifice herself for him. She says it is because of what he once told her. She recalls him urging her not to give up and that a real man keeps his word. Sa Begang sobs that he only said that to keep her alive and never wanted this outcome. Mei tells him she never wanted things to end like this either. As her body dissolves into petals of light, she urges him to stay alive. She asks him to live on and remember, now and then, that there was once a foolish woman like her. Her final internal words say there is one last thing. Back in the present standoff, Sa Begang lowers his sword in front of Mei. He sighs heavily, conflicted. Mei stiffens and prepares to strike as he moves. Sa Begang calmly tells her not to be nervous, assuring her he has no intention of harming her. Xiaolin, holding a dagger to Sa Begang, doubts his story and demands to know how he found where she was imprisoned. She questions the bizarre powers he used, wondering if they are even martial arts and scoffing at his mention of core energy. She accuses him of lying about the demonic spirit cult from the start. Pointing the dagger, she yells for the truth and demands to know his real identity. Sa Begang says that even if he answered now, she would not believe him. Instead of explaining himself, he offers to tell her what he can do for her, leaving her confused. He begins listing conditions, starting with the first. First, he offers to help her take revenge on the demonic spirit cult. Second, he promises to greatly strengthen her martial arts and absorption ability, shocking her. Third, he vows to personally protect her from any threats like the one they just faced. In exchange, he says he has only one request. His request is that she remain at Dragon Spring Academy and stay by his side. She hesitates, still gripping her dagger, processing his proposal. From a distance she incredulously repeats his request to stay by his side, calling it nonsense. She suspiciously asks if he is trying to make her his mistress. He flatly denies any ulterior motive, and says he means the request literally. He explains that her making enemies and dying here would cause him trouble, which infuriates her. She imagines he will try to tame her if she stays, calls him a pervert, and claims she would rather die. He asks if she is really willing to die and reminds her that her parents would grieve. Hearing him use her childhood name Laman, she is stunned. A memory surfaces of her as an infant being examined by a master. Her worried parents ask the master what is wrong with their baby daughter. The master says her health is fine but hints at something more. He reveals the child was born with an extremely difficult and fated destiny, shocking the parents. The master then asks if they have named the child yet, and they admit they have not. He tells them to name her Xiaolin, explaining that names hold power and this one will help her endure harsh trials like winter. Later, a young Xiaolin angrily calls her parents idiots for believing that ominous story. Her parents say they do not take it literally but admit they worried and discussed it after the Taoist left. They explain that though her official name was fixed, they chose a brighter nickname for her while she was young. Her mother says that is how she came to be called Longlon, meaning shining orchid, hoping she would bloom warmly before life's winters. Xiaolin protests emotionally, telling her mother not to speak as if hardship is inevitable. The young girl vows cheerfully to handle whatever happens so her parents need not worry. That promise is juxtaposed with her startled reaction in the present. Another flashback shows her childhood home burning while her parents lie dead on the ground. She crawls toward their bodies, calling out to her mom and dad. A black-clad cultist approaches the crying girl, recognizing her unique constitution. He confirms her full name, Mei Xiaolin, as she cowers. The cultist says she would have lived and died unnoticed but will instead serve the Great Resurrection, calling it an honor. Returning to the present, her dagger stops just short of Sa Begang's face. She demands to know what he is and how he knows her childhood name. She screams that only her family knew that name. Sa Begang faces the dagger calmly. He tells her he still cannot explain because she would not believe him anyway, and gently pushes the dagger aside. He says he has already told her everything he can and the rest is for her to judge, as she winces from the clash. He turns away in silence, exhaling. With his back still turned, he insists his earlier promise was sincere and tells her to think it over. He leaves the hall while Xiaolin remains inside, conflicted but not attacking again. She watches him go, sweat on her cheek as she silently weighs his words. Scenes from their interactions, her thanking him and him laughing, flash through her mind. She recalls his panic and past incidents. She remembers his furious, battle-stained face. She also recalls him reaching out his hand the previous night. Clenching her sword hilt, she wonders what he really is and what just happened. The scene shifts to an exterior view of Dragon Spring Academy. Inside another room, a masked man in black gear waits casually on a table. Hearing something, the masked man stiffens, alerted. Sa Begang enters. The man angrily asks where he slipped off to and how he bypassed the watch. He begins to ask if Sa Begang at least checked on the task assigned earlier, then freezes as he sees Begung's state. Begung's eye glows red with barely restrained rage, terrifying the man. The masked subordinate hastily retreats, saying Begang looks exhausted and they will talk later, while Begang stays silent. Begang takes a step, still seething. Exhausted, he finally collapses backward onto his bed. The next day, cadets train by striking wooden posts under the sun. They continue their vigorous practice. Sa Begang stands observing them from behind. He assumes Xiaolin has left, reasoning it would be natural since he seems suspicious despite her grudge against the demonic spirit cult. Narration notes that beyond her hatred for the cult, there are too many questionable things about him for her to ignore. He concludes she would not take his words at face value and would instead back off and investigate on her own, just as he would. He scolds himself internally, asking if he will ruin a centuries-long plan just for a personal grudge. Deciding he must find her quickly, he is interrupted by a cadet approaching mid-practice. The cadet cheerfully calls out to him as inspector. Turning, he sees that Xiaolin has in fact returned to the training ground. Xiaolin greets Soso and wishes her good morning. She then politely asks Instructor Sa for a moment of his time despite interrupting class. Sa Begang catches himself almost saying her true name, then corrects himself to address her as inspector. Meanwhile the 4 cadets, including Soso, are meditating with green energy circulating around them. Watching them from behind, Sa Begang tells Xiaolin to give him her hand. She hesitantly places her glowing hand in his. By sensing her, she confirms he has no inner energy in his meridians and therefore truly cannot use martial arts, prompting him to ask if she believes him now. She refuses, saying after so many lies she will not trust him just because of this proof and accuses him of deceiving her from their first meeting. Sa Begang admits even asking her to investigate his past was deliberate, and she accuses him of approaching her only to use her. She says he knows her identity, motives, and past so thoroughly that she wants to torture the truth out of him. Yet knowing he will never willingly reveal everything, she decides to let him deceive her one last time. She admits she thought of leaving because trusting a swindler like him makes no sense. However, she insists there's one promise he absolutely must keep, helping her get revenge on the demonic spirit cult. She warns that if that promise is also a lie, she will kill him with her own hands. He smiles faintly and promises to fulfill that revenge. His inward resolve states that he will ensure her desired revenge comes true. She quietly reflects on his words. Xiaolin grumbles that if he had not said that final emotional line last night, her decision would have been easier. She explains that she spent all night wondering how he knew her childhood name, a secret she never shared with anyone, not even the cult. Sa Begang looks sideways at her, listening. A parallel scene shows the tortured cult captive telling Xiaolin about her own childhood name. The captive woman explains that as a child her parents gave her another name, and reminisces about that brief happiness. She reveals that name was Lanan, meaning shining orchid. She tells Xiaolin that the name oddly suits her now and urges her to remember this moment. She continues, asking Xiaolin to remember not just the pain and sorrow but also small bits of happiness. Back in the present, Sa Begang smirks slightly, keeping his secrets. His narration repeats that he has already told her she would not believe his explanation anyway. The viewpoint shifts to Soso, who introduces herself as a first-year cadet of Dragon Spring Academy. Soso narrates that she is currently facing the greatest trial of her life. She adds that this crisis affects not only her but the fate of their entire class. Her classmates aggressively demand that she explain everything without omissions, warning of consequences if she lies. Soso gulps as the stern mock Danhwa and others stare her down. Danhwa warns her not to hide anything and to describe everything in detail. Danhwa threatens that if their class disgraces Dragon Spring Academy, she will report them to the clan elders for punishment. Soso narrates that Danhwa is a cadet from the prestigious Sword Flash Mock clan in the Flying Dragon class, the Academy's elite. She explains that the Mock clan heavily sponsors the Academy, so a bad report from Danhwa could even get their entire class disbanded. Fired up, Soso vows internally to prove Sa Begang's strength and their class's worth and to protect them from the Sword Flash Mock clan. She begins demonstrating martial techniques with focused punches. She follows with sharp palm strikes. A sequence shows Soso unleashing her full routine of kicks, strikes, and movements. Her final stomp cracks the ground. She concentrates and channels energy between her hands, shouting as she releases it. Xiaolin praises that Soso's stance has become much more stable. Xiaolin gently critiques that Soso strained too much when unleashing her form and should move more flexibly. Soso narrates that this inspector is Mei Xiaolin and that it has been about 2 weeks since she arrived at the academy. Soso recalls that she initially worried because Xiaolin came to monitor their class, but discovered she was kind and gentle, and felt relieved. Sa Begang calls everyone to gather for an important announcement. He unfurls a banner labeled SPC in front of them. He declares that from now on their group will be known as SPC. He explains that SPC stands for Special Purpose Class, a group with a unique mission no other cadets can undertake. A cadet asks what that special mission actually is. Sa-Begang dramatically answers that their mission is to defend the Central Plains Murim. Soso introduces Sa-Begang as their homeroom instructor, usually a cool and respectable teacher despite his eccentricities. She recounts that he used to be infamous for being unable to use inner energy at all. But about a month earlier, he stunned everyone during a public sparring match by suddenly displaying powerful energy techniques, quickly passing the promotion exam and becoming their mentor. She says he claims to have had a fateful encounter and sometimes feels like a completely different person, but since his change benefits everyone, she sees it as a blessing. Manhwa cuts off Soso's romantic digressions, saying no one asked about Instructor's flirting, while Soso protests she was only following orders to be detailed. Xiaolin confronts Sa-Begang, criticizing him for telling trainees they are responsible for Murim's defense as if it were a game, but he insists he is serious. Soso narrates that although Xiaolin and Sa-Begang were formal at first, they now bicker frequently, suggesting a growing familiarity. She wonders if the inspector is becoming dissatisfied with the instructor, then senses it feels like something else. She concludes it is more like a wall between them has broken down as they argue more casually. Curious, Soso's classmate imagines and questions what exactly happened between those two, then yells at Soso to stop digressing. The senior cadet complains Soso is telling too many unnecessary stories about the instructor's flirting, while Soso insists she was just being thorough. When asked who she should really talk about, Manhwa immediately answers that she wants to hear about Yun Wukyung. Manhwa says to forget the others and demands detailed information specifically on Yun Wukyung's condition. Startled, Soso agrees, internally wondering why Manhwa only cares about him. She narrates that Yun Wukyung originally refused to transfer to their class but, after losing a bet in a public match with the instructor, chose to stay of his own will. She adds that in truth there is not that much to say about him personally. Soso notes that from the beginning Wukyung has never received the same training as the rest of them. Manhwa reacts sharply, worried by that statement. Soso panics as Manhwa assumes the instructor might be neglecting Wukyung, and she frantically denies it. Soso explains that while the rest did basic drills, she often saw Wukyung directly sparring with instructor Sa-Begang. She emphasizes that, to her knowledge, Wukyung is the only cadet who has ever crossed swords with the instructor. She adds that most of the time he simply stands silently before the wooden dummies, but Begang has strictly told them not to disturb him. She insists again that he is not being neglected. Manhwa instead asks whether Wukyung himself is satisfied with such treatment. Soso admits she is not sure but says he does not seem particularly dissatisfied. Manhwa listens in thoughtful silence, her expression softening as she processes this information. The hostile instructors end their interrogation, warn the girl to stay silent, and leave while threatening to keep an eye on her. Once they are gone, the girl stands alone, stunned by what just happened. Realizing she is safe, she erupts into joyous celebration. She probably thinks she has protected SPC, then later learns Manhwa and Yun Wukyung were already childhood fiancés, considering the matter resolved. Night falls over the academy's buildings. Dark, smoky energy starts moving stealthily across the rooftop. A masked assassin materializes from the shadows on the roof. A voice unexpectedly greets him, calling him number one, making him tense up. He turns to see Sa-Begang waiting calmly on the rooftop behind him. Admitting surprise, the assassin praises Sa-Begang for detecting his fully powered concealment technique. Sa-Begang reminds him that stealth arts do not work on him. Sa-Begang notes that number one came directly to him, and asks if this means the assigned mission is complete. About to complain if the visit is trivial, Sa-Begang grabs a small bottle from the assassin. He looks closely, suddenly alarmed by what he sees. Inside the bottle is a strange glowing insect resembling a mantis. Number one explains this creature relates to Sa-Begang's second commission request. Reporting his findings, number one says the location seems to lie between Hubei and Chongqing in a remote, grotesquely warped environment matching Sa-Begang's conditions. He recalls that although the search area was vast, they surprisingly found the place sooner than expected. His team discovered an impossibly abnormal forest of bizarre plants that could not be overlooked. The narration lingers on a monstrous, tumor-covered tree-like mass within that area. Number one asks what that place and its horrific eye-sprouting creatures actually are. Sa-Begang silently studies the bottle, shaken. He thinks that even if he explained the truth, number one would not believe him. He concludes for himself that these entities are essentially harbingers of impending catastrophe. Sa-Begang reflects that a full-scale invasion by the demon race will occur 10 years in the future and that, in hindsight, its signs appeared long beforehand. He remembers that 4 to 5 years before the invasion, unknown mutant plants and animals began appearing in the Central Plains. 2 years before the invasion, warped beasts started attacking humans. Half a year before the invasion, people were struck by mysterious, incurable illnesses. He now knows all these phenomena were orchestrated by the demons. The demons scattered condensed mana objects across the land, terraforming the environment into terrain advantageous to them. That large-scale environmental transformation tactic is visually depicted in engulfing cities. Sa-Begang notes that this terraforming is a named strategy he only learned about later after becoming enslaved by the demons. Reasoning from that knowledge, he considers the city where the first and largest dimensional gate opened in the Central Plains. He recalls that during the invasion an entire city there was wiped out in a day when the largest gate appeared in Hubei, so traces of terraforming should already exist. What began as a hypothesis for him is now confirmed. Looking at the smashed insect in his hand, he concludes that the Central Plains are already slowly being polluted by demonic influence. He resolves to personally investigate the demonic zone and devise countermeasures, then praises Number 1 for his work. Sa Begang tells Number 1 the detailed information will be sent via a subordinate in a few days and asks for patience. As they walk, Sa Begang addresses him by name, Sa Begang being the other man's instructor. Number 1 demands to know Sa Begang's true identity, what he knows, and what he is hiding. Pressing further, he asks what Sa Begang's real objective is. Sa Begang sighs and repeats that revealing the truth now would not be believed, so there is no need to hurry. He promises that when the time is right, he will reveal everything in full detail whether they want to hear it or not. Sa Begang silently contemplates his next move. He decides he should start preparing to leave the academy he despises. Standing on a rooftop, he surveys the academy grounds he intends to depart. The scene shifts to a sunny day over the academy buildings. Inside, the Vice Academy Master begins a discussion with Instructor Dung while writing. They review the progress of selecting top cadets to send to the upcoming Heavenly Martial Tournament. The Vice Academy Master lists likely candidates from various classes and asks if Cadet Yun Wukyung still refuses to join. Instructor Dung reports that Yun Wukyung again rejected participation, saying it would hinder his training. The Vice Academy Master grumbles about arrogant young masters but concedes that Li Bigyum, though less gifted than Yun, is still highly talented. He orders that the selection be carried out as strictly as possible because the tournament is the Academy's most important external event. The narration introduces the Heavenly Martial Tournament by name. It explains the tournament is hosted by the Orthodox alliance between 3 great academies, where elite cadets compete in martial skill. The results of this tournament determine how each academy is evaluated by the outside world. Instructor Dung worries whether they can decide everything themselves, since authority over the selection originally belonged to someone else, but is told not to fret. The Vice Academy Master notes that the Sword Demon, the one who once held that authority, has no interest in external events and has secluded himself for 2 years. Accepting that explanation, Instructor Dung relaxes just as someone bursts in loudly. Sa Begang barges into the room, startling them with what they view as rude behavior. Sa Begang cheerfully greets the instructors, saying he has an important proposal as a senior instructor. He announces that he and his own cadets should be the ones to participate in the upcoming Heavenly Martial Tournament. The Vice Academy Master slams the table and denounces Sa Begang's suggestion as madness. Furious, he insists such a proposal will never be allowed, while Sa Begang counters that winning should resolve everything. The Vice Academy Master angrily reminds him the tournament is a prestigious event attended by high-ranking Orthodox martial artists, not a casual exchange. He declares they cannot send a brat like Sa Begang, prompting Sa Begang to wryly repeat the insult. Sa Begang turns to Instructor Dung, confirming he is the originally assigned escort instructor. He then questions whether Dung truly believes he is qualified for that responsibility. Sa Begang privately scorns Dung as skillless and oblivious. Smiling coldly, he calls Dung an overproud, outdated fossil who should step aside for the younger generation. Dung explodes in rage, demanding Sa Begang repeat what he just said. Shaking with anger, Dung asks the Vice Academy Master if he is expected to tolerate such humiliation. The Vice Academy Master tries to calm him, calling Sa Begang an unqualified brat, while Sa Begang mockingly expresses fake regret. Sa Begang remarks that he thought a martial artist's worth was measured by skill, not excuses, further provoking Dung. Dung shouts for Sa Begang to come outside so he can beat him for his insolent mouth. Sa Begang inwardly celebrates, thinking this outraged response is exactly what he wanted. He plans that publicly defeating Dung will embarrass Cheon Semyang and allow him to seize control of the tournament delegation. He also notes that the tournament, held at White Martial Academy in Shanxi, lies near the demonic zone, so the trip can double as an investigation. Examining a map, he calculates that the journey from Dragon Spring Academy will take a month and can be detoured through the demonic area discovered by Number 1. He admits he could travel faster alone but wants to bring his cadets because he has additional objectives. He resolves that if Cheon Semyang keeps blocking him even after Dung's defeat, he will expose Cheon's corruption. Suddenly sensing someone approaching, Sa Begang looks shocked. A dark, oppressive presence descends from above, intensifying the atmosphere around him. Dung, still heated, loudly accepts Sa Begang's challenge and prepares to fight. Sa Begang turns toward the entrance, his focus shifting to the new arrival. The Vice Academy Master is bewildered as Sa Begang abruptly changes his demeanor. Sa Begang activates his purple eye ability, bracing himself. Footsteps echo as another person walks toward the hall. The newcomer enters, saying it has been a while and that he overheard an amusing conversation. Sa Begang watches warily as the man approaches. The arrival, a rugged swordsman with a topknot, repeats Sa Begang's earlier line about martial worth being based on martial arts skills. Laughing heartily, he affirms that true martial artists should have such spirit. He grins at Sa Begang, saying the younger man lives up to his reputation and that he likes him. The Vice Academy Master and Instructor Dung react in shock at this man's sudden appearance. The man introduces himself as Sang Pilji, Dragon Spring Academy's most senior swordsmanship instructor and acting academy master, greeting the two instructors. Instructor Cheon nervously asks why Sang Pilji has come, clearly intimidated. Sang Pilji retorts by asking if there is any part of the academy he is forbidden to enter, forcing Cheon to hastily deny it. Cheon thinks to himself that he should be the one asking why this reclusive swordsman has suddenly appeared, while Sang Pilji casually tells them to relax. Cheon reflects that Sang Pilji cares nothing for teaching cadets and is solely obsessed with honing his own swordsmanship. Sa Began concludes internally that whatever else is uncertain, this man is a single-minded martial arts fanatic. The narrator recognizes the visiting martial artist as the strongest he has met since regressing, and the man casually says he came out for fresh air and to investigate academy rumors. The narrator recalls hearing something. The visitor repeats that they had been talking about entering the Heavenly Martial Tournament, and confirms it with the nervous instructor. The young instructor thinks the man barged in making demands while he listens in silence. The instructor confirms that he intends to represent the academy in the Heavenly Martial Tournament, not merely as a supervisor. He adds that he wants to personally choose the cadets who will participate, which the visitor laughs off as bold nonsense. The visitor challenges him, asking if his cadets are really stronger than the academy's top elites. The instructor calmly answers that they are. The visitor smirks in response. He points out that the instructor has only been at the academy for a short time and calls his insistence on entering such an important tournament unreasonable, which the others eagerly agree with. However, he concedes that the idea of martial skill being the true qualification has some validity. Ignoring the shocked protests of another instructor, he proposes a way to settle the matter. He declares there will be a public martial arts competition where the originally chosen tournament representatives will fight the cadets the new instructor wants to send, and the winners will become the official representatives. He asks instructor Sa Begang if this arrangement does not sound fun. Sa Begang, eyes burning with confidence, says that if they were nominated they must be worthy. He implies that the selected cadets must be exceptional talents, though the memory of them being beaten up undercuts that claim. A composed cadet is shown wielding a wooden sword surrounded by blue aura. Another cadet calmly cultivates with green energy around him. News of the sudden martial tournament causes an uproar across the academy. Sa Begung's cadets exclaim that they have to fight the academy's representatives in preliminary matches and are shocked by the sudden announcement. Scratching his head, Sa Begang says things just turned out that way. The cadets complain that he entered them into the Heavenly Martial Tournament without consulting them, while he calls them ungrateful and claims he is broadening their horizons. Another instructor confronts Sa Begang, saying this is not the first time he has made plans without discussing them. The woman in pink insists they first hear his reason for suddenly entering their class into the Heavenly Martial Tournament. Sa Begang theatrically answers that he wants to show his beloved cadets the wider world beyond this academy he disparages, prompting her to question him for insulting their own school. As Sa Begang criticizes the academy's rigid, low-quality training, one cadet cuts in and tells him to stop rambling. That cadet then asks if the match brackets for the competition have been set. Sa Begang calls him insolent but confirms he has just fetched the bracket scroll. Unrolling it, he begins to read out the first matchup. He announces that Yong Jaryong from the Special Purpose class is first to be called. Jaryong learns his opponent is Sang Chojun of the Ferocious Tiger class, another first year, and reacts with horror. Seeing his distress, Sa Begang asks if he knows this opponent. A classmate explains that Sang Chojun used to be in their class. The narration reveals that Jaryong repeatedly challenged Sang Chojun to spars in the past and was completely defeated each time, despite Jaryong's embarrassed protests. The friend reminds Jaryong he never once beat Sang Chojun, and Jaryong begrudgingly admits it while Sa Begang clicks his tongue. Sa Begang scolds Jaryong to at least win occasionally if he keeps charging at people, then calls the next name, Joe Muntak, while the others laugh at Jaryong's embarrassment. Muntak hears that his opponent will be Mok Danhwa from the Flying Dragon class and panics. Collapsing onto his desk, Muntak despairs at facing Mok Danhwa, while Sa Begang struggles to recall who that is, saying the name sounds familiar. A cadet explains that Mok Danhwa is the eldest daughter of the renowned Mok clan of swordsmen, rivaling the Yun clan, and reminds Sa Begang she once appeared during transfer announcements only to refuse joining their class. Little Soso eagerly volunteers, saying Danhwa is her friend and she can mediate, but Sa Begang replies that Danhwa is not actually her opponent. Reading further, he reveals Soso's matches against Huang Ji, a second year from the Ferocious Tiger class, whom Soso recognizes as a senior connected to a famous escort agency. Sa Begang adds that Huang Ji is also related to Instructor Dung Buyung, so he dismisses the boy as guaranteed trash and moves on. He then announces that Yun Wukyung's opponent will be revealed next. The bracket names Lee Bigyum, a third year from the Flying Dragon class, causing a tense reaction. The class turns to look at Bigyum, who appears puzzled as Sa Begang holds the bracket. Sa Begang questions their reaction, while a cadet asks if he truly does not know who Lee Bigyum is. They explain that Bigyum is the top student among all third years. Sa Begang says of course he knows that, and wonders why this makes everyone so nervous. Another cadet says Bigyum's reputation involves more than just being top of his year. The cadet elaborates that Bigyam is also vice master of the Lotus Sword Hall, a sword hall founded by a collateral branch of the Yun clan, meaning he and Wukyung have a fraught clan relationship. Sa Begang, smiling keenly, then asks Wukyung whether this rival is actually stronger than him. The instructor smirks confidently as he prepares to announce the final matchups. An unseen speaker says their knowledge is limited but satisfactory as ominous laughter fills the room. The instructor calls the last student, Dan Lijung, who nervously but loudly answers. The instructor begins to reveal who Dan Lijung will face. Dan Lijung learns his opponent is Gok Bo-Kei, a former classmate from the Camellia class. Dan Lijung is shocked that his opponent is Gok Bo-Kei, whom the instructor recalls having previously beaten up. The instructor explains that Gok Bo-Kei personally insisted on being matched against Dan Lijung, enraging Dan's fellow disciples despair, fearing they will be humiliated before the whole academy. Their instructor suddenly appears behind them, placing his hands on their shoulders. He reassures his disciples that he will not sit by and let them embarrass themselves. He warns them that improvement requires enduring pain and hardship. He announces they have 1 week until the tournament and must train more intensely than usual. One disciple timidly claims he does not care about winning and would rather avoid extra training. The instructor menacingly asks who requested his opinion. Under the instructor's watchful eye, the disciples scream while doing brutal weighted squats. He declares that for the next week their basic training intensity will triple as part of special training. Nung Soso asks what training she will receive. The instructor assigns Soso to be personally trained by the glamorous inspector, who protests the decision. Another cadet, Yun Wukyung, says he will continue training alone as usual, and the instructor agrees to trust him. Dan Lijung hesitantly calls out to the instructor. Dan asks if he will also receive special training, but the instructor tells him to keep focusing solely on breathing cultivation. Dan complains that he wants new techniques, yet the instructor insists that cultivation is the fastest way to grow stronger. Seeing Dan's persistence, the instructor guesses it is because his upcoming opponent is Gok Bo-Kei. The instructor reminds Dan he already defeated Yun Wukyung before and should not get agitated over nothing. Before leaving, the instructor asks Inspector May to keep an eye on the 2 disciples suffering through the training. When asked where he is going, the instructor says he needs to step out briefly. He tells the inspector to invent an excuse for his absence, as he slips away with a mysterious aura. Inspector May realizes he only kept her close to dump errands on her while Soso eagerly asks about her training. Night falls over the academy. Dan Lijung sits cross-legged, concentrating blue energy in his hands as he cultivates. He continues meditating in the courtyard, surrounded by swirling blue chi. Dan finishes the session, exhaling as frost-like breath escapes in the cold night. He remembers the instructor's words about not overreacting because he already beat Yun Wukyung, then rejects that reasoning. Dan admits to himself he now understands there was a specific reason he beat Yun Wukyung before. He recalls that victory was only possible because the instructor had perfectly reproduced Yun Wukyung's sword path for him to study beforehand. Dan concludes that if they fought again, he could not defeat Yun Wukyung no matter how hard he tried. He acknowledges his inner energy has improved but feels his progress is already slowing. He reflects that despite only a week remaining, he must fight in front of everyone. His thoughts dwell on being publicly exposed, picturing the crowd and his opponent. He focuses on Gok Bo-Kei's imposing figure, imagining the looming confrontation. Dan frets about having to fight Gok Bo-Kei in the upcoming match. He doubts whether his current strength is enough to defeat Gok Bo-Kei. Hearing a sudden noise from a nearby hall, he turns toward it. Curious who is making noise so late, he peeks through the door. Inside he spies a fierce Gok Bo-Kei relentlessly striking a wooden training dummy. Gok Bo-Kei, drenched in sweat, continues hammering the dummy with fierce determination. Dan is horrified to realize the intense trainee is indeed Gok Bo-Kei. Gok Bo-Kei senses something and looks around, hearing a sound. He turns toward the open doorway but sees no one there. Dan hides by the door, covering his mouth as he tries not to be noticed. Shaken, he wonders why Gok Bo-Kei is training so late at night. Dan convinces himself he misidentified the person and blames his cultivation practice for confusing him. Unaware Gok is glaring from behind the door. Dan's terrified scream echoes across the academy. Gok Bo-Kei confronts Dan in the courtyard, scolding him for screaming as if he did something impressive. Gok Bo-Kei derides Dan as a rat spying on another's training and his status as the escort agency heir is introduced. Dan nervously asks why Gok Bo-Kei is out training so late at night. Gok Bo-Kei angrily misinterprets the question as criticism of his right to train. Dan starts to object but is too afraid to finish his sentence. Gok Bo-Kei recalls that when they were classmates Dan never trained seriously and mocks his current tone. He berates Dan for daring to talk back and swings his wrapped fist toward him. Dan trembles and shields himself from the incoming blow. Gok Bo-Kei pauses mid-punch, staring silently at Dan. He clicks his tongue in irritation and withdraws his fist. Gok Bo-Kei declares that beating Dan senseless now would be meaningless. Walking away, Gok Bo-Kei orders Dan to get lost and vows to smash him publicly in a week. Dan is left stunned by the unexpected reprieve. He wonders if Gok Bo-Kei is really letting him go without further beating and doubts this is the same person. Relieved but confused, Dan admits he feels unexpectedly comforted by being spared. That relief suddenly shocks him as he realizes what it implies. He questions himself for feeling relieved at avoiding a fight. Dan recalls cowering under Gok Bo-K's fist moments earlier. He recognizes that he was glad Gok Bo-K did not beat him up, which disgusts him. Clenching his trembling fist around a weapon, he steels his resolve. He decides he cannot accept his current cowardice and must change. The next day, Yong Jaryang trains furiously with a wooden sword while others watch. Jaryang charges forward screaming, attacking in desperation. He is struck hard in the face during the spar. Reeling, he staggers but tries to continue fighting. A contemptuous inner voice dismisses his efforts as laughable. His green-haired opponent taunts that he expected Jaryang to be a hidden master for daring to challenge him. The opponent easily overwhelms Jaryang in a flurry of blows, calling his own earlier caution pathetic. Jaryang drops to one knee, groaning in pain while his opponent mocks him. The green-haired fighter laughs that Jaryang attacked as if to kill him, yet now he looks like the villain. He ridicules Jaryang's poor skills and questions why someone so weak would challenge him. Bystanders gossip that Jaryang was foolish to spar with such a strong opponent after his family was insulted. The green-haired bully sneers that everything he said about Jaryang's family being idiots was true. Enraged, Jaryang screams for him to shut up and launches another attack. He rushes in wildly again, but the opponent calmly prepares to counter. The green-haired man calls Jaryang a moron and says this outcome was inevitable. He brutally smashes Jaryang away with an overpowering strike, saying Jaryang should have known his place and stayed quiet. He finishes by declaring Jaryang a disgrace to the orthodox sects. Jaryang collapses unconscious on the ground. Someone shouts for Yong Jaryang to wake up as he lies motionless. Jaryang slowly regains consciousness with his friend kneeling beside him. Jaryang groans and asks what happened, while his friend reminds him. The friend explains Jaryang collapsed mid-training from overexertion. Realizing he passed out, Jaryang curses and questions how things turned out like this. The two disciples complain that they must endure 6 more days of this brutal regimen and wonder where their instructor Sa Begang is. Jaryang grumbles that the instructor dumped all this awful training on them and is probably off playing somewhere. He is immediately smacked in the head by a wooden stick, yelping in pain. Sa Begang appears, scolding his disciple for badmouthing him while casually twirling the stick. He notes Jaryang has at least completed all the repetitions assigned. Begang says that technically Jaryang deserves harsh punishment for deceiving his master and shaming his sect, but he will overlook it because of his hard work. Jaryang gets smacked again, crying out in pain. Begang tells them they seem intent on earning beatings and mentions the inspector has been searching for him all day. He insists he has not been playing around and claims he also has important matters to handle. Begang announces they will now begin one-on-one lessons to prepare for the public martial duels, shocking Jaryang. The disciples protest that there is more training even after the exhausting midnight drills, but Begang confirms there is. He asks if they really thought basic training alone would let them beat their elite opponents, and they admit that seems impossible. The disciples worry their average skills could never overcome geniuses like Sang Chojin and Mok Danhwa. They beg Begang to be honest about whether enduring this training can actually let them win. Begang bluntly answers that even with a week of effort their chances of victory are still low. He continues that he will not lie. Realistically, their odds of winning remain poor. The disciples despair, wondering what the point is if they are likely to lose anyway. Begang adds that if they endure all his training, they can at least avoid losing in a humiliating way before everyone. Jaryang stares wide-eyed, pondering this promise. He complains that such wording is hardly motivating and seems like mere wordplay. Frustrated, he declares he is done, claims not to care about the tournament anymore, and walks off inviting any punishment. Begang forces a strained smile as he restrains his darker urges. Internally he argues with a murderous inner voice, deciding not to kill the insolent disciple despite the temptation. Dan Lijiang recalls Begang's earlier remark about not losing humiliatingly. Dan asks if surviving 6 days of training means he can at least fight Sang Chojin on equal footing. Begang is surprised but impressed that Yong Jaryang, whom he expected to quit first, still wants to continue despite the pain. Jaryang reflects that unlike Jo Muntak, he has a different motivation. He remembers Sang Chojin's green-haired ally beating him viciously. He states he has a clear reason driving him forward. Jaryang vows to get revenge on Sang Chojin regardless of the outcome of the duel. He demands that Begang not refuse to train him just because his motive is revenge. Begang's eyes glow with sinister delight, clearly pleased by this answer. An unseen presence praises Jaryang's reason as perfect, awarding him metaphorical full marks. Elsewhere, a golden-handled practice sword moves precisely through the air. Yun Wukyung practices calmly with that sword at a training post. He stands focused, the glowing tip of the weapon aligned before his face. Wukyung asks Dan what has suddenly gotten into him. He questions why young Master Yun Wukyung is now so interested in the heavenly martial tournament. Wukyung deflects, saying the decision to participate was his instructor's, not his own. Lee Bigyum, a senior and vice master of the Lotus Sword Hall, is introduced as he listens. Under the moonlit sky, Wukyung remarks that it has been a while since they last met in person. Bigyum coldly rejects friendly small talk, saying they were never close enough for such greetings. He demands to know what Wukyung is plotting, suspicious of his intentions. Wukyung explains that joining the tournament was not his idea but an arrangement forced on him by his instructor. Bigyum laughs derisively, calling that explanation a flimsy excuse. He urges Wukyung to be honest, accusing him of resenting that Bigyum took the coveted spot and acting out of greed. Bigyum further accuses Wookyung of being unable to stand not sitting in the highest position as the young master of the destructive Sword Yun clan, while Wookyung sighs at his assumptions. Wookyung tells Bigyum to think whatever he wants and turns to leave. In response, a blade suddenly flashes from its sheath. Bigyum draws his sword behind Wookyung, stopping the blade at his back. With the sword still at Wookyung's back, Bigyum warns him not to delude himself. Bigyum asserts that he only tolerated Wookyung's insolence out of respect for the main clan, not because he was weaker. He declares that since Wookyung has provoked him first, he will no longer protect Wookyung's dignity in a public duel, and will treat him as someone who underestimated a mere branch clan member. A cadet stands silently, bracing himself. Yom Jaryang declares that his goal in training martial arts is to reveal hidden truths to ordinary people. Sang Choijin claims his ever-advancing clan swordsmanship surpasses Yun clan swordsmanship, which he says has grown dull in peace. Jaryang angrily confronts him from behind with a dagger, asking what he just said. Choijin warns him not to draw a weapon he will not use, saying such recklessness disgraces his clan. As Choijin leaves, he states they will settle things at the upcoming public martial duel. Enraged, Jaryang channels violent energy into a furious attack. His sword strike smashes the ground near Choijin, who remains unfazed. Choijin walks away, ignoring the outburst. Jaryang seethes, calling Choijin an insolent brat. The scene shifts to the academy in daylight. Another cadet, Dan Lijung, marches through the grounds, determined. He recalls Gok Booke telling him to get lost and that he will publicly crush him in a week. Lijung wakes from that memory, stressed. He reflects that Gok Booke's late-night solo training and harsh words show his seriousness about the coming duel. Comparing himself to Gok Booke, Lijung feels lacking. Meanwhile, Jaryang undergoes brutal, aura-filled body training, straining his muscles. Sweat-drenched, he continues the intense cultivation. Lijung watches and senses that Jaryang's training feels different from the previous day. A fellow cadet tells Lijung not to disturb Jaryang without reason. Jo Muntak, lying on the ground, says he is just resting during their special training. Lijung, uneasy, wonders if it is okay to slack off, warning Muntak about their strict instructor. Muntak casually replies that their instructor Sa Begang is not coming today. Muntak explains he heard Sa Begang spent all night teaching Jaryang an unusual cultivation method before vanishing again. Lijung is shocked by this revelation. Muntak clarifies Sa Begang taught only Jaryang the new cultivation, while he himself slept from exhaustion. Lijung recalls asking Sa Begang for special training and being told to just keep circulating his energy. He broods that Sa Begang claimed there was nothing more to teach him yet stayed up all night instructing Jaryang. Lijung despairs that he is expected to do nothing but energy circulation for 6 days, then face Gok Booke before all the cadets. He decides this plan will not work and resolves to change something. Elsewhere, a girl finishes her practice by saluting with clasped hands. She thanks Inspector Sa Begang for teaching her, and the woman tells her to rest after working hard. The woman instructor laments that Sa Begang has not appeared at all, leaving her to teach the students alone. She begins to reconsider, thinking there is an upside. Watching the sunset over the training yard, she muses that this quieter life as a teacher is unexpectedly pleasant. She reflects that living leisurely as a teacher, something she never expected, is not so bad. Remembering Soso kept her busy, she realizes she has not checked on certain cadets in a while. She wonders how the other cadets are progressing. At a training post, a powerful strike smashes into the wooden dummy. Lijung relentlessly attacks the dummy with renewed ferocity. Exhausted, he bends over his staff, gasping for breath. Hearing his name called, Lijung reacts in surprise. The female inspector approaches and asks why he is training with weapons instead of just energy circulation as ordered. Lijung laughs awkwardly and lies that Sa Begang told him last night to start practicing sword techniques too. The inspector is skeptical but intrigued by this claim. Wondering why Sa Begang always appears and vanishes without warning, she still advises Lijung not to overtrain at night. Lijung agrees respectfully while gripping his wooden sword more tightly. Night falls over the academy complex. At a huge tree outside the grounds, Choijin stands before it. He begins a focused sword meditation, channeling blue energy into his blade. Multiple phantom swords appear as he unleashes his technique. His glowing afterimage performs rapid slashes in midair. Energy spirals into a brilliant point. The glowing blades weave a deadly lattice of cuts all over the tree's trunk. The tree becomes wrapped in intersecting sword marks. With a final motion, Choijin bisects the massive trunk, shattering it. He stares intently, gauging his progress. Breathing out, he watches the tree topple around him. His hidden instructor, perched above, asks if the training is finally over. The instructor asks what results Choijin attained. Choijin replies he still has far to go. Yet he adds confidently that even now he would never lose to an ordinary cadet. The instructor calls him cocky for grinning with such confidence. Back at the academy, Lijung attacks his dummy again, vowing to test himself. Jaryang continues his grueling stance training, body trembling. Gok Booke watches Jaryang and says they will soon see who trained with the most desperation. Elsewhere, the girl practices under the female inspector, who emphasizes which cadet trained hardest this week. Another night passes over the academy. Muntak sleeps on the training grounds instead of practicing. Jaryang, chest heaving, feels the strange energy within his torso. He maintains the painful posture, purple aura swirling as he pants. He continues, each breath ragged but focused. Someone questions whether this is really about revenge against Sang Choi-jin. Sa Begang notes how uncanny it is that Jiryang's dual opponent is also his target for revenge, and invites him to tell the story. Jiryang begins by saying it started when they were cadets in the same group. He explains they were not enemies at first, describing Choi-jin as heir to a prestigious clan while Jiryang came from a small, obscure one and wished to stay unconnected. He remarks that unfortunately Choi-jin eventually uncovered his secret. In the flashback, someone calls out to Yom Jiryang. Jiryang turns to face Choi-jin, asking what he wants. Jiryang narrates that Choi-jin discovered the hidden truth about his no-name martial clan. Choi-jin mocks him as belonging to an unorthodox faction and insults him for entering Dragon Spring Academy. Jiryang is stunned and alarmed by this accusation. Rumors spread among cadets that Jiryang might be from the underworld unorthodox side. Jiryang tells Choi-jin he does not know where he heard that information. He admits his father had once been an unorthodox martial artist but insists his father turned to righteousness with the Orthodox Alliance's approval long before Jiryang was born. Jiryang warns Choi-jin to watch his mouth, only to be slapped hard. Choi-jin derides him as a filthy mixed blood who dares talk back. Choi-jin continues insulting Jiryang's father as a traitor who abandoned his faction and calls both father and son disgusting. Jiryang's rage erupts, eyes glowing. He charges with a wooden sword to strike Choi-jin. Jiryang narrates that what enraged him most was Choi-jin's skill fitting his elite background. Choi-jin easily beats Jiryang down, pinning his head with the staff in front of everyone. Jiryang reflects that Choi-jin's overwhelming skill was what he could not bear. The humiliation of being crushed under Choi-jin's foot while others watched is shown. Jiryang says that after that disgraceful first defeat, he challenged Choi-jin repeatedly. Each time Choi-jin effortlessly defeated him again. Jiryang recounts that not once did he manage to land a meaningful blow. He laments that he could not even touch a single hair on Choi-jin's head. Continuing his story, he says that later something else happened. He tells Sa Begang his group was abruptly reassigned to the current special purpose class. The two sit together on the ground as he finishes recounting that transfer. Sa Begang asks expectantly what happened next, and Jiryang says that is the whole story. Sa Begang, disappointed, asks if Choi-jin never tried to assassinate him or secretly attack him in his sleep, finding the tale anticlimactic. Annoyed, Jiryang is smacked on the head for making such a dramatic fuss. Sa Begang says he listened seriously because of Jiryang's intense glare, only to find the revenge story childish. He calls it a letdown and tells Jiryang to focus on basic training, leaving Jiryang frustrated. Jiryang insists that while it might sound petty, his resentment is real. He shouts that he will never forgive Choi-jin for insulting both him and his parents. Clenching his fist, he says neither Sa Begang nor Choi-jin understands what it meant for his father to abandon the unorthodox path. Jiryang vows that whatever it takes, he will one day personally strike Choi-jin down. Sa Begang reacts with interest to that declaration. He ponders Jiryang's words about doing anything necessary. Sa Begang suddenly appears behind Jiryang in a terrifying manner, startling him. With a sinister smile, Sa Begang asks if he truly means he will do anything and if that is his real resolve. Jiryang nervously affirms that it is. Sa Begang grins darkly, clearly pleased. He says that although the story was underwhelming, Jiryang's spirit is admirable. Sa Begang adds that unlike Dan Liejung, who sank into self-pity after defeat, Jiryang has not, which he likes. He then declares that Jiryang passes his test. Sa Begang says he will help him, revealing a glowing purple energy sphere in his hand. Jiryang listens as Sa Begang says he had intended to give him this power later. Sa Begang explains he will implant this energy into Jiryang's body, specifically his middle energy core. When Jiryang asks what it is, Sa Begang answers that it is a special kind of energy unlike that of ordinary martial artists. Sa Begang warns that because the energy is different, it will resist and thrash, and Jiryang must use a taught internal method to suppress and harmonize it until the duel. He assures Jiryang that if the process succeeds, he will certainly become stronger than he is now. Jiryang asks what happens if he fails. Sa Begang jokes that Jiryang's head might swell up and explode, shocking him. Laughing, Sa Begang says he is joking and would not recklessly insert such power without care. However, he admits that if things go wrong, the pain will be excruciating, to the point Jiryang might wish for death. Sa Begang then asks if Jiryang is still willing to proceed. Jiryang gulps as he stares at the ominous purple sphere. Narration states that in the end, this is how it all began. Jiryang recounts training 18 hours a day for 5 days, devoting himself to suppressing and absorbing that energy. At first the process feels like his chest is being torn open in unbearable agony. By gritting his teeth and repeating the method, he slowly manages to calm the energy. Late at night he stands in the courtyard, breathing heavily after practice. He wonders if he has succeeded, noting he does not feel very different yet. He also notes Sa Begang has not appeared for days since giving him the energy, leaving him annoyed. Under the moonlit sky, he worries uneasily that Sa Begang's gift might have been a scam. Elsewhere, Sa Begang clenches his glowing purple fist as energy erupts. Wreathed in dark aura, he powers up intensely. His energy is so great that the ground and objects around him levitate. Panting, he stabilizes the power coursing through him. He concludes that at this level he is roughly prepared. The next morning dawns over a bustling academy. Cadets excitedly gather, chattering about the coming event. A stern, muscular instructor appears before them, smiling confidently. Announcers declare that the Heavenly Martial Tournament public selection duels are beginning. Crowds fill the arena, creating a lively atmosphere around the central stage. Two cadets discuss how unusual it is to choose tournament representatives through public duels but are happy it lets them skip a day of training. Two instructors watch the arena and mock the so-called special purpose class, expecting to see nobodies get crushed. One of them still warns that unexpected things can happen. He recalls that Dan Lijiang once defeated Yun Wukyung, and notes Yun Wukyung is now in that same class. The other insists Yun Wukyung, genius or not, is still below Li Bigyum. They list other prodigies like Mok Danhwa of the Sword Flash Mok Clan and Sang Chojun of the Heavenly Tiger Martial Academy. Gok Bokeh of the Dragon Tiger Escort Agency is mentioned, and they note all these candidates come from prestigious families. One instructor concludes ordinary people can never overcome the natural wall of talent. Sa Begang, another instructor, stands silently in the courtyard, observing. He internally agrees with that view. Sa Begang believes his chosen cadets are the top talents of the academy, and cannot possibly lose to ordinary students, though he regrets Yun Wukyung is absent. Gloating, he thinks today an arrogant brat will finally be humbled, while someone nearby remarks that he seems pleased with himself. Sa Begang turns as another instructor approaches him. The newcomer, Sa Begang's rival, smiles and comments that Begang sounds very sure of victory. Sa Begang angrily addresses him by name. The rival notes he has heard Begang pushed his cadets through intense training for the last week. Sa Begang replies that this was the bare minimum effort for his supposedly worthless students. The rival corrects him, saying the cadets are not useless but pitiable. Sa Begang says those students endured meaningless hardship under a foolish instructor and are now going to be humiliated publicly. The rival smirks, realizing Begang is still holding a grudge from a previous incident. He teases Begang for clinging to something so trivial, then suddenly notices Begang's sword. He points out the unfamiliar weapon at Begang's waist. Begang, pleased, draws it and praises the rival's eye for blades. He proudly explains that the sword was specially crafted for him to use alongside his cadets at the Heavenly Martial Tournament. Begang boasts about the Violet Dawn sword, an expensive custom blade famed for cutting stone, unparalleled durability, and exquisite craftsmanship. The rival outwardly calls it a masterpiece while internally reacting with interest. Activating his demonic eyes, he judges that ignoring its flashy decorations, the sword itself is only decent. Its form and balance remind him of the weapon he wielded as Demon Army Commander, though he assumes the resemblance is coincidental. He silently thinks about another powerful instructor while eyeing the sword. Deciding to exploit anything useful, he addresses Instructor Dung to propose something. He suggests they make things more interesting by adding a little fun while they watch the matches. He clarifies that he wants to place a wager on the duel's outcome, startling Begang. He reasons that they both believe their cadets will win anyway and that their old grudge remains unresolved. He proposes that the loser must grant one request from the winner, based on the final results. Smiling, he adds that refusal will not be permitted. After a moment, Begang laughs and agrees to a bet tied to the duel results. Begang smugly reminds him that he himself arranged the matchups a week ago, implying the bracket favors his side. The rival recalls how Begang had insisted the originally selected cadets deserved this duel because of proper procedures. He quotes Begang's earlier justification that the duel was forced through Begang's one-sided demands in order to validate the original candidates, making Begang confirm it. Begang finally accepts the bet outright. He assumes the rival must desperately want something, but secretly believes he already knows the man's true desire. Begang is convinced the rival covets the Violet Dawn sword and plans to win it through the wager. The rival inwardly calls Begang shameless and greedy, yet is happy to use that greed for his own purposes. He announces that his own demand is very simple. His condition is that if he wins, Sa Begang must voluntarily resign as instructor. In his thoughts, Begang adds that this would dissolve the special purpose class and return Yun Wukyung to his side. He is certain that once he wins, the rookie rival will never dare challenge him again. Another instructor calls everyone's attention to begin the official duel. Acting Master Sang Pilji declares the event will decide which cadets represent the academy at the Heavenly Martial Tournament. He explains that in the past instructors chose representatives directly. He says a bold young instructor challenged that system, prompting today's duel. Pilji accepted the proposal, so the original candidates now have to face challengers, with winners earning the spots. He outlines the rules: 5 one-on-one matches in a best-of-5 format. He adds that victory is by surrender or knockout, but intentional attempts to kill will end in disqualification. The cadets cheer loudly as the first match is about to start. The referee calls for the first duelists to step onto the stage. 2 fighters' boots are shown as they climb the stairs to the arena. The announcer introduces Yong Jaryang of the Special Purpose class as challenger, and Sang Chojun of the Flying Dragon class as the original candidate. From the stands, a classmate watches the nervous Jaryang taking his stance on stage. That classmate curses that Jaryang already looks anxious. Jaryang gulps as he grips his practice sword. Sang Chojun taunts him by calling him a mutt. Chojun remarks he heard Jaryang had been obsessively training all week. He questions whether Jaryang truly believes that effort makes him a match for him. Sneering, he calls Jaryang vermin who still does not know his place. Chojin reminds Jaryang how many times he has already beaten him, while Jaryang replies that he knows. Jaryang stomps the ground, gathering his strength. He charges forward shouting that Chojin has defeated him exactly 8 times, enraging Chojin. Jaryang leaps in for a powerful overhead strike. Chojin unleashes a green aura technique to counter. His attack carves a massive green slash that smashes into Jaryang. Jaryang narrowly avoids a lethal hit, and insists such a blow will not land so easily. Chojin calls him an idiot and prepares to continue. Watching in frustration, Jaryang's friend laments that nothing has really changed. Sa Bigang confidently says this outcome was expected and scoffs at the idea that Jaryang could defeat Chojin. The rival instructor internally notes he always knew these two had fought many times before. He recalls how Chojin has decisively won every previous bout, making the gap between them only widen. Bigang smugly adds that he arranged all the duel pairings to ensure favorable matchups for his side. He calls that arrangement the product of an experienced instructor's judgment, saying that normally this duel would only end in Jaryang's humiliation. The rival thinks Bigang's foolish wager will instead bring Bigang's own ruin. He reflects that Bigang, blinded by greedy short-sightedness, staked his own cadets on this gamble and must now face the consequences. The rival smiles subtly, confident in his plan. As the clash continues, he thinks about the word gamble with a different meaning. Chojin dives in for another attack, while Jaryang blocks with a glowing purple force. Both Chojin and Bigang are shocked when the strike does not finish Jaryang. The rival scoffs at the idea this is a gamble at all. Jaryang's eyes blaze purple as he begins to truly awaken his power. The rival considers the duel's direction to be essentially predetermined. Jaryang again withstands Chojin's blow, showing rising resistance. Chojin is stunned that his opponent is still standing after that technique. From above, we see Chojin clutching his chest in pain while Jaryang lies battered on the ground. Chojin, furious that a filthy mongrel managed to hit him, vows revenge. Gasping but grinning, Jaryang starts to rise again. He pants and laughs darkly, making Chojin even more unsettled. Chojin glares, veins bulging with anger. Jaryang braces himself as another powerful attack approaches. Chojin hurls him across the stage with overwhelming force. Jaryang crashes hard, clearly injured. Chojin screams that someone of Jaryang's low status dared to hit him. In a rage, he unleashes another brutal green aura strike at Jaryang. Jaryang's friend watches helplessly as the savage barrage continues and curses the situation. The friend notes Jaryang finally landed a hit but is now being beaten senseless once more. He wonders if Chojin simply let his guard down for a moment, concluding that nothing has actually changed. Yun Wukyoung appears beside him, and the friend admits that Chojin has always been this careless yet dominant. Wukyoung recalls that Chojin constantly bragged he had never been struck once by Jaryang in all their duels. Wukyoung still concedes that, despite his awful personality, Chojin is a genius from a powerful martial clan. Wukyoung asks if they really think someone like Chojin would allow a clean hit purely from carelessness after 8 prior fights. He concludes that there is only one explanation. Jaryang now retaliates with a purple charged slash that wounds Chojin. The narration declares that young Jaryang has clearly changed. The scene shifts to the Heavenly Tiger Martial Academy, an old prestigious school with many disciples. Chojin remembers his background as the master's only son, a prodigy raised on elixirs who mastered every academy technique. He channels his pride and unleashes his Heavenly Sun Moon Radiant Sword art. He opens with the first form, Heavenly Radiance Flurry, sending a storm of luminous strikes at Jaryang. He combines it with Heavenly Cloud Mobility art to move swiftly. He then uses 18 rampant steps, surrounding Jaryang with afterimages and continuous blows. Building to the 6th form, Heavenly Thunder Flash, Chojin pours even more power into his attacks. Despite this, he rages that he cannot believe he disgraced himself by being struck in an official duel. Determined to end it, he vows to crush Jaryang completely, giving him no room to breathe. He escalates to the 9th form of his Radiant Sword art for self-redemption. His footwork erupts with energy as he prepares the finishing technique. Chojin executes the Radiant Soaring Dragon Slash, a massive green vertical strike meant to finish Jaryang. Jaryang is sent flying by the blow. Chojin holds his injured arm, panting as he watches Jaryang crash. Dust settles and Chojin stands breathing hard, assuming victory. He smirks, saying the fight is finally over and calling Jaryang a troublesome yet pathetic opponent. But he then realizes he was the one being beaten ragged and turns to see Jaryang still standing. Jaryang, battered but defiant, tells him the fight is not finished. Chojin is shocked that his strongest strike did not keep Jaryang down. He cannot believe the opponent stood after that attack. Jaryang instead charges him, promising to close the distance himself if Chojin will not come. Chojin grudgingly admits Jaryang's endurance training was impressive. Enraged, he screams for Jaryang to know his place, and calls him a mongrel while striking again. Jaryang is battered anew, yet remains conscious. He wonders if he is getting used to the pain as he powers up with purple energy and counterattacks. His next blow smashes straight through Chojin's defense. Chojin panics, realizing something is very wrong. He notices Jaryang's sword movements have become completely different from before. Wukyoung deduces that Jaryang is a ridiculous fool, whose power grows the more he is hurt, storing energy with each injury. Jaryan now unleashes a frenzied series of empowered strikes, shocking onlookers. Chojin, under relentless assault, wonders what Jaryan has done during the past week to change so drastically. Spectators exclaim that it seems impossible, yet they now see Sang Chojin being pushed back. Sa Bigang shouts at Chojin to snap out of it while the rival calmly watches. The rival notes that Jaryan has fully adapted to the harsh training and is performing far better than he had expected. He recalls that after discovering time regression, he spent years as a Legion commander devising countless anti-demon strategies. He planned innumerable ways to efficiently kill demons, researching thousands of tactics over 65 years. One abandoned plan involved forcibly awakening martial artists by infusing them with mana and training their bodies to endure it, similar to his own past experiments under demons. Even diluted mana from another realm had unavoidable side effects, causing extreme suffering to test subjects. He himself was racked with agony for days when he first reinfused mana into his body after returning. Yet Yom Jaryan, that lunatic disciple, endured the same process. Jaryan not only survived but successfully fused that power into his core, completing what his instructor had once struggled to accomplish. Yom Jaryan looks down at his transformed, muscular body, sensing something has changed. Narration explains that Sang Chojin's physical abilities have been vastly enhanced as he charges in with purple energy. It is revealed that Sang Chojin's middle energy core has been massively strengthened, shocking his green-haired opponent who wonders how long he can keep attacking. The green-haired fighter, fed up, activates his Heavenly Sun Moon Radiant Sword art. He unleashes its seventh form, Thundercloud Pursuit, slamming Sang Chojin while angrily telling him to stay down. Narration states that Sang Chojin, who always relied on brute strength to win, now faces a different situation. Despite the blow, Yom Jaryan grabs the attacking arm and weapon, stunning the green-haired man. The green-haired fighter feels like he is in a nightmare, as Yom grins manically and declares he has caught him. Yom hurls Sang Chojin away with overwhelming force. Sang Chojin screams as he crashes violently across the courtyard. Sang Chojin lies face down and motionless on the ground. He groans weakly, struggling to move after the impact. Yom casually taunts the fallen Sang Chojin, asking if the prestigious young master is already beaten. Sang Chojin seethes, barely restraining his anger. He explodes, shouting at Yom to shut up and calling him a dishonorable coward. Sang Chojin argues that in a real sword fight Yom would have died long ago. Yom admits that might be true. He then dismisses the complaint, pointing out that this is a duel and such arguments are meaningless. Sang Chojin, enraged, charges again with a wild scream. Yom focuses, purple energy flaring as he prepares to meet the charge. Onlookers react in shock at what is happening in the arena. From above, we see Yom has positioned himself decisively over the kneeling Sang Chojin. Yom's wooden sword is poised at Sang Chojin's throat, signifying victory. Yom stands over him, panting heavily from exertion. An overseer orders the fight to stop, declaring the bout finished. The officiating instructor announces the end of the first match and prepares to name the victor. He declares Yom Jaryan of the Special Purpose class as the winner. Different spectators react, one in disbelief and another with a knowing smile. Students marvel that Sang Chojin has actually been defeated, wondering how it was possible. Narration stresses the shock that Sang Chojin lost to someone he had crushed multiple times before. Yom, still breathing hard, tries to process what just happened. He stares at his wooden sword, incredulous that he truly won. Yom mentally replays how brutally he had been beaten by Sang Chojin in previous encounters. He recalls another devastating strike from Sang Chojin, emphasizing how unlikely today's outcome was. Yom watches as Sang Chojin is carried away on a stretcher. A close-up shows Sang Chojin unconscious and humiliated, a tear running from his eye. Yom starts to laugh, gripping his sword tightly. Overwhelmed with joy, he shouts that he actually won, unable to contain his excitement. He yells to everyone to remember that he defeated Sang Chojin, while others wonder if he has lost his mind. Remembering how classmates mocked him, Yom breaks down emotionally, covering his face. His eyes widen as he suddenly notices something wrong. He sees his palms smeared with blood from gripping the sword too hard. Yom curses softly, realizing the cost to his body. He stumbles away, swearing in pain as the damage catches up with him. Spectators cry out in confusion and call after Yom as he leaves the arena. The scene cuts to a quiet corner of the academy, away from the arena. Purple energy-infused hands press to Yom's back in an attempt to heal his damaged core. Yom sits shirtless and bandaged while Sa Bigang channels energy into him from behind. Sa Bigang explains he has stabilized the rampant energy in Yom's core, though only by calming his mana. He tells Yom to rest and strictly avoid using inner energy for at least 2 days, which Yom accepts. Jo Montak questions Sa Bigang, asking if he really intends to ignore what happened. Jo Montak recalls that the last time Yom circulated that energy he was in agony, vomiting blood and collapsing from even a small use of it. Suspicious, Jo Montak hints that something more is going on. He accuses Sa Bigang of teaching Yom a dangerous demonic art, but Sa Bigang curtly shuts him down. Yom admits he knew the risks, understanding that drawing too much inner energy would leave him in this condition. He says he learned the martial art fully aware of the danger, so Jo Montak should stop arguing about it. Jo Montak begrudgingly drops the issue but warns Yom not to blame him if things go wrong later. As Jo Montak departs, Sa Begang tells him that while caring for a friend is good, he should worry about his own upcoming match. Sa Begang reminds Jo Montak that he is the next to fight and teases him for always refusing Sa Begang's training. Jo Montak walks off pretending to be relaxed, insisting he has everything under control. He then admits he actually has a plan. Jo Montak decides he will simply forfeit and step down as soon as his match begins. On the arena platform, Jo Montak resigns himself to losing quickly, thinking it is pointless to struggle in a fight he cannot win. The overseer calls everyone to attention to start the next duel. He announces that after the special purpose class's first victory, the second duel of the selection tournament will now commence. Jo Montak is introduced as the special purpose class representative for the second match. The announcer then calls for his opponent. Mok Danhwa of the prestigious Flying Dragon class steps forward, drawing excited cheers. Her classmates enthusiastically shout her clan's name and cheer for her. The arena echoes with chants of Mok Danhwa's name as she faces Jo Montak. Jo Montak's sweat drops, thinking the crowd is overdoing it with her name. Narration describes how Mok Danhwa's silent stance exudes razor-sharp pressure with no apparent openings, embodying the Sword Flash Mok clan's reputation. Jo Montak internally acknowledges the overwhelming gap between them despite both being first years. He accepts that this disparity is simply reality. He reflects that ordinary people without talent or status must adapt quickly to survive. He considers at least putting up a token struggle for Yom's sake instead of surrendering immediately. Jo Montak stares at Mok Danhwa on the scarred arena floor, weighing his options. The shattered and blood-stained tiles remind him how brutal the previous fight was. He vividly remembers Yom being savagely beaten by Sang Chojin in the past. The broken pavement also recalls the devastating power Yom endured. More flashes of Yom being crushed emphasize how reckless that victory had been. Jo Montak thinks of Yom desperately blocking explosions of force with his body. He focuses on Yom's determined eyes amid that punishment. Back in the present, Jo Montak stands silently, absorbing the weight of those memories. He resolves himself internally to act. The referee announces the start of the second match of the Heavenly Martial Tournament. At the opening call, Mok Danhwa instantly rushes in with blinding speed. Jo Montak is caught off guard by her sudden movement. Her first strike sends Jo Montak flying before he can properly react. Mok Danhwa calmly completes the motion as Jo Montak is flung across the courtyard. From Jo Montak's perspective on the ground, she stands ready while he struggles to move. He lies sprawled out, clearly overwhelmed by the initial exchange. Sa Begang and another instructor react, one trying to hide his concern beneath forced enthusiasm. Yom and another classmate watch anxiously, calling out Jo Montak's name. Jo Montak's face is pressed to the floor, barely conscious. Someone yells for the assault to stop, alarmed at how one-sided it is. The scene shifts to a nighttime memory where Yom screams in pain at the academy. Yom writhes on the ground as that dangerous inner energy ravages his body while Jo Montak watches. Later in the same memory, Yom gasps and curses, while Jo Montak scolds him for continuing despite being told to stop. Jo Montak insists that the technique wrecking Yom is not normal and blames Sa Begang for tricking him. He demands to know why Yom is pushing himself so far when he has already lost to Sang Chojin many times. Jo Montak reminds Yom he could have just swallowed his pride like before instead of enduring this agony. Yom snaps back, asking if Jo Montak thinks repeated losses no longer matter to him just because he is used to them. Yom admits that losing 8 times in a row might make him a fool but accepts that about himself. He then roars that no one has the right to say it is normal for him to lose. Yom declares that he simply hates losing and that alone is enough reason to fight. Back in the present match, Mok Danhwa says things could have ended quietly if Jo Montak had stayed down. Jo Montak, however, decides Yom forced him to change and now he must act differently than before. He reaches to draw his short wooden-side weapons from his belt. Jo Montak snaps the 2 short blades free, readying his new style. Activating his technique, he vows that now he will share Yom's suffering. He charges Mok Danhwa wielding a wooden weapon in each hand. Spectators notice he is using dual short wooden blades with ring pommels and comment on how unusual they look. Others wonder why he is only drawing these weapons now instead of from the start. Jo Montak, drenched in sweat, ignores the doubts and steels himself. Mok Danhwa coolly invites him to use every bit of strength and skill he has. Jo Montak responds that if that is what she wants, he will oblige. He dashes forward enthusiastically, proposing they have a proper clash. Mok Danhwa's eyes widen slightly as she registers his sudden, intense approach. A massive wave-like strike surges toward her as Jo Montak swings both blades. She moves swiftly, parrying his attack with controlled precision. His blows carve impacts across the floor as he presses the offensive. Jo Montak leaps high and brings both weapons down like an overhead hammer strike. His expression turns ferocious as he channels everything into this attack. The massive impact crashes down, forcing Mok Danhwa to narrowly dodge. Dust and debris billow up from the crater his strike created. Using the dust cloud as cover, Jo Montak charges again with glowing blue eyes. Mok Danhwa tracks his movement and prepares another defense. She counters with a powerful sweeping slash of energy. The two exchange a flurry of blows, Jo Montak's attacks repeatedly meeting her overwhelming sword chi. Jo Montak grimaces, realizing her defense is every bit as solid as he expected. He acknowledges that finding even a single opening in her guard is almost impossible. Manhwa narrows her eyes, beginning to read his rhythm. Manhwa launches another heavy strike, but Manhwa slips past it with surprising speed. Sensing danger, Manhwa curses internally. Manhwa drives a precise thrust into his midsection, stopping his advance cold. Manhwa cries out in pain as the blow lands. He is knocked backward, losing control of his weapons. Manhwa cuts one of his short swords cleanly from his grasp. The broken weapon clatters to the ground. Manhwa kneels, coughing and groaning while Manhwa stands unscathed before him. She asks if he really intends to rely on just one more weapon now. She adds that if that is all he has left, he should simply give up. Laughing bitterly, Manhwa asks what more she expected from someone as average as he is. Yet as he speaks, his hand clenches tightly against the floor. He subtly flicks something from his clenched fist. A small wooden ring blade whirls past Manhwa's face, startling her. The thrown piece whips around her in a tight curve as she reacts. Manhwa's remaining weapon is shown attached to thin lines, revealing a tricky hidden mechanism. Grinning, Manhwa declares that he still has one final hidden card yet to play. Manhwa notices a strange silver thread technique and wonders when her opponent gains such power. The ground explodes from a powerful impact as the fight intensifies. Her male opponent charges desperately with a wooden sword, screaming as he attacks. Manhwa counters with overwhelming skill, flipping him through the air and disarming him. A blinding burst of energy surges out as their clash reaches its peak. Manhwa weaves glowing lines of energy across the arena while her opponent is hurled back. The man crashes hard onto the floor, groaning in pain. He writhes and gasps, clearly defeated by Manhwa's blow. Manhwa stands calm and dominant, wooden sword in hand, looking down at him. The fallen cadet hesitates in silence, realizing he cannot continue. Smiling weakly, he admits defeat and concedes the match. The referee declares the match over as the crowd erupts while Manhwa walks away. The announcer proclaims Manhwa of the Flying Dragon class as the winner. The defeated cadet reflects that losing was inevitable, and that going all out only exhausted him. Manhwa steps away, leaving him to recover from the bout. From the stands, someone calls out that he actually did pretty well. Classmates praise his unusual techniques despite his loss. 2 female cadets cheer him on, telling him to keep it up. He closes his eyes, taking in their encouragement with mixed emotions. A friend comes over asking what happened in the match. That friend teases him for not surrendering early like he had claimed he would. Embarrassed, he snaps back, blaming his current state on that very friend. As they walk together, he brags about looking cool while his friend says he seems lively enough. He insists his body actually hurts badly from the beating. Time passes and the scene shifts to another part of the academy. Elsewhere, an older man sternly asks if he has been clearly understood. He orders the muscular cadet before him not to lose under any circumstance, noting even other strong fighters have fallen. The cadet, Huang Jia of the Ferocious Tiger class, arrogantly vows he will not lose to a girl whose only merit is her family name. His uncle warns him again to stay cautious, reminding him how much effort was spent to send him to the Heavenly Martial Tournament. Huang Jia mocks his upcoming opponent as a clueless girl who has never once won a spar. He scoffs that she supposedly cannot even land a proper hit, and wonders how he could lose to her. His uncle reluctantly admits that is true but still seems worried. Huang Jia then lewdly asks another question about the girl, clearly not taking her seriously. He wonders if at least she is attractive. Cut to the girl, Nung Soso, sitting alone in a room, thoughtful before her match. Inspector Mei Xiaolin enters and asks Soso if she is ready for her bout. Mei approaches and asks gently if Soso is alright and has time to talk. Mei repeats the question, wanting to discuss something important with her. Soso nervously addresses Mei as Inspector, clearly anxious. Mei smiles kindly, trying to put Soso at ease. Mei notes that Soso's expression looks more nervous than usual and asks if she is anxious. Mei mentions the rumors that Soso has never won a duel. Mei adds that from her own observations, Soso's abilities seem different from what the rumors suggest. She explains that Soso's internal energy and movement are actually superior to most students. Mei asks if Soso has some hidden reason she cannot share with others for always losing. Embarrassed, Soso finally admits that she avoids fighting because being hit hurts. Mei leans closer, surprised by such a simple reason. Mei blurts out in disbelief, shocked by Soso's logic. Soso timidly recounts that from age 6 she trained external martial arts under her grandfather, being struck daily. A chibi flashback shows young Soso doing harsh bucket training under her strict grandfather. She remembers being beaten until swollen all over, hurting every single day. Mei deduces that this past made Soso instinctively avoid getting hit, then asks why Soso never strikes back. Soso worries that if she hits others they will feel the same pain she does. She glances aside nervously, sweating at the thought. Mei sighs inwardly, thinking Soso has completely misunderstood the nature of being a martial artist. Mei grows serious, covering one eye as she prepares to correct Soso's thinking. Mei places a hand on Soso's shoulder and tells her she is fundamentally mistaken about something. She then commands Soso to listen carefully to the lesson she is about to give. Later, Mei announces it is time for them to get ready for the next duel. On the arena floor, Huang Jia and Soso face each other as the crowd buzzes. The referee declares the start of the third duel. In the spectators area, instructors watch silently, interested in the outcome. The announcer introduces Huang Jia, second year of the Ferocious Tiger class, on the original candidate's side. He then introduces Nung Soso, first year of the Special Purpose class, as the challenger. Huang Jia narrows his eyes, focusing intently on Soso. Soso recalls people saying she is useless and cannot even throw a proper punch. She also remembers someone noting at least that her face is decent. Huang Jia smirks to himself, thinking this encounter might turn out amusing. The referee declares the duel begun. Huang Jia crouches low, planning his first move as he eyes Soso. He charges forward, intent on making her feel the overwhelming gap between their levels. Soso steps sharply, channeling energy into her feet. Huang Jia's massive strike comes crashing down as Soso narrowly evades. Their faces pass close as she dodges, surprising him. Irritated, he clicks his tongue after missing. He shouts at her for being good at dodging and prepares another assault. Soso continues to evade, her body glowing with blue energy as she stamps across the ground. She gathers even more inner power into her hands, blue aura flaring. Mei's earlier words echo in Soso's mind that she had misunderstood something. In the flashback, Mei begins explaining something crucial about Huang Jia. Mei reveals that Huang Jia actually enjoys being struck. Soso reacts in shock, repeating the revelation in disbelief. Mei further explains his background style and main fist technique, confirming this information. She leans in conspiratorially and asks Soso if she knows an important detail. Mei claims that Huang clan fighters undergo training that turns pain into pleasure, making them enjoy taking hits more as they grow skilled. When Soso hesitantly asks if that is really true, Mei confidently affirms it, internally thinking she is lying. Soso, impressed, asks how the inspector knows so much. Mei reminds her that she is an inspector of the Murim alliance, another lie that Soso accepts. Mei says that if Soso still doubts her, there is a way to confirm it. Back in the present, Soso's hands blaze blue as she steps toward Huang Jia to test Mei's claim. Her eyes sharpen with resolve as she prepares to strike. She leaps and unleashes a devastating downward palm of energy onto Huang Jia's torso. Huang Jia screams in agony as the blast detonates against his chest. The shockwave sends him bouncing brutally across the floor. From above, Soso stands ready while Huang Jia lies crumpled inside a ring of dust. Spectators stare wide-eyed, stunned by the unexpected reversal. Even instructors and rival cadets are shocked, though one young man smirks. Soso exhales in relief, slightly amazed at what she has just done. She cocks her head, still processing the result. Huang Jia staggers up, clutching his chest, cursing Soso in pain and disbelief. Soso notes that he does not look like he enjoyed that hit at all. Remembering Mei's instructions, Soso decides to ask the question she was told to use. She calls out to the battered Huang Jia. Smiling innocently, she asks if that blow happened to hurt. The memory shows Mei advising that if Soso doubts her, she should try this exact approach. Mei had told her to hit the opponent lightly, then ask whether it hurts. Mei added that if they say it hurts or ask her to stop, then her information was wrong, but if they attack again silently, it proves they like it. Back in the present, Soso concludes aloud that Huang Jia must enjoy being hit, which horrifies him. She elaborates that she only wanted to know if the blow really hurt him. Enraged, Huang Jia smashes his fist into the floor. He snarls an insult, calling her filthy and furious. He decides he will stop playing around and viciously punish her for mocking him. Energy explodes beneath him as he powers up for a serious counterattack. He launches himself at Soso, vowing to tear apart her arrogant mouth. Soso, eyes sparkling, concludes joyfully that Mei's explanation was correct. Convinced he truly likes being hit, she prepares another empowered strike as he charges. Her clenched fist meets his attack with a powerful impact. Soso gleefully uppercuts Huang Jia with a massive burst of energy, shouting in delight. Onlookers are left speechless by the sight. She continues pummeling Huang Jia's face with empowered blows. Her classmates stare in awe and shock at her ferocity. Soso unleashes yet another fierce strike, driving him back. The referee begins to exclaim in amazement at what he is seeing. An instructor observes that every one of Soso's strikes contains true martial essence, and wonders why someone like her is still in the special purpose class. Another instructor explains she is the granddaughter of the famed Iron Fist Destroyer, and that she previously avoided fighting entirely. The first instructor concludes her attitude must have changed only after joining the special purpose class. He remarks that he is glad he visited the academy today to witness this. The observing cadet Yom Jaryang thinks that someone who once could not use inner energy has clearly had a fateful encounter. The instructor muses that things are turning out more complex than he expected. Jaryang reflects that before his regression Soso never stood out, but now she is a complete lunatic in battle. He watches her relentlessly batter Huang Jia, acknowledging her newfound madness. He recalls seeing Mei speak with Soso before the match and wonders what was said to cause such a change. He decides the details do not matter now and focuses on the outcome. Meanwhile, Huang Jia's uncle panics, screaming internally as his plans collapse. He cannot believe what he is seeing, insisting it should be impossible. Jaryang bursts out laughing, delighted by how events have unfolded. He observes that the result far exceeds his expectations as Soso continues pounding Huang Jia on the ground. Another narrator explains that the tournament was originally just a pretext to take certain students outside the academy to investigate demonic disturbances and train them. Jaryong thinks back to his own savage fighting style but sees the added bonus of discovering unexpected talents like Soso. He regards the emergence of Yom Jaryong and Nung Soso's capabilities as a pleasant surprise for his plans. He resolves to broaden his schemes from this point onward. On the arena floor, a bloodied Huang Ji finally raises a trembling hand and surrenders. Soso looms over him with a bloodstained fist, looking almost crazed with battle thrill. She pauses, eyes intense as she decides what to do next. Then she softens, smiling warmly despite her bruised face. She throws her arms up and joyfully shouts that she won while Huang Ji lies beaten. Spectators can barely believe the fearsome Huang Ji has surrendered. The announcer proclaims that it was a rare and spectacular match. The referee declares the duel over and announces special purpose classes Nung Soso as the victor. Soso skips around the arena, ecstatically repeating that she won while classmates react in stunned amazement. The bruised, pink-haired fighter collapses, coughing and barely holding himself up. Shaken and battered, he staggers away while two students watch him leave in stunned silence. The two students are speechless, realizing how overwhelmingly strong their opponent was. Soso bursts into the inspector's room, excitedly announcing that she won her match. The female inspector smiles approvingly and praises Soso for her performance. Soso enthusiastically recounts that, as advised, she kept striking because her opponent seemed to enjoy pain, and the inspector hints there is something even more surprising. The inspector explains there are many people who enjoy pain and that entire martial arts styles are built around such preferences, which Soso finds hard to believe. Soso nervously asks if the inspector is joking, but the inspector says she is serious and suggests Soso ask such people directly if she doubts it. The inspector notes that most male martial artists would never admit being hurt by a girl, further clarifying what Soso experienced. Concluding the debrief, the inspector tells Soso she has done enough for today and should rest, and Soso happily agrees. A door creaks open, signaling someone else entering the inspector's room. The inspector remarks to the newcomer that he seems to have grown close with Soso. The man in blue teasingly points out that the inspector also gave Soso some rather frightening advice. The inspector suddenly snaps at him, demanding to know where he has been and scolding him for neglecting the work that should have been his. He calmly replies that he was busy with his own matters and had taken interest in a peculiar person. The inspector's expression hardens as she listens, clearly displeased. She accuses him of secretly mentoring Yom Jaryong and Dan Lijiang, saying he must have expected all three of his chosen students, including Yun Wukyung, to win. He looks genuinely confused, questioning whether she really thinks he personally taught Dan Lijiang. The narrative flashes back to Dan Lijiang facing a muscular, silver-braided opponent as someone recalls being asked to teach Dan. The memory shows Gok Bo-ok, the tough fighter from Dragon Tiger Escort Agency, strapping on his metal forearm guards. Dan thinks to himself that he never actually received any special teaching despite what others believe. A ceramic cup shatters on the floor inside an office. Inside that office, the pink-haired loser cringes on his knees while an older man in blue advances on him in anger. The man in blue furiously berates him for being a pathetic fool who bragged but still lost to a mere woman. Continuing his tirade, he accuses the kneeling fighter of disgracing their family and demands at least some excuse for failing. He yells that he went to great trouble to secure the fighter a precious spot in the Heavenly Martial Tournament. The story introduces the Heavenly Martial Tournament by name as a major event. It explains that the Heavenly Martial Tournament is a competition among top talents from academies such as White Martial Academy, Heavenly Academy, and Dragon Spring Academy. The narration reveals that the key criterion for tournament selection is not martial skill. Instead, participants are chosen based on the powerful families backing them. Several elite heirs from influential factions, including Lotus Sword Hall, Sword Flash Mock Clan, Heavenly Tiger Martial Academy, and Dragon Tiger Escort Agency, are shown as typical participants. The narration states that simply fielding these heirs brings huge donations from their households, and that financial backing is what truly determines who gets chosen. Back in the office, the man in blue calls the pink-haired fighter utterly pathetic. He recalls how his elder sister's husband's clan begged him for a tournament slot, and how he pulled strings to open an extra position for this very fighter. He sees that after all that effort the fighter repaid him with such a disgraceful showing. Worried about his own standing, he thinks that instructors are already upset over the Sa Begang incident, and that losing this match and its donations could ruin his position. Hearing news of the next bout, he looks up sharply, realizing what is at stake. The announcement states that the upcoming match will feature Gok Bo-ok from Dragon Tiger Escort Agency. The memory jumps back to an earlier time when Gok suddenly barged into the office, startling the man in blue, and demanded to know who he was. Looking at a tournament list, Gok comments that the SPC, runts, are also participating. He reminds the official that he is the one responsible for deciding match pairings. Gok, panting from excitement, confirms this and pushes for what he wants. The man in blue scolds Gok Bo-ok for his insolent manner toward instructors, but Gok brushes that off as unimportant. Gok bluntly demands to be paired against a contestant named Dan Lijiang. The official snaps that Gok cannot simply alter the match table on a whim and orders him to stop talking nonsense. Gok slams his hand down with enough force to crack the desk. Looming over the official, Gok offers to have his clan send any amount of donations if the pairing is changed, insisting that he must fight Dan Lijiang. His expression shows burning hatred as he vows that he alone must crush that man. Returning to the present, the official, having conceded, mutters that he arranged the pairing as requested but warns Gok to be ready for the consequences. He watches the arena with tense eyes, anxious about how the altered match will affect him. The scene shifts to the arena where Dan Lijiang now faces Gok Bo-Kei, their match about to begin amidst swirling energy. An SPC instructor laughs in delight, clearly pleased with how the tournament is going so far. The announcer states that SPC currently leads the series 2 victories to 1 as Dan steadies his wooden sword. The commentary adds that this fight is a crisis for their opponents, and wonders how they will overcome it while Gok prepares his metal bracers. The referee declares the start of the 4th match. Dan stands ready, gripping his sword as the fight begins. He pants nervously, already feeling the pressure of facing Gok. Dan's mind conjures the ominous image of Gok's monstrous shadow from their previous devastating encounter, and he prepares to face it again. Flashbacks show Gok's brutal past assault, with Dan being overwhelmed by a flurry of powerful blows. Another flash shows Dan clutching his chest in agony as Gok's fist closes in to strike him. A final memory depicts Gok pressing his forehead against Dan's and berating him, cementing Dan's trauma. Back in the present, Dan forces himself to focus, swallowing his fear. He resolves to clear his mind of unnecessary thoughts, and simply do what he must in this fight. Raising his wooden sword, he begins gathering his inner energy in preparation for an all-out technique. Before he can execute it, Gok charges in and smashes through Dan's guard with a ferocious kick and punch combination. Gok unleashes a blazing martial art, channeling energy through his fists as he attacks relentlessly. One of his explosive strikes slams directly into Dan's torso, sending him flying and spilling blood. Dan's feet skid and dig furrows into the tiles as he struggles to stay standing. He staggers back, coughing in pain, while Gok remains poised and ready to continue. Dan raises his sword again despite trembling, refusing to give up. Gok mocks him, asking where he thinks he is looking as he tightens his bracers for more punishment. He stomps forward, demanding to know if Dan thinks he has become easy to defeat just because Dan once tagged him. Roaring that Dan still underestimates him, Gok charges with another raging attack. Dan responds but is battered by Gok's fiery energy, grunting as he barely withstands the blow. Realizing the lethal power behind Gok's enhanced strikes, Dan internally acknowledges how dangerous they are. Dan senses that Gok's current strength far surpasses what he had shown in their earlier practice bout. Dan's wide eyes show panic as he realizes the fight is slipping away from him. Gok gathers immense energy into a new, ominous stance, preparing his ultimate technique. The name of Gok's secret art, Dragon Tiger Mountain Splitting Fists, is revealed as he charges it. He launches a specific move called Crouching Dragon Rush, a powerful rushing punch aimed squarely at Dan. Dan is hit head-on by the roaring energy, crying out in agony as it explodes against him. The attack hurls him high into the air before slamming him back down with brutal force. Dan lies on the ground, coughing blood and writhing from the heavy damage. Gok's footsteps close in as Dan struggles on the floor, his wooden sword lying out of reach. Looming over him, Gok orders Dan to stand up, mocking him for thinking he was special after winning a mere practice match. Despite the pain, Dan forces himself back onto one knee, panting but determined not to stay down. Gok jeers that no matter how many times Dan is reborn, he will always remain beneath him. Dan, on the verge of collapse, questions inwardly if that cruel judgment is really the truth. Fragmented memories surface of comrades supporting and training with him. He recalls being helped to his feet and encouraged while watching matches together in the past. Another memory shows him meditating and cultivating energy with earnest focus. A further flashback depicts him drilling attacks against training dummies, pushing himself hard. Back in the present, Dan grips his sword and pants, the memories rekindling his resolve. Energy begins to flare around his weapon as he channels power into it. With renewed determination in his eyes, Dan asserts that he is no longer the weak person he was back then. Gok, irritated but excited, says he will remind Dan what kind of loser he really is and prepares to attack again. Dan slams his foot down, bracing himself for another clash. He intercepts Gok's rush with a powerful, energy-charged counterstrike. Both fighters close in, Dan swinging his glowing sword while Gok drives his fist forward, their attacks about to collide. The impact of their blows erupts in a blinding explosion of force. Dan's azure arc of energy carves into Gok's guard, striking him squarely in the chest. The shock shatters Gok's metal bracers into fragments that fly through the air. Dan presses his advantage, continuing his energized assault. More fragments break off as his power overwhelms Gok's defenses. Gok looks stunned and desperate as his supposedly sturdy bracers crumble away. Their watching classmates gasp and shout in disbelief at the sudden reversal. Soso and another SPC student stare wide-eyed, equally shocked by Dan's resurgence. Dan's eyes blaze green as he fully unleashes his inner energy through the sword. He tells himself with conviction that he can do this. He further insists that he can win, launching himself forward in a final, decisive charge. Dan's strike lands again, driving energy into Gok's body as they clash at close range. Gok retaliates with a heavy punch, refusing to yield. The force of Dan's counter leaves Gok crying out in pain as they trade brutal blows. Their footsteps skid across the tiles as they pass by each other in a high-speed exchange. Dan declares inwardly that this next blow will be his final attack as he dives in once more. Gok tries desperately to break through the incoming wave of blue energy with another punch. The rushing energy slices past Gok's side, leaving him grimacing in shock. A stark close-up emphasizes Dan's eye as his perception shifts, then everything begins to distort. Suddenly his body seizes, his hands losing strength mid-swing, and he reels in confusion. Dan realizes in horror that his inner energy has run dry at the worst possible moment. Gok's fist smashes across Dan's face as his guard collapses. Gok follows with a crushing blow to Dan's chest, blasting him upward and decisively ending the match. The scene fades, and the sound of a teapot in a quiet room hints at Dan regaining consciousness elsewhere. Steam rises from the teapot, emphasizing the calm, indoor setting. Dan jolts awake in bed, gasping as if still falling from the finishing blow. He groans and winces, clearly feeling the after-effects of his injuries. A vivid memory of Gok's final punch flashes through his mind. Dan bolts upright with a scream, shaken from the nightmare of his defeat. Panting heavily, he tries to catch his breath and orient himself. He stares at his trembling hands, overwhelmed by the memory of losing control. A calm voice asks if he is awake, revealing his instructor seated nearby, having watched over him. The instructor informs Dan that he lost that match by only a hair's breadth. Dan, embarrassed and troubled, addresses him hesitantly. He bows and apologizes earnestly, blaming the loss entirely on his own shortcomings. The instructor brushes it off, saying losses happen and reminding Dan that the overall contest is still ongoing with Yun Wookyung yet to fight. Then his tone changes as he notes there is something he has been wondering about. He asks his question, prompting Dan, who is startled, to listen closely. The instructor coolly states that Dan has not been cultivating his inner energy properly as instructed. Dan is shocked that his instructor saw through his negligence so easily. The instructor explains that he could tell from how little energy Dan was circulating during the fight. He adds that if Dan had followed the prescribed circulation training, his inner energy would not have run dry at that crucial final moment. A monochrome flashback shows exactly that moment in the fight when Dan's energy vanished and his body failed him. Gripping the bedding, Dan begins to ask if the instructor means that things could have turned out differently. The instructor confirms that with proper training the outcome of the match might well have been different. He then points out that Dan's true mistake was not trusting and following his guidance. Dan desperately protests that this was not due to distrust, trying to defend himself. As he chases after the instructor, the latter says it is alright and that the loss is not entirely Dan's fault. With a faint smile, the instructor turns away, suggesting there is more to the situation than simple blame. He admits that the real fault lies with him for failing to gain Dan's full trust as a teacher. Overwhelmed, Dan drops to his knees and apologizes again, deeply remorseful for letting his instructor down. The cadet reaches out and calls for his instructor. The instructor curtly orders the cadet to stop talking and focus on circulating his energy. He stresses yet again that rapid growth is only possible by following this method. During a past spar, he promised he would not merely watch but intervene if needed. Back in the present, the cadet looks down with a shocked, conflicted expression. He quietly calls to his instructor. Tears hit the floor as he denies his instructor's harsh teachings. The tears continue to fall in silence. Bowing on the floor, the cadet admits that he was the one in the wrong. Outside the room, the instructor stands pensively. He smiles darkly, pleased with the cadet's change of attitude. He recalls Mei Xiaolin saying things would turn out this way. Reflecting on Dan Lijiang's earlier match, he notes that even diligent cultivation offered no guaranteed victory. He remembers that Gok Bo-K's brutal fist style made it nearly impossible for Dan Lijiang to build energy while dodging. He pictures Dan Lijiang bravely attacking despite the odds. He shudders at what might have happened had Gok Bo-K's final blow actually landed. Concluding it worked out for the best, he thinks Dan Lijiang will now have to accept his guidance. With sinister delight, he vows to keep leading the boy step by step. An elder appears and asks why he is grinning like a fool. The elder scolds him again that such a grin looks bad. The instructor respectfully greets Elder Jean Beck and asks why he is at the medicine hall. Jean Beck replies that as a physician he belongs there, and wonders why the instructor is not watching the soon-to-start final match. The instructor scoffs at cheering for the arrogant cadet Yun Wookyung, remembering how the boy said he needed no support. Jean Beck rebukes him for insulting his own cadet, and reminds him that sending Yun to win the duel and enter the Heavenly Martial Tournament was his idea. The instructor strokes his chin, considering how to answer. He offers to share a secret. Jean Beck is startled and asks what secret he is suddenly talking about. Leaning close, the instructor begins to confess the truth about the duels. He reveals coldly that the duel outcomes themselves are meaningless. Jean Beck is stunned by this statement. Outside, the tournament grounds roar with excitement. Yun Wookyung stands on the field, panting from exertion. His opponent accuses him of madness as they square off again. Enraged, the opponent shouts whether Yun is unafraid of his clan's wrath. Facing him calmly with a wooden sword, Yun Wookyung prepares for battle. The narrative jumps to 8 minutes earlier as both fighters approach the arena. The announcer declares they have reached the final bout. He explains each side has 2 wins and 2 losses, so this match will decide the victor. He starts the duel, while the opponent curses Yun under his breath. The opponent narrows his eyes, fully focused on Yun. He recalls that over 10 years have passed since Lotus Sword Hall split from the destructive Sword Yun clan. During that decade, Lotus Sword Hall built its name by winning tournaments. They raised orthodox honor by cutting down countless unorthodox and criminal foes. Yet, despite that, resentment still burns within him. He sees that some still brag the destructive Sword Yun clan is the greatest under heaven. In his mind, that clan achieved nothing after the Great War, and is now a withered tiger. He views this tournament as further proof, blaming Yun's broken promise for forcing this selection match. Glaring at Yun, he brands him a despicable wretch. He vows that today will mark the end of the Yun clan's prestige. He announces to the crowd that he will prove the destructive Sword Yun clan is long obsolete. Green energy flares around his sword as he begins his display. Surrounded by that power, he claims Lotus Sword Hall has surpassed the Yun clan. He proclaims his own name, Li Bigium, while powering up further. Spectators gasp as Li Bigium unleashes his full strength from the outset. His anxious instructor urges him in thought, believing only Bigium can stand against Yun. Bigium charges Yun with a huge green charged strike. The attack hurtles toward Yun in a wide arc. Yun calmly gathers blue energy into his own sword. His grip tightens as the blue power surges. He releases a sweeping blue slash to meet the incoming attack. Yun emerges wreathed in blue aura, unfazed. The two clash at high speed, their bodies blurring. Their opposing forces collide explosively. Both fighters meet head-on, wooden swords crossed. Bigium swings again, attacking with another heavy strike. Yun wordlessly counters with his own precise slash. Their blows rain down, scattering shockwaves across the arena. Footwork pounds the cracked tiles as they reposition. Yun drives Bigium back through a flurry of exchanges. Spectators stare in disbelief, wondering if such a battle can really be between students. The duel continues at a ferocious pace, both unleashing advanced techniques. Yun channels a named form of the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword. He executes Twin Dragon Fang Severance against Bigium. Bigium realizes with shock what technique is being used. He braces and steps in to respond. Yun's blue slash whips past as Bigium flips desperately out of the way. Yun looks up, measuring his opponent in silence. Bigium dives back down with another powerful green-charged attack. His strike smashes into the ground, hurling debris everywhere. Amid the dust, Yun remains composed, partially visible. Bigium taunts Yun and asks if he has forgotten something. Yun recalls that no one else in the academy knows the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword as well as he does. He asserts that not even Bigium understands the technique better than he does. Yun admits that once he would have struggled against that same form. Now he notes aloud that his growth lets him handle that sword technique differently, startling Bigium. He lowers his wooden sword and prepares to adjust his approach. Gathering blue lightning around his blade, Yun wonders if his new understanding applies to other arts as well. Bigium, seeing Yun's stance, fears he may be switching to an entirely different sword art. Furious yet defiant, Bigium resolves to face Yun no matter how often he attacks. Yun answers with a brutal red-tinted strike that hammers into Bigium. For an instant Bigium hallucinates his own head being severed. The illusion snaps and he recoils in terror. Clutching his neck, he realizes something felt horribly real about that vision. Yun calmly presses a blue blade to his throat and repeats his question, demanding Bigium focus. He tells Bigium not to lose concentration because there is still much he wants to test. Enraged by being toyed with, Bigium hurls another sweeping attack while cursing Yun. Yun rushes in to meet him, hair streaming as he closes the distance. He slams a blue charge thrust into Bigium's guard, staggering him. Bigium reels, beginning to realize what Yun is doing. He panics, sensing from Yun's stance and rhythm that the form has been twisted into something new. Screaming Yun's name, he suspects the impossible. He recognizes that Yun has actually altered the foundational forms of the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword. Yun confirms this with a confident smile. From the stands, the instructor exults that Yun is doing exactly what he hoped. He recalls how Yun's duel with Dan Lijiang first sparked this evolution. He remembers telling Yun that the Supreme Dragon Heaven-Severing Sword was not invincible, trusting the boy would grasp the implication. He believes Yun realized that no martial art is flawless or truly unbeatable. Yet, he thinks, in Yun's hands something greater can be forged. He concludes that the only sword technique truly suited to Yun is one Yun recreates himself. He admits Yun's altered form is still unstable and riddled with openings compared to the famed original. Right now, however, Bigium is too shocked to exploit those flaws. The instructor accepts this imperfection, confident of what it will become. He is sure that the martial art Yun rebuilds will eventually surpass the original. Bigium grinds his teeth and curses Yun in frustration. He rages that Yun must be insane to defy his noble clan by changing their ancestral art. He accuses Yun of disrespecting generations of tradition by modifying it in front of everyone. Yun says nothing, merely returning to his new stance. Bigium charges again, shouting insults as he attacks. He demands to know if Yun feels no fear of his clan's wrath as he unleashes a flurry of strikes. They clash once more, steel and wood meeting in a thunderous blow. Yun replies that such matters are not for an outsider like Bigium to worry about. Bigium screams Yun's name and throws himself into another desperate assault. A bright flash of blue light erupts from their collision. Yun's overwhelming slash tears across the field, splitting the arena between them. The impact explodes near Bigium, blasting him backward. Yun resolves to shoulder whatever consequences come from his choice. He inwardly asks that others refrain from interfering with his path. Bigium crashes to the ground, defeated as his weapon flies away. The announcer declares that the match has ended. He announces in shock that SPC's Yun Wookyung is the winner. He adds that SPC's class wins overall by a score of 3-2. Spectators voice their disbelief that SPC actually won. Yun's classmates leap and laugh in joyous celebration. From a distance, the instructor watches his students rejoice and banter. He decides to let them simply enjoy this victory for the moment. He reflects grimly that, considering what lies ahead, this might be their happiest memory. Yun himself thinks that only one task remains now. He calls out to senior instructor Sa Begang from below the platform. The acting head of Dragon Spring Academy invites Sa Begang, as SPC's representative instructor, to step onto the stage. Sa Begang smiles faintly in response. He climbs the steps toward the platform. Standing before the academy elders, he waits for their words. The acting head praises Sa Begang for his excellent work. Sa Begang looks up calmly, accepting the compliment. The acting head notes that few expected SPC to win, yet Sa Begang and his students proved themselves before everyone. He formally declares SPC to be the Academy's representative team for the Heavenly Martial Tournament. When another elder begins to object, the acting head cuts him off, saying the decision was settled a week ago. He then personally congratulates Sa Begang, remarking that events unfolded just as the instructor desired. Sa Begang thanks him and asks leave to prepare for the upcoming tournament. The acting head grins sharply and denies the request with a single cold word. A terrifying impact strikes the training ground, sending debris flying and students screaming. A bearded instructor launches himself high into the air toward another calm-looking instructor below. He thrusts out his hand, gathering a powerful surge of energy. Suspended above the courtyard, he unleashes waves of force as onlookers watch. Grinning, he draws his ornate sword midair. He crashes down in front of the other instructor, shattering the tiles. The younger instructor coolly announces that the next bout will now begin. The bearded man declares this duel will decide who leads their team to the Heavenly Martial Tournament. Shocked spectators realize there is yet another unexpected match to be fought. A female instructor stares in disbelief at this new development. An elder official, sweating, demands to know what is going on now. The younger instructor sighs and notes that this must have been the bearded man's plan from the start. The bearded master bursts into hearty laughter, saying this confirms his good judgment about the younger man. He explains that a strange rumor has been circulating through the academy. The rumor claims the formerly weak assistant instructor suddenly had a miraculous encounter and became monstrously strong. It is said that only 2 days later that same man passed the senior instructor promotion exam. The bearded man initially dismissed the story as just another baseless rumor. He now nervously asks what exactly the younger instructor knows. Narration reveals that in front of him stands the most baffling martial artist he has ever met, outwardly ordinary yet harboring an unknown energy. At that moment he decided he absolutely had to cross swords with this enigmatic instructor. The younger man, expecting this outcome, inwardly laments that matters have escalated this far. The narrative introduces the bearded man as Dark Shadow Divine Sword Sang Pilji, a supreme peak realm master of Dragon Spring Academy and one of the Orthodox Alliance's 10 great martial masters. After the previous academy head mysteriously vanished, Sang Pilji took over as acting head. However, he is notorious for being a battle maniac who only feels joy when facing powerful opponents. The narrator says Sang Pilji usually ignores academy politics, caring only for training, so they never paid much attention to him. The younger instructor reflects that he never imagined Sang Pilji could sense his mana, realizing this is the perception of a supreme peak realm master, and asking if he can refuse the duel. Sang Pilji reminds him of his own words that a martial artist's qualifications are determined solely by their martial arts. He says refusal is fine, but then he will personally lead the team to the Heavenly Martial Tournament, taking away the students the younger man has painstakingly raised. Hearing this, the younger instructor decides he has no choice but to accept. Another instructor rushes in, calling out to instructor Dung Buyung in alarm. Dung Buyung, panicked, asks instructor Sa Begang what is happening. Sa Begang cheerfully asks Dung Buyung if he remembers the promise he made earlier. He repeats more clearly that Dung Buyung should recall the promise he agreed to back then. Dung Buyung, sweating buckets, pretends not to remember any such promise. A close-up shows his growing dread as he realizes what Sa Begang means. Sa Begang recalls the earlier wager where the loser must grant the winner a request without being allowed to refuse. Dung Buyung stammers, realizing Sa Begang intends to collect on that promise right now. Sa Begang casts a spell called Trice, conjuring glowing magic circles around his hand as he invokes the promise. His magic grasps Dung Buyung's sword, infusing it with purple energy and pulling it from its owner. With magical power crackling around his hand, Sa Begang smugly declares that the sword now belongs to him. Dung Buyung watches in horror as his treasured weapon floats away from his reach. Sa Begang firmly seizes the glowing blade, completing his theft. Students gape upward in amazement and fear, asking what that mysterious phenomenon is. Observers identify the technique as phantom grasp or sword control art as Dung Buyung flails in midair, still clinging to his sword. Dung Buyung screams that Sa Begang is a robber, and vows never to accept losing his sword. He furiously attacks, lamenting how hard he worked to obtain the weapon while Sa Begang casually repels him using the sword's stolen power. Sa Begang sighs that without this particular sword the coming spar would be far less interesting. Addressing Sang Pilji, he asks what the acting academy master intends to do now that he has taken Dung Byung's blade. Dung Byung, terrified, tries to appeal to the academy master for help. Sang Pilji coldly warns Dung Byung that if he does not release the sword immediately, he will cut him down himself. Frightened, Dung Byung finally lets go as the sword snaps free from his hand. He crashes painfully to the ground amid broken furniture and tiles. Sa Begang tests the sword's balance with a powerful swing, channeling purple mana through it. Smiling, he confirms that the sword is as splendid as he hoped. He tells Dung Byung he will make good use of the weapon while Dung Byung trembles in rage and humiliation. Dung Byung breaks down crying, vowing never to forgive Sa Begang for stealing his beloved sword. With the matter settled, Sang Pilji and Sa Begang face each other on the platform, swords drawn, as spectators look on. Sang Pilji, eager, asks if he may finally begin the true match. Sa Begang stops him, saying there is something he wants to clarify before they fight. He explains he has a question about Sang Pilji's motives before they exchange blows. Sa Begang wonders aloud why Sang Pilji went to such trouble to arrange this formal duel when, as acting master, he could have challenged him in simpler ways. He notes that someone of Sang Pilji's status has much more to lose than he does and suspects Sang Pilji must be certain he cannot lose. Sa Begang asks if Sang Pilji is so confident of victory that he disregards any consequences. Sang Pilji bursts into laughter, amused by the misunderstanding. He says he is neither humble nor that arrogant and insists there is a good reason for his actions. He explains that if he had simply forced a fight, Sa Begang would have surrendered early, so he needed to give him a reason to go all out. He adds that challenging Sa Begang this way is also his own form of sincerity. A flashback shows Sang Pilji learning Sa Begang wants to represent the academy at the Heavenly Martial Tournament. Sa Begang had stated that he personally wants to choose which cadets will participate. Sang Pilji concluded that the tournament is clearly Sa Begang's goal, so controlling who leads the team is the key. He tells Sa Begang that even if it is troublesome, he wants to fight him at full strength no matter what. Sa Begang, aura flaring, remarks that he has been caught by a very persistent man and prepares to fight seriously. With a dangerous smile, he warns Sang Pilji that fighting him might actually be lethal. Sang Pilji replies that such risk is exactly what he desires most. Sa Begang answers that he will grant that wish, beginning to unleash more of his magic. He activates a spell called Phantom Blade, surrounding himself with numerous floating purple swords. He charges forward, blades streaking through the air towards Sang Pilji. A torrent of sword light rushes at Sang Pilji, filling the courtyard with deadly purple energy. Instead of fear, Sang Pilji grins widely as the attack closes in. He counters with a massive blue sword arc, smashing through the phantom blades. Watching the shattered energy, he marvels that Sa Begang's conjured swords each possess real sword chi. However, he says that amount of power alone is still insufficient as his own sword begins to glow with icy blue energy. Sang Pilji unleashes a technique called Freezing Wave, encasing his legs and the ground around him in jagged ice. He laughs appreciatively, calling Sa Begang talented for now displaying ice-type arts. His expression then turns serious as he gauges the true threat in front of him. Students watching from afar curse in awe at the overwhelming spectacle. Another onlooker wonders if what they are seeing can even be called ordinary martial arts. Flames suddenly roar, signaling Sa Begang shifting to a fire-based spell. He casts Fireball, forming an enormous blazing sphere above Sang Pilji. Sa Begang admits he wanted to avoid using magic openly before martial artists but sees no choice now. He reflects that Sang Pilji is the most overpowering master he has faced since regressing in time, and cannot be defeated while Sa Begang hides his strength. The gigantic fireball plummets towards Sang Pilji, threatening to engulf him. Instead of retreating, Sang Pilji laughs ecstatically, calling Sa Begang's power truly amazing. The fireball slams into the arena, exploding with a blast that shakes the entire academy and panics the crowd. Sa Begang then channels mana directly into his sword, invoking a technique called Mana Blade. Purple energy coats his weapon as he prepares for close-quarters combat. He notes that even this escalation is a consequence of his time regression. Resolved, he charges in, vowing to finish the fight as quickly as possible. A massive fiery explosion fills the courtyard with smoke and debris as the two clash. Sa Begang emerges from the dust mid-leap, purple eyes glowing, poised to strike. His blade meets Sang Pilji's in a fierce collision that shocks him with the other man's strength. Sang Pilji laughs again, delighted by the intensity of the exchange. He declares the battle far from over and that he intends to savor much more of it. Repeating this sentiment, he raises his sword overhead, ready for another onslaught. His next strike descends like a cleaving beam of light towards Sa Begang's head. Sa Begang avoids a fatal blow using an illusion spell that leaves behind a phantom image being cut. He immediately follows with Blink, teleporting beside Sang Pilji to attempt a surprise counterattack. Even so, Sa Begang is startled by Sang Pilji's relentless speed and pressure. Sang Pilji easily intercepts his attack and asks why Sa Begang looks so surprised. Wreathed in blue aura, Sang Pilji promises that what Sa Begang has seen is only the beginning. He sends out another giant wave of sword chi, forcing Sa Begang to defend desperately. Sa Begang clicks his tongue at the pressure and hastily forms several magic circles to protect himself. He activates Overdrive, casting strength enhancement magic on his body. Additional spells boost his concentration, speed, and durability, surrounding him with layered enhancements. Sang Pilji dives back in with ferocious sword swings, fully enjoying the duel. Sa Begang meets him blade for blade, refusing to back down. Their swords clash repeatedly as Sa Begang tries to keep up using his enchanted weapon. The furious exchange continues, with Sang Pilji clearly pressing the advantage. Blue and purple sword auras collide as Sang Pilji hammers at Sa Begang's guard. Ecstatic, Sang Pilji exclaims that this is exactly the kind of battle he has been waiting for. Sa Begang strains under the pressure, thinking that even with all his buffs, direct clashes are too risky. He switches tactics, summoning astral chains from above to bind Sang Pilji. Sang Pilji's eyes widen as the glowing chains descend around him. Sa Begang inwardly admits he had not wanted to reveal this technique in front of so many witnesses. A flashback shows the same chains once restraining a terrifying bandaged warrior. The memory continues, showing Sa Begang calmly facing that bound monster as he stole its power. Sa Begang now reasons that no matter how mighty a martial master is, once his inner energy is stolen he becomes helpless. But Sang Pilji smashes the chains apart with a powerful upward slash. He stands amidst the shattered links, proving his strength can even break Sa Begang's draining spell. Sa Begang stares in shock at this unexpected resistance. In a blur, Sang Pilji appears behind him, sword imbued with blue energy, ready to finish the exchange. Sa Begang hastily throws up a barrier spell as Sang Pilji's attack closes in. The blue sword she slams into the hexagonal shield, blasting Sa Begang across the arena. He screams in pain as the impact smashes through his defenses and hurls him through the air. Dust and shockwaves roll over the spectators, leaving them stunned by the sheer force displayed. An elder cries out Begang's name in alarm, fearing for his safety. The woman in pink curses Sa Begang as an idiot for accepting such a reckless duel. She reflects that he should never have agreed from the start because his opponent is one of the Orthodox Alliance's top 10 masters and a notorious battle fanatic. She acknowledges Sa Begang has strange abilities but insists even he has limits. Frustrated and worried, she demands to know what on earth Sa Begang is thinking. A sword point suddenly slams into the ground as the shockwaves begin to subside. Sa Begang reappears, battered and gasping for breath, barely keeping himself upright with his sword. Sang Pilji approaches confidently, saying he has now seen all of Sa Begang's various tricks. Surrounded by blue aura, he warns Sa Begang not to tell him that what he has shown so far is everything he has. He adds that if that truly was all, then the fight would already be decided. Sa Begang mutters that some people never change, criticizing Sang Pilji's incorrigible battle habits. Smirking, Sa Begang prepares himself, clearly not yet ready to yield. Sang Pilji remarks that after being demoted once for brawling he still could not restrain himself, and now has picked another fight beyond his station. Observing from afar, another official calls Sang Pilji a lunatic and wonders if he really has a death wish. The narration reiterates Sang Pilji's title, Dark Shadow Divine Sword, underscoring the terrifying opponent Sa Begang is facing. 5 years ago that ferocious man served as leader of the Orthodox Alliance combat unit, and already possessed remarkable martial skill. His flaw was a reckless, savage temperament that drove him to charge into duels against powerful masters without hesitation. His behavior caused frequent trouble in the Alliance, so he was demoted to an instructor's post at Dragon Spring Academy. When Unjiryung, one of the Orthodox sect's great masters and then head of Dragon Spring Academy, accepted his challenge, he crushed him, after which the troublemaker stayed relatively quiet. But since Unjiryung mysteriously disappeared 2 years ago, no one has been able to rein him in. A nervous instructor recalls that all veteran staff know a certain taboo topic about this man. He warns that mentioning that taboo in front of the instructor is absolutely forbidden. Facing the protagonist, the instructor sneers that his words are mere provocation. He draws a blazing sword, praising the boy's courage but threatening to make him pay if his claim is empty. The protagonist laughs and asks if he is really being called a kid. Annoyed, the protagonist complains that it is irritating to be looked down on just for being at the Supreme Peak realm. He grips the strange sword-like device and agrees to show the instructor what he is truly capable of. Activating the weapon, he tells the instructor not to blame him if he dies, as the man has brought this on himself. A gigantic pillar of violet energy erupts around him, leaving the instructor aghast at the sight. The protagonist explains that this world has an energy called inner energy. He adds that beings of the demon realm use a different power, mana, which is the source of demons. Inner energy and mana are fundamentally different, immaterial powers that violently reject each other if combined. He reveals that due to his innate constitution he alone possesses both inner energy and mana in one body, though that constitution once prevented proper use of his inner energy. He then poses a rhetorical question based on that unique situation. He asks what happens if one uses mana to forcibly stimulate dormant inner energy within the body. He further asks what would occur if that inner energy were then forcibly fused with mana amplified to its utmost. Unlike Yongjaryang, who cautiously blends them, he forces the two hostile energies together at extreme levels to collide. He concludes that this process yields a terrifying result, which stuns the instructor watching. This, he says, explains how a man who once could not reach first-rate martial status in Murim, by creating and using the technique Extreme Mana Fusion, he rose far beyond that limitation. That same method later allowed him to become a legion commander in the demon realm. Now he gathers that power again and tells the instructor to withstand his strike if he can. The instructor first laughs boisterously at the situation, but he then shouts in disbelief at the wild, overwhelming energy now raging from the protagonist. From afar, others see the sky-splitting column of fused energy and shout at Sa Begang, asking if he is at last fighting seriously. The cadets nearby panic and flee in terror from the impending blast. The other instructor trembles in horror, unable to believe what he is witnessing. He realizes that the supposed heaven-sent opportunity Sa Begang claimed to have received is actually real. Sa Begang roars with excitement, unleashing his own raging inner energy to meet the attack. The protagonist, wrapped in violent mana, urges instructor Sa Begang to come at him with everything he has. Sa Begang thinks to himself that he no longer cares about restraining anything. The protagonist's back erupts with complex magic circles as he raises the weapon overhead. He slams the fused energy down, creating a massive column that shatters the courtyard. His face twists with intensity as he pours everything into the attack. The technique Extreme Mana Fusion devastates the surroundings, hurling debris everywhere. He follows with the first technique of this style, leaping down towards Sa Begang. He names the finishing move Sun Cleaver as he brings the beam-like sword down. From above, the assembled instructors and cadets watch the two figures clash beneath enormous violet wings of energy. A piercing beam of fused energy shoots straight at Sa Begang, linking the two combatants. Sa Begang strains desperately to block the blow with his sword. The unimaginable force slices through and breaks his blade. The beam slams into the ground behind him, continuing to annihilate structures in its path. Shockwaves rip through the viewing stands, knocking spectators back as they scream. The pavilion master grimaces and shields himself from the blast. A long scar of destruction cuts through the academy and collapses a whole section of buildings. Elsewhere, a woman shielding her eyes notices the aftermath and reacts in surprise. She stares wide-eyed and speechless at the devastation she sees. In the ruined courtyard, the exhausted protagonist stands panting, his clothes shredded. He concludes that his attempt at Extreme Mana Fusion ultimately failed. Examining his trembling hand, he reasons that he ran short of mana and that his body could not completely withstand the rampaging energies. More importantly, he realizes there was another key failure. His sword could not endure the force and has been ruined. He recalls the vendor who had boasted about the sword's quality and curses the shoddy weapon. Still, he remarks that in the end it worked out in his favor. Sa Begang, badly injured but alive, says the important thing is that the protagonist survived and the fight is finished. Sa Begang clenches his jaw and remains silent, weighing his thoughts. The protagonist throws away the ruined sword and suggests that if they still wish to continue, they could always settle things with their fists. He looks confused when Sa Begang suddenly grows serious. Sa Begang, now solemn, studies the protagonist and the shattered sword in his hands. He says he heard the protagonist was born unable to use inner energy but later gained it through a heaven-sent opportunity. The protagonist casually admits that is more or less true. Sa Begang then asks about the sword energy just displayed. He wants to know if that terrifying energy was something the protagonist himself created. The protagonist admits that it was. Accepting the answer, Sa Begang murmurs that he understands. He then tosses his own intact sword to the ground in front of the protagonist. Crossing his arms, he loudly calls everyone's attention. He formally announces, as acting Academy Master, that this duel was meant to decide who would lead the Academy's team for the Heavenly Martial Tournament. Fixing his gaze on the protagonist, he prepares to make his declaration. He publicly proclaims Instructor Sa Begang to be the victor of the match. Addressing the cadets, he urges them to achieve great results at the Heavenly Martial Tournament and bring honor to Dragon Spring Academy. He ends the announcement, and the crowd begins dispersing around the devastated courtyard. The cadets excitedly confirm that Sa Begang, formerly regarded as a weak assistant instructor, has actually won. The sword vendor despairs as he realizes his treasured weapon has been utterly destroyed. The protagonist watches silently, thinking. He warns Sa Begang not to go back on his word later. As his cadets rush over joyfully calling his name, Sa Begang sees how much they care for him. He silently reflects on what he has learned about Sa Begang's power. Remembering his question, he replays Sa Begang's answer that he indeed created that energy himself. He recalls the image of Sa Begang brandishing that single overwhelming strike filled with unimaginable power. Sa Begang thinks that if the sword had endured, the entire area would have been turned to scorched earth, killing everyone present. He realizes that not even Sa Begang himself could have survived that full force. He understands that such sword energy was intended not for human opponents, but for something far beyond human comprehension. He concludes it is a sword meant to confront a transcendent, monstrous existence. Turning away, he marvels that Sa Begang personally devised such an outrageous sword energy. He wonders what on earth Sa Begang is preparing to face with that power. That night, near the city, strange insect-like appendages sense the lingering mana from afar. A demonic spider creature identifies an unknown mana fluctuation. It analyzes the mana pattern but cannot match it to any known source. Perched on a corpse-like host, it decides this anomaly must be reported to its legion. The possessed corpse starts to move, repeating the instruction to report. Stumbling through the forest, the host continues muttering about reporting to the legion. Its silhouette disappears down the forest path, still parroting the order. The night forest falls quiet again after the creature leaves. Over the academy city, a red moon hangs ominously, casting a strange light. Later, the pavilion master explodes at Sa Begang over the ruined medical supplies and bandages. While treating Sa Begang's injuries, he scolds him for being recklessly self-destructive, though Sa Begang insists it was unavoidable. The pavilion master sighs that some unorthodox martial arts harm their own practitioners, yet what Sa Begang did seems far worse. Examining the ravaged arms, he says this damage is on a completely different level from ordinary dangerous techniques. He falls silent, troubled by what he has seen. He privately reflects that even in a moment, that technique was a disaster unlike any martial art he has ever heard of. He starts to ask where Sa Begang could have learned such a thing. Sa Begang interrupts, saying he does not want to lie to the pavilion master, and asks him not to inquire further. The pavilion master clenches the bloody bandages, holding back his questions. He agrees reluctantly and resumes the treatment. Sa Begang watches him leave with a thoughtful expression. As he departs, the pavilion master reminds Sa Begang he will soon be busy leading the Heavenly Martial Tournament team. He tells Sa Begang to rest and recover for the time being. Sa Begang wordlessly acknowledges the advice. Clenching his bandaged fists, he notes that at least the incident ended without turning into a complete catastrophe. He resolves to move on to his next step. Just then, loud throat clearing comes from outside his room. Hearing a familiar voice asking if Instructor Sa Begang is inside, he turns in surprise. It is Department Head Cheon Semyong, who has come personally. Sa Begang is amused that such a man politely asked permission to enter his room. He thinks this is typical behavior now that Cheon Semyong has seen his true martial might. Cheon Semyong has indeed confirmed with his own eyes what he had only suspected about Sa Begang's strength. Sa Begang tells him to come in, allowing the visit. Cheon Semyong enters and is stunned by Sa Begang's relaxed posture. Sa Begang greets him casually, joking about the department head seeking him out in person. He then bluntly asks what business brought Cheon Semyong here, which irritates the man. Cheon Semyong restrains his anger and instead offers formal congratulations on Sa Begang's victory in the spar. He adds that there is, however, a problem concerning the Heavenly Martial Tournament. He dramatically smashes a pillar while shouting that an issue has arisen, shocking Sa Begang. Sa Begang's eyes narrow sharply at this development. Power flaring, he demands to know what Cheon Semyong is trying to pull now. He warns that if the man intends to obstruct him, he will not tolerate it, prompting Cheon Semyong to hastily deny any such intention. Cheon Semyong, sweating, blurts out that the issue concerns exactly one person. He explains that they are short one cadet for the tournament lineup. Sa Begang confirms by asking if the minimum team size for the Heavenly Martial Tournament is 6 people. Cheon Semyong admits that while 10 including reserves is normal, 6 is the required minimum. He notes that Sa Begang's team also currently has only 5 members. Sa Begang replies that finding another cadet will not be difficult, already thinking of candidates. With a sly smile he says the shortage is no real problem. He declares that if he must add one more person, there is only one cadet suitable for that spot. A week later, the academy prepares as the tournament departure day approaches. As they walk down the steps, a cadet marvels that they really are leaving for the event. Jo Muntak and Yom Jaryang are introduced as members of Sa Begang's selected team. They talk excitedly about joining the Heavenly Martial Tournament, though one notes the journey itself will be dangerous. They recall that it takes a full month to reach White Martial Academy, and that simply arriving safely is considered part of the challenge. Jokingly, Yom Jaryang says that if they run into the Green Forest bandits, they can just beat them up, while Muntak worries about everyone's injuries. As they speak, another figure waits leaning against a nearby tree. This quiet cadet is identified as Yun Wookyung. He glances over with a cool, unreadable gaze. One of the other cadets reacts in surprise upon noticing him. SPC Dan Liejung stands nervously while another student watches him silently from a distance. Liejung walks gloomily toward the building, radiating dread that another student notices. SPC Nung Soso wonders to herself why Liejung is acting so strangely, even jokingly guessing he needs the toilet. The gathered students in front of the main hall ask when the person they are waiting for will arrive. A man steps out of the hall and asks if everyone has assembled. Their boastful instructor arrives, saying they must have been too excited to sleep because thanks to him, they can attend the Heavenly Martial Tournament. While one student mutters that none of them really wanted to go, the instructor ignores it and announces he has important news before departure. He says he will introduce a newcomer who will be joining them on the trip. Soso and Liejung react with surprised curiosity to the mention of a newcomer. The instructor presents Mok Danhwa of the Flying Dragon class as an additional participant to fill the team quota. Some students tease that the person who once beat up one of them is now coming along, while others happily welcome Danhwa. Danhwa looks over with a slightly blushing, intent gaze. The quiet student by the tree reacts with puzzled curiosity to Danhwa. Danhwa shyly averts her eyes, saying nothing but seeming thoughtful. When asked if the inspector is coming too, the woman in pink replies that she will also go in order to watch over everyone and not leave them to the odd instructor. She then reminds the instructor Sa Bigan not to forget the promise he made to her. In a flashback, she had vowed to help him achieve revenge if he would stay by her side, and now she suspects he might have only said yes to escape that moment. She internally resolves that if his past words were insincere, she will make him pay for it. The instructor enthusiastically urges everyone to set off. The large front gates swing open for the group to depart. As they march out, the students complain about the journey while the instructor proclaims that their adventure is beginning. Some companions comment that his dramatic line sounds like a bad omen and admit they already feel uneasy. Another member tries to stay optimistic, saying things will probably work out as they continue down the forest path. The scene shifts to a wide view announcing their martial arts training journey to the Heavenly Martial Tournament.